So hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Yamato trained Naruto for wood style. Part 1. If you guys enjoy this, what if? And you want to see part 2. Comment down below. And let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And also share this video with your friends. And check out the description. And check out my playlist. So let's start the video. Chapter 1. How it all began. The council chamber of Konohagakure sometimes tended to be noisy, but today its occupants were really outdoing themselves. Sarutobi refrained from banging his head on the oaken table and for what felt like the 100th day today asked himself, why did he ever take this job? There must have been some reason, but it currently eluded him. I say, this cannot be left as it is, shrieked one councilwoman or other, thus roughly waking the elderly Hokage from his introspection. He sighed in exasperation, quietly, so nobody would notice, and turned his attention to the bickering bunch of self-important diplomat wannabes that made up most of the council of Konoha. Can you please speak one at a time, he addressed them quietly. Somehow they still heard him and turned their heads to him. But it never occurred to them to tone down the racket. Quite the contrary, now they seemed to have their leader's attention, they tried to present their respective opinions at the same moment. Naturally, none of them could be heard clearly enough to understand. Not that Sarutobi needed to hear their words to know what it was about. The tone of their speech had been enough of a giveaway. Silence, he snapped at them. Can you not behave like dignified officials? The rebuke made them back off slightly, but they were quickly gathering courage for another attack. As I was saying, Hokage-sama. Began a bolder one. I said silence, repeated Sarutobi in a more forceful tone. No matter how upset you are with the issue at hand, we have to discuss it calmly like civilized people, not shout at each other like a bunch of unruly schoolchildren. Understood. Nobody spoke, so the Hokage took it as a yes. Well then. Now if you please, I think Kaharu had the last word. Thank you, Hokage-sama. His old teammate rose to her feet. Before I had been so rudely interrupted, she shot a pointed glare at the offender. I was pointing out possible implications of today's incident. Sarutobi somehow managed to keep the frown from appearing on his wrinkled face. That incident. What kami did he piss off that it had happened before he could find another successor and bully him into taking the hat? As he kept one ear on Kaharu's rant, he couldn't quite call it speech, his thoughts turned to what had occurred just this morning. Early morning. Chilly winds were enthusiastically chazzing around dried brown leaves. Autumn had once again come to Konoha and turned the forest, hiding the village cheerful shades of yellows and reds. One little boy was sitting on a low branch, enjoying the contrast of the bright colors of the leaves against a gray-blue cloudy sky, while trying in vain to forget the cold. His frayed white t-shirt was doing an insufficient job of keeping out. Blue eyes scanned the village below. From his position near the top of the Hokage monument, it seemed so small, like it was built entirely of dollhouses, and its inhabitants resembled ants. He loved this view. He couldn't see their eyes from here. And they couldn't see him. Only a handful of people were out and going about their business since the sun had just risen. Soon the streets will fill with the usual hustle and bustle of life, but so far only few merchants preparing for the day and shinobi going about their morning training routines could be seen. Hey, brat. Oh, let's not forget the last couple of yesterday's drunkards who had yet to stumble into their homes. The boy startled and almost fell off his sitting place, but then quickly flattened himself against the tree trunk. Wide eyes quickly darted left and right from under messy yellow bangs. For a moment he hoped that the two clearly inebriated men were speaking to someone else, but that hope was immediately squashed as the pair unsteadily approached him. He quickly went through his options. There weren't many of them. Jump down and run. Though his branch was one of the lowest in the tree, it still was high enough for him to injure himself upon landing. Climb down slowly. It didn't seem possible to make it in time, the men were already too close. Stay where he was and hope they just came to wish him good morning. That didn't sound too likely. Especially when he took into consideration the expressions on their faces. He had seen such before and he got the chills every time he recalled those occasions. He took the only remaining option. He started climbing upwards, small hands and feet finding enough purchase on the rough bark, trying desperately to get lost among the still thick leaves. Don't run, we just want to play, shouted one of the drunkards. Like I believe you thought, Naruto. He had more than enough experiences with their kind. He didn't even look down, concentrating instead on his escape. Hey, what are you doing, are you a fox or a squirrel? He certainly wished he could turn into one. Come down, or we'll come for you, added his companion, a bulky man with dirty receding hair. He was treated to exactly the same response. Don't you make us angry or else, threatened the first one, tall and lanky. By that time the boy disappeared among the branches. But then Naruto stepped on a thin branch, shaking it, so an old bird's nest fell off and landed between the pair. "Okay, demon, you asked for it," proclaimed the other one and started for the trunk. "You shouldn't make fun of your betters." Naruto sped up his frantic ascent. When people started calling him that, it always meant bad news. He didn't exactly know why people insisted on treating him the way they did, but after being called a nine-tailed brat for about 100 times he was beginning to get a vague idea. Despite what many people claimed, he wasn't a complete moron. Now if he could just figure out what exactly had he to do with the fearsome demon, but he had nobody to ask. And the old man with the funny hat refused to answer him, always changing the subject instead. The bulky man attempted to climb, but the level of alcohol in his bloodstream prevented him from succeeding. He picked himself from the ground, rubbing his sore backside. "Now you've done it, you beast," he snarled. He took a few steps back and then ran towards the tree, slamming into the trunk. The branch Naruto was just reaching for shook and he lost his hold. He tried to grab it again, but he lost his balance and started plummeting towards the ground. He tried to get hold of another one, but only hurt his fingers. The ground was approaching fast, and he had no means to stop his fall. He closed his eyes. He hit something hard. It hurt like he just broke his ribs, but he didn't hear anything snap. Just be thankful for small mercies, he thought before ricocheting off whatever he hit and landing on the ground. He rolled a few times in the grass before coming to a stop. He opened his eyes warily. "You bastard." If they were angry before, now they sounded furious. "You hit Menma." "Ah, so that's what almost cracked his ribs." The fat man, who was apparently named Menma, was lying on the ground moaning and clutching his head, while the taller one was slowly making his way towards the downed boy. Naruto didn't wait for anything, shakily climbed to his legs, all the while biting his lips to prevent himself from crying out in pain, and started off as fast as his wobbly short legs could carry him. He was quite fast for his age, a lot of practice tends to have that effect, but unfortunately it wasn't fast enough. Rage seemed to have sobered up his pursuer, and he quickly caught up with him. Naruto felt a hand roughly grab him by his neck and lift him off his feet. He kicked wildly in panic. He felt his heel connect with something soft. "Ooh-oh." The hand holding him let go. He resumed running upon touching the ground. "You'll pay for this," promised his attacker. Naruto just ran. Just like the last time, he didn't get far. Soon the hands were back grabbing him, and this time his captor was wary of his frantically kicking feet. "So, what are we going to do first, Menma?" he asked his companion, who had finally regained his bearings. Started the fat man thoughtfully rubbing his chin. "I say we hit him on the head, so he knows what it is like when a stupid little demon runt jumps on yours." "Don't be stupid," chided the other one. "You'll just knock him out and what would be the fun of this?" "You're right, Kaji. We definitely cannot have that. So we just have to hit him somewhere else." "Now that's what I call an idea," grinned Menma evilly. "So, Runt, you heard us. What say you, where should I hit first?" Naruto didn't bother to answer. The man didn't sound interested in his opinion anyway. No suggestions. Pity. "So let's just start. Here." Naruto barely registered the last word because pain just exploded in his already bruised ribs and his breath left him in a silent scream. "Why so quiet?" asked Menma while Naruto was desperately forcing his lungs to start working again. "I think we just have to teach this little bird to sing." He punched Naruto again. A small sigh was all that passed the boy's lips. "Not good enough," commented Kaji. "We'll have to continue the lesson." Two fists at once impacted on Naruto's ribsage. They robbed him of his breath just when he finally found it again. "It seems this one requires a lot of tutoring." "Yeah, he is pretty slow." All the while blows rained on their helpless little victim. He stopped struggling after a while, they held him securely. They eventually stopped. By the time Naruto felt like his whole body turned black and blue. "So, little bird, how about singing now?" asked Kaji. Naruto just hung limply in his grip. "Answer," he commanded and grabbed the boy's chin, forcing him to face him. Something snapped inside Naruto and he bit into his captor's palm. Hard. His mouth filled with a salty taste of blood as his elongated canines broke Kaji's skin. "He bit me," said the man like he couldn't believe what just happened. "That fucking little shit just bit me." Naruto cringed. He knew that now he was really in for it. He expected another punch, but instead the man just leaned closer to him. "So the little bird can peck, but singing isn't his forte. I wonder how good he is at flying." The proclamation was accompanied with such a sinister smile that it nearly made Naruto's blood freeze. The occasional thrashings he could handle, he always recovered fast, but this went far beyond anything that had happened before. "Let's try it out then," suggested Menma. They started walking leisurely towards the edge of the cliff. Naruto was panicking. He began thrashing left and right, ignoring the pain in his abused little body, hands and feet lashing in every direction, but the rough hands held him fast. In front of him the panorama of Konohagakure no Sato was slowly revealing itself. Even now he couldn't help but admire its serene beauty. It occurred to him that he should be more focused on trying to get away than admiring the landscape, but this was probably going to be the last time he could see it. No. Something inside him woke up. I won't die here. I just cannot. He had felt like that before, just never so strongly. They were already almost at the edge. Just a couple more steps and… He had no idea how, but he found the strength for one last desperate effort. He wildly swung his body forward and then backward. His feet hit. His captor fell. He took off in a mad dash. Or at least attempted to. Strong finger closing around his ankle prevented him from getting far. He fell flat on his face. He kicked madly and managed to free his feet. Some little corner of his mind that wasn't crazy with fear took notice of the fact that it was too easy. He scrambled to his feet, but the other one reached him. He just felt the fist aiming at the back of his head, even though he couldn't see it. With a speed he didn't know he possessed, he half-turned and struck at his attacker. There was a strange squelching sound. Then the fat assailant toppled backwards. Naruto observed it with a sense of detached amazement. Has he really done this? The pain that had been bothering him so much just a few short moments before had somehow disappeared without him even noticing. He lifted his hand to inspect it. He didn't have much time for introspection. Kaji launched himself at him, screaming incoherently. Naruto was operating on pure instinct, but it seemed to be somebody else's one. Instead of fleeing, he stood his ground. He punched the approaching man with all his might. He wasn't even surprised when the attacker flew back. A part of his mind pointed out that there was no way it just happened, but nobody was paying it any attention. The flying body reached the edge of the cliff. It seemed to have stopped, but then it started slowly sliding down. "Haji!" screamed the fat man and quickly reached for his comrade's hand. Naruto's natural instincts finally took over. He turned around and flew. Behind he could hear the sounds of a man struggling to keep hold on a heavy burden, followed by a high scream. He ran faster. He barely could hear the voice calling down all possible curses on his head over the sound of wind rushing past his ears. Back in council chamber. "Now you can surely see just why is the monster so dangerous, Hokage-sama," finished the wizened consilmember. "Well, excuse me, but I still don't see it," answered Sarutobi evenly. Uzumaki Naruto was just defending himself. "But those red eyes," started the old merchant, but the Hokage cut him off. "Reported only by the true culprit of the crime. Surely you aren't going to believe anything a criminal makes up to earn himself a lighter sentence or even a pardon. You are forgetting the tainted chakra," added a self-righteous voice. "One of my clansmen was just nearby and felt it perfectly clearly." "Is that so?" Fugaku asked Sarutobi. When he was so close, why hadn't he heard the cries of a beaten child and intervened? "He wasn't that close," the head of the Uchiha clan clarified. "Not until the end." "If you say so," the Hokage replied. "What are you implying?" asked Fugaku. "Nothing," answered Sarutobi. "Should I have been implying something?" "Of course not." "Shouldn't we return to the matter at hand?" suggested Inuzukatsume. "Not everybody here has a whole day for this." "She is right," agreed Akimichi Chauza. "This could have been wrapped up an hour ago." "Troublesome," muttered Narashikaku, but everybody ignored him. "Yes, let's just finish it," said Satoru, one of the civilian council members, enthusiastically. "So how are you going to punish the brat?" "As I already said, I started with Sarutobi, but Satoru cut him off." "You can't let him get away with it. He killed one of our people." "Merely injured," corrected Sarutobi. "Kitahama Kaji survived his fall." "Does it really count?" "He's been comatose since they picked him from Nidame's head. The medics say he would never fully recover." "You seem to be forgetting who is the culprit and who the injured party," pointed out the old village leader. "It doesn't really matter," Fugaku made his opinion known. "What matters is that the boy used its power. Today there were only 2 drunkards, but who will it be tomorrow?" He let his words echo through the chamber. "Very true," nodded Satoru. "He mustn't be allowed to think he can get away with it." "That power cannot be left uncontrolled," proclaimed Danzo. "We must." "I know your opinion on the matter, Danzo," the Hokage cut his rival off. "My answer hasn't changed." Danzo's single eyes shot him an unfriendly look. "Still, we can't just let it slide," someone said. "And what's worse, this might mean the seal isn't sufficiently holding the demon's power back," Hamura added his 2 bits. "The seal was done by the greatest seal master to ever live," Sarutobi reminded them. "Do you doubt Yondame's masterpiece?" "He was in a hurry," Kaharu pointed out. "It's all too easy to make mistakes under such pressure." Both I and Jiraiya had examined the seal, and neither of us found any weaknesses, so Sarutobi reassured them. "But one can never be too sure," Hamura said. "What can we ever be really sure about?" the Hokage replied philosophically. "So we have to make sure he never hurts anyone again," Satoru suggested. Sarutobi suppressed the brief urge to throttle him. "We'll do no such thing," he stated. Then we will be forced to take necessary actions ourselves, since you don't seem to be willing to do what has to be done, Fugaku declared. Are you questioning my authority? The Hokage hissed dangerously. The temperature in the room seemed to have dropped several degrees. All the agitated counselors suddenly went very still. Even the Uchiha clan head squirmed uncomfortably under the aged leader's gaze. It took him a moment to gather the courage needed to speak. Forgive me, Hokage-sama, I was out of my place. I merely wanted to suggest the right course of action and got carried away. He didn't sound repentant enough when he said it. It is just my duty as an advisor to help my leader make the right decision when he is hesitant. That's it, Uchiha-san, Sarutobi spoke icily. You might give your advice, but you cannot make me accept it if I don't deem it sound. Understood. The clan leader nodded submissively, but the fires of defiance in his eyes burned brightly. It has become quite a common occurrence lately. Sarutobi frowned. This wasn't good at all. He'd have to look into it later, now he had a more pressing issue to deal with. Troublesome, the Nara clan head sighed. Before this degenerates into a fight, can I suggest a solution I'm confident everybody will find acceptable? Please speak up, Shikaku, said the Hokage. He was relieved that somebody turned the discussion away from the uncomfortable topic of Fugaku's loyalty and was curious to hear what the tactical genius had come up with. As I see it, there are two valid points. First, it was Uzumaki who was attacked and therefore can't be held responsible for merely defending himself. Second, some of the Kyuubi's chakra briefly leaked through the seal. While I have total faith in Yondame's work, I understand that not everybody can lay their worries to rest that easily. So I suggest we place Uzumaki with a guardian who would be able to suppress the demon's power in the unlikely case it started leaking out again. That sounds very nice, commented Satoru, but where are you going to find one? It's not like people with such power just grow on trees. In fact, actually, there is one, corrected by Shikaku. He looked at Sarutobi asking for permission to continue. The Hokage nodded slightly. He already caught on to what Shikaku was proposing and he liked it, certainly more than any of the other suggestions. You all know why Orochimaru had to flee the village, started the Nara. Some of the occupants of the room shuddered at the memory. Even after 7 years the treason was still a raw wound. Do you know exactly what experiment he conducted before being found out? The few recently instated members shook their heads. They knew the Snake Sannin worked with humans, most of whom have died, but that was the extent of their knowledge. He tried to recreate the Shodai's Mokutan bloodline. He was successful. A startled gasp could be heard. Although most of his subjects have died during the procedure, one of them has survived and gained the ability. He is now a shinobi of Konoha with a spotless record, if I am not mistaken. I suggest we put Uzumaki into his care, he should be able to prevent any future incidents like this from occurring. For a moment, the room was silent. Isn't he too young for this sort of responsibility? Asked the Kurama clan head. No, he's almost all grown now and mature for his age. Would he really be able to keep the beast contained? One of the civilians on the council still wasn't convinced. The Shodai was able to keep around many great Bijuu, as if they were nothing more than household pets, this young man would have no problem suppressing a little of overflowing chakra. The professor's confident tone seemed to have done the job. There was some more discontent muttering, but eventually everybody agreed that this was indeed the best solution. It is decided then, declared Sarutobi. Uzumaki Naruto will be placed into the care of Tenzo. Anbu headquarters. At the same time the council was discussing a young boy's fate, a young man had just closed the door of his temporary room quietly, removed his cat-faced mask, kicked off his sandals and plopped himself on the bed. He didn't have the energy to undress or even go to his regular apartment. He just wanted to rest, but despite closing his eyes even sooner than his head hit the pillow, sleep eluded him. Instead his thoughts took him back to the latest mission. He had no idea where exactly it went wrong. The moment he first noticed something wasn't as planned, things were already in hell. They were surrounded and outnumbered and had to make a desperate break for it. There was no thought of trying to complete the mission, it had been an obvious setup. He would bet an S-rank pay that their target was never even there. In the end only 2 of them were able to get away and Tenzo had to carry his companion for the second part of the journey back. He had just dumped his teammate at the hospital and went to give his report to the commander. That man's gaze made him feel like he was personally responsible for the debacle. Why did he join the Anbu anyway? The pay certainly wasn't worth it. The excitement, perhaps. No, that wasn't it either. Those cool masks. Ah, that was more like it. He loved the anonymity of it. When he put it on, nobody could recognize him. Nobody could look at him with those eyes. Nobody knew that he was a freak. Just as he was finally about to drift off to sleep, a sharp knock on the door brought him back to wakefulness. Are you there, cat? When Tenzo confirmed, the voice continued. You are summoned by the Hokage. Yes, some days Tenzo really had no idea why he had joined Anbu at all. Hokage's office. Tenzo couldn't believe his ears when he heard what the Hokage wanted him to do. Him taking care of a child. He was a freak, he was never allowed anywhere near children. He was positive he would never get into consideration for prospective Jounin sensei. He came to understand it shortly after he had been rescued from Orochimaru's lab. And now they wanted him to take care of a 4-year-old boy, no matter which one. He was good only for undertaking dangerous missions until one day he didn't come back. The world must be coming to its end. Yet he felt oddly touched. Are you sure, Hokage-sama? He didn't even know anything about childcare. Yes, the third nodded. It is the best solution. I wonder what the other solutions are, Tenzo thought, but refrained from saying it aloud. He still didn't want to do it. But then. Didn't he wonder what he was even doing in Anbu less than an hour earlier? A change of pace would be nice. He was already getting tired of the blood. I'll do it then. Later that day. Naruto was alone in his apartment. He had lived on his own ever since the orphanage had decided they didn't want anything to do with him and kicked him on the streets last year. He had spent a week alone, hunting for scraps to eat, before the old man came and gave him this place. It wasn't anything fancy, but at least it had 4 walls and a roof that didn't leak too much. He was currently at the sink, rubbing his clothes with soap, trying to remove the stains of blood and grass he had acquired earlier. The public laundry wash in the next street outright refused to serve him, claiming his dirty rags would just contaminate decent people's garments. He sighed to himself. The laundry owner's attitude was quite common in the village. It made getting anything a challenge, but he was managing. His musings were cut short by a soft knock on the door. He froze. Visitors were usually bad news. But then bad news visitors seldom knocked. He jumped down from the stool he had been standing on and went cautiously to the door. Are you there, Naruto? A voice from the other side inquired. The boy's face lit up with a smile. Old man. He opened the door. Hello, Naruto, the Hokage smiled. Hello, started the boy, but then noticed another man standing behind Sarutobi. He eyed the stranger warily. May we come in, the old village leader asked. Sure, Naruto nodded. The two visitors walked into what he passed as a living room. So, what are you here for, he asked cautiously. Say, Naruto, how would you like to live with someone? Tenzo watched the boy instantly go on guard. Big blue eyes flickered in his direction. He tried to smile reassuringly, but he had no experience dealing with young children. It came out pretty lame. The boy didn't seem reassured at all. Just why did he agree to this? Must have been the sleep deprivation. Is it this man, Naruto guessed. Yes, Naruto, the Hokage confirmed. This is Tenzo. Hello, pleased to meet you, he attempted a warm greeting. Hello, the boy replied half-heartedly. The boy's eyes were still bearing into him with a cautious look. He knew such eyes. He saw them often enough. Usually in the mirror. It had been hard for him after he was freed from his torment. People kept watching him warily. What was he after whatever the traitor had done to him? Can he be trusted? Won't he just turn on us when we drop our guard? He wanted to reach the friends he used to have before his ordeal, but they have grown distant. Even they couldn't stand to get close to him anymore. It hurt. In a way, it hurt even more than Orochimaru's procedures. And the pain never quite went away. For a while, he tried to connect with a fellow survivor of the Snake Sanin's treachery, but it didn't work. She was just too different from him. So he had been mostly alone ever since. Yet now, when he looked into the little boy's eyes, he felt like he just found a kindred spirit. So maybe this wasn't such a bad idea after all. For Naruto's part, he didn't trust the stranger he was told would become his new guardian. When he had lived in the orphanage, many people came through and took out other kids becoming their guardians or even legal parents. But they never even considered him. Only one did. Naruto tried not to think about that time. He was actually happy to land back in the orphanage 2 months later. So he wasn't thrilled to go with this stranger. But then Tenzo smiled, and it had been a real kind smile. Naruto rarely saw his way. He smiled back. He dared to hope that things were actually starting to look up. Chapter 2. Growing Up. As soon as Tenzo finished his mission report, he headed home. He found it hard to combine his Anbu career with raising a kid, but he wasn't complaining. It took some time for them to adjust to the sudden change of their lifestyles, but it was worth it. He now couldn't even imagine coming back to an empty apartment. Speaking of which, there was nobody inside now. He quickly checked the rooms and found Naruto's training pouch missing. He calmed down, changed from the Black Ops uniform into a customary garb and headed to the nearest training ground. Sure enough, there was his charge hurling practice shuriken at a wooden post. Your grip is a bit off, he commented after observing the boy's efforts for a while. Naruto whirled towards him. A huge grin spread on his face. Tenzo-san. You're back. He exclaimed happily. Was there any doubt, he asked with a smile. Naruto's face was answer enough. Despite his young age, the boy possessed a surprisingly good grasp of the perils of a ninja's profession. It brought home the reality of just what his life had been before they met. Tenzo certainly hadn't been like that at his age. He quickly showed the thoughts aside before they could sour his mood. "You have to hold it like this," he said and demonstrated Naruto the correct way. The little blonde immediately adjusted his grip. "Still not quite," commented Tenzo and pointed out the mistake. "Now that's better. Throw it." The child did so. The projectile embedded itself near the center of the target. "You see the difference?" It was a better hit than the previous attempts. And they weren't bad either, especially considering how recently he had started practicing. There was some serious potential there. He let Naruto exercise some more until he was satisfied with his progress. "Enough of this for now," he declared. The boy looked at him dejectedly. "Let's do some taijutsu practice instead." Blue eyes immediately lit up. Their owner enthusiastically slipped into a basic stance. Tenzo grinned and crouched down to engage him. They haven't studied anything fancy yet, just the basic stances, blocks and dodges. The boy had caught it like a fish in water. The young Anbu had been surprised how quick his reflexes were. He doubted many kids his age could boast better ones. The boy was still too young to be admitted to the academy, but Tenzo considered sending him there anyway. He had both determination and stamina in spades, and he had no doubt that Naruto would do well. And making some friends close to his age wouldn't hurt as well. But there were also other things to consider. His mood darkened when he remembered what had occurred just a day after he took the little foxy boy in. A month earlier. It was easy for them to decide where they would be living from now on. Tenzo's apartment was bigger and had no leaks. When it came to packing Naruto's possessions, he was horrified. Most of his clothes were either too big or too small, and even the rest weren't fit to be worn by a 4-year-old boy. "We're going shopping tomorrow," he decided. His young charge looked at him in askance. "But I have no money," he pointed out. "That doesn't matter since I do," the man replied. "I don't want to be a bother. You could use the money better." "Nonsense," Tenzo dismissed his worry. "There is nothing better to spend money on than making little kids happy. Besides, I'm receiving pay to make sure I can take proper care of you." "Really?" Naruto asked dubiously. "Really?" Tenzo confirmed. It was the truth. Because taking care of a child required him to take less missions in Anbu, he had been given financial compensation. The next day they set out to the business district. Tenzo was walking in the front, Naruto keeping at his heels. They were both doing their best to ignore the cold stares the people were shooting them. Tenzo noticed that they were a lot colder than usual. They entered a clothes shop. The shopkeeper greeted them with a professional smile plastered on his face, but it had quickly morphed into a scowl when he noticed Naruto. What is he doing here? The child hid behind his guardian's legs and tried to become invisible. He came to buy some clothes, obviously. This is a clothes shop, isn't it? Tenzo asked while looking over the numerous outfits displayed around. How dare you just bring him here, the owner hissed. And just why shouldn't I? Tenzo replied evenly. Because. You know. Well, excuse me, but I don't. Would you please care to enlighten me? He asked too sweetly. Because he. The shopkeeper bit his tongue before he could blurt out something unwise. He hesitated for a moment before deciding on an acceptable answer that won't land him in trouble. Because of what he did yesterday. And just what would be that? The Mokuton user raised an eyebrow. I am unaware of any misconduct on his part. He threw a man off the Hokage monument. Just how is that nothing? The merchant exploded. He was merely defending himself from an unprovoked assault, Tenzo corrected him. He started throwing stones first. The shopkeeper insisted. You must be misinformed. The report I have read of that incident doesn't speak of such a thing. By this time, the man was sweating under Tenzo's gaze. Stupid report then, the guy barked. Or stupid people. This man's mental capacities are clearly lacking, he said, turning to the boy who was still cowering behind his legs. We are going, Naruto. After I had a good look at the shopkeeper, I didn't even want to know what his merchandise was like. And with those words they left the establishment. That didn't go too well, he remarked once they were back on the street. Naruto remained silent. Let's go elsewhere. But their luck didn't turn for the better. They had yet to encounter a clerk who wouldn't glare at them. They didn't quite dare to throw them out, but they tried to overprice them or sell them inferior goods. But they managed to get most of what they needed. Only shoes remained uncrossed on their shopping list. They wandered into the proper store. The saleswoman barely noticed them, being too busy chatting with a customer. Not that they minded. They were glad they could try on the footwear without being disturbed. As Tenzo carried Naruto's selection of shoes to the counter, he paused when he heard the conversation between the clerk and the customer. He strained his ears and listened in. Poor little Akai's was so distraught he couldn't hit a single target. It was a wonder he was even able to come to the academy after what the monster did to his father. I rather gave him the day off to visit him at the hospital. Yes, dear, the shopkeeper nodded empathically. It is terrible that the monster is allowed to roam free. And what's more, the academy instructor continued, I heard that they let him get away with it. I swear if that demon ever tries to attend the academy, I am going to make sure he never finishes. She said it in such a forceful tone that it left little doubt just what she was going to do to accomplish it. Quite right, the saleswoman encouraged me. If he can cause that much damage now, who can tell what he would be able to do if he ever gets training. You're not the only one who feels that way, the teacher agreed. Tenzo had enough listening. He laid his purchase on the counter and paid. Then he grabbed the distraught boy and dragged him out of the shop. The clerk and the instructor had resumed their chit-chat. They never noticed just who had been there. The pair walked home in silence. Only after the doors of their apartment closed behind them did Naruto speak. They are going to hurt me, he stated in a small voice. No, they aren't, Tenzo reassured him. I won't allow it. You can't be with me all the time, Naruto pointed out. Not at the academy. So you want to be a ninja? The Anbu wasn't surprised. Yes, the boy confirmed. The best ninja ever. My, aren't we ambitious, Tenzo smiled despite himself at the sight of the child's serene face. But I can't do that if I can't finish the academy, Naruto's face fell. Don't worry about it now, his guardian consoled him. You still have a couple of years before you'll start. Do I really have to wait so long? Inquired the blonde. I'm afraid so, the older man replied. Why are you in such a rush anyway? So I'll get strong soon and the angry man couldn't beat me anymore, the kid explained. I suppose you have a point there, the adult agreed. Okay then, I'll start teaching you tomorrow. Yay. Naruto punched the air. Why not today? Why, indeed, Tenzo asked himself. You know what, let's get you dressed and we'll head to the training grounds. Back at the training grounds. Tenzo hadn't thought it would accomplish much, but he had shown his student the barest basics anyway. And had been amazed at how quickly he had taken to them. Ever since that day they would come to the training grounds and work on Naruto's skills. And when he decided that his charge had enough, since the boy seemed utterly incapable of telling it himself, they went home and worked on Naruto's academic knowledge. Those lessons were received with much less enthusiasm than the practical ones, but he had been somehow able to partially convince Naruto of their importance nevertheless. Mainly when he pointed out that he couldn't be a ninja if he couldn't read his mission assignment. Okay, Naruto, that's enough for today, he decided. So soon, the boy protested. We barely started. We've been at it for an hour, the man pointed out. That's nothing, the blonde claimed. You have been here on your own for who knows how long and I have just returned from a mission. I think it's safe to say that we both need our rest. The guardian didn't relent. The big strong tough guy was outlasted by a kid who would have thought a female voice interrupted. He slowly turned towards its source. And why did you decide to grace us with your presence today, Anko? There was a dark-haired woman dressed in a tan trench coat standing on a tree trunk perpendicularly to the ground. Naruto was staring at her perplexed. I came here to train, the newcomer answered. Last time I checked it was still a public training ground. What is the lady doing? Naruto asked perplexed. Trying to make a conversation, what does it look like, squirt, Anko replied with a strange smile. The child scowled. It was cute. Then she turned to Tenzo. So, I've heard you've gotten yourself a runt, is that him? The man nodded. She jumped off the tree with a somersault and landed in front of the startled boy. She crouched down and looked into his eyes. Naruto tried to look undaunted, but failed. At least he resisted the urge to take a step back. So what do we have here, the woman started. He could now see that she was very young, still more a girl rather than an adult. He also noted that she was wearing something that barely passed as clothes underneath her coat. When she noticed where his eyes roamed, she laughed mischievously. Do you like them? What? Naruto stammered. Lost your speech. I'm glad I haven't lost my touch, she teased. Did you come here to corrupt innocent young minds? Anko, Tenzo chided her. She smirked. You know me. Yes, I do, he sighed exasperatedly. Why did I ever ask? If that's all, we'll be going. Why do you think that's all? She grinned. We're going anyway, declared Tenzo, lifted Naruto on his shoulders and turned to leave. You can now train in peace. He didn't wait for her answer and quickly took off. Who was that lady? Naruto asked. She's an old acquaintance, his guardian answered. What was she doing? His charge inquired. She was messing with your mind, the Anbu explained. She is quite good at that. That's not what I meant. How was she standing on the tree? The boy clarified. It's called tree walking. It's one of the basic skills of ninja, Tenzo replied. When will you teach me? Naruto asked eagerly. You still have time. You haven't started drawing on your chakra yet. And how can I do that? The curious child refused to drop the matter. I'll show you later, the adult tried to brush it off. But I want to know now. Tenzo sighed in exasperation. 4-year-old boys sure were bothersome. Why did he ever think this was a good idea? You're acting like a spoiled brat, he rebuked Naruto. Have patience, I'll show you everything in good time. That silenced Naruto for a while. But Tenzo had no doubt that he would have to teach the little brat about chakra soon. A month later. Enough for today, Tenzo decided. Already? Naruto asked dejectedly. They had been practicing drawing on one's chakra, and the older man was amazed at how much Naruto had. Perhaps he shouldn't be, all things considered. The blonde's stamina had to be supported by something. Even though he was dripping with sweat, he still refused to admit that he had enough. Yes. Look at the time. We should go get dinner. That made the boy smile a bit. Food was something Naruto never turned down. He had to somehow reclaim all the energy he burned off during the daily training. He could wolf down anything that was put in front of him on a platter. It never ceased to amaze the young Anbu how such a huge mound of rations can fit into such a small body. He just chalked it up as another one of the many peculiarities his little ball of sunshine had. They didn't have a favorite place to eat, so they usually just wandered through the town and looked for a place that didn't refuse to serve demons. They were strolling down a street when the most appetizing scent caught Naruto's nose. He sniffed the air like a dog or fox. He looked around to determine where it had come from. He didn't have to search long. His senses soon pointed to a stall just 100 steps ahead. He immediately made a beeline for it. Tenzo actually had to quicken his pace to keep up. The foxy boy climbed on one of the high stools next to the counter, his caretaker took place beside him and discreetly scanned their surroundings. There was only one other person in the establishment, but he didn't spare them a single look. Good. It seemed like they could eat here in peace. Welcome to Ichiraku's ramen, and I greeted the middle-aged chef. What will you be having? Naruto was studying the menu, but he wasn't having much success. His reading lessons were coming along well, but there were still too many words he didn't understand. He scrunched his forehead in concentration. He debated with himself whether he should just point to a random food and hope it was edible, but then decided against it. Whatever smells so good, he ordered. All our cooking smells good, the stall owner replied with a smile. You'll have to pick one, added a young girl behind the counter, obviously the elder man's daughter. This one, then, Naruto pointed at a random selection. The chef disappeared in the kitchenette. Soon after he reappeared with a steaming bowl in his hands. Here you are, mister. Naruto picked up his chopsticks and dug in. He entered nirvana. The taste was so good, caressing his taste buds like heavenly ambrosia. This was surely the food of gods. Suddenly the bowl was empty. Naruto glared at it in dismay. Can I have more? He asked. Of course, the chef answered with a chuckle. Right here. Everybody was amazed at how much the small child was able to put away. Tenzo realized that he'll probably have to reassess his food budget. Feeding Naruto proved to be quite costly. But seeing the happiness shining in the little blonde's face, he couldn't find it in himself to deny him. It seemed like they just found their restaurant of choice. Another month later. Naruto and Tenzo were going through one of their first spars. I wasn't much of a fight yet, but the boy was enjoying himself immensely. Even Tenzo was sporting a smile on his face. They were interrupted by an amused chuckle. They turned to the person who had been observing them from the shade of the trees without them noticing. Old man. Hokage-sama. They exclaimed at the same time. Is something the matter? The Anbu asked. Not at all, the wizened village leader replied. I just wanted to see how you are doing. Great, Naruto answered happily. Tenzo is teaching me wonderful things. Do you want to see? Not now. I just wanted to make sure everything was alright, Sarutobi said. It is, the boy assured him. Thanks for letting me live with Tenzo. You're the greatest. The elderly man chuckled at the child's praise. I want to be just like you when I grow up. Really? The elderly man smiled. That's nice. Yes, old man. I'll be Hokage like you, just you watch, Naruto declared. Aren't you aiming high? Sarutobi commented. That is no small feat. But I'll make it. Believe it, Naruto started with unwavering determination. Forgive me, Hokage-sama, where are my manners? Tenzo said and made a bench grow from the ground. Naruto stared open-mouthed. He had never seen his guardian use his special power before. Thank you very much. But I'm afraid I have to decline your invitation. I still have some appointments today. I have to leave now. He disappeared in Shunshin. Wow, the boy exclaimed admiring Tenzo's creation. Can you make other things grow? Can you grow a house? The Mokuton user smiled at his young charge's excitement. Why, yes. Then why don't you live in one? The blonde wondered. And just where would I put it? Tenzo threw his arms around in a dramatic gesture. Right here, the boy answered like it was the simplest thing in the world. I'm afraid that's not possible, the grown man shook his head. It is a public training ground. And somewhere else. The young demon vessel tried. Like where? His caretaker raised an eyebrow. Anywhere? And what about something smaller than a house? Like a treehouse? The puppy's eyes were irresistible. Okay, the man agreed. I'll make you a treehouse. 5 years old. Bunshin no jutsu. Ah. Naruto was getting frustrated. No matter how hard he tried, the clone wouldn't form right. He got down the henge in no time, discovering he could make the change physical instead of mere illusion, and Kawarimi after a bit of struggle, but not this. Tenzo originally blamed it on bad chakra control and taught him tree walking to remedy it, but it was of little help. He now knew the leaf floating, water walking and point balancing exercises and was pretty sure he was the only one in his age group who could boast such ability, but the basic clone still eluded him for reasons unknown. He kicked the pale sickly apparition sprawled on the ground, causing it to dispel. What am I doing wrong? If he were the type to pull out his hair in frustration, he would have been already bald. Maybe it's just not your type of technique, a silky voice suggested. Enko, he turned around startled. The kunoichi jumped down from a tree. She took on a habit of appearing occasionally during their training, offering a witty comment or two. Tenzo was always exasperated by her visits, but Naruto came to enjoy them. She was fun. Every shinobi has a technique they just can't get right no matter what they do, the woman continued. Are you saying I should just give up? Naruto was offended. I'll do it, believe it. I'm not saying that, just that maybe you should try something a bit different instead, the snake summoner clarified. Like what? The boy was intrigued. I'll show you, but you must promise me you won't tell a soul who showed it to you. The mischievous expression on her face would send grown men running, but not Naruto. He was hooked on her words. Why? He asked, a bit puzzled, a bit excited. Is it forbidden? No, merely restricted, she explained. It has a high chakra cost, but that shouldn't be a problem to you. Okay, I'm game. Bring it on. The child agreed eagerly. You asked for it, brat, the kunoichi smiled. Here comes the shadow clone. 6 years old. It was one of their rare days off. Tenzo convinced Naruto to forego training for today and instead they were spending their time wandering through the park, enjoying the sunshine, eating ice cream and ignoring the stares of the villagers. They had a lot of practice with it. You, an angry voice sounded. They paid it no heed. I'm talking to you, damn it. Pay attention. They didn't acknowledge him until he stood in front of them effectively blocking their way. They tried to bypass him, but he stubbornly refused to let them. The sight of a 10 or maybe 11 years old kid trying to bully a grown-up shinobi was comical. A group of his friends was observing the scene with curiosity. Do you want something? Tenzo asked calmly. Yes. How does he dare to show his face in public, he ranted self-righteously. He should rot in jail for what he did to my father. Should I know you? Naruto inquired. No, but you know him, the as yet unknown boy pointed to his right. Naruto followed his finger and his eyes landed on a man in a wheelchair. His breath caught in his throat. He recognized the hateful face. He shrunk back, hiding behind Tenzo's legs. He hadn't acted like that in over a year, but his guardian couldn't fault him. He recognized the person as well. Hidehama Kaji, he stated. So you are minding the brat now, the crippled man said. So I am, the shinobi confirmed. Aji looked like he wanted to say something, but the Anbu's face and too many onlookers made him rethink it. Go away, he growled. Just go away. We'll go, Tenzo decided. Come, Naruto. They turned around to leave. Don't you just walk away, Kaji-san shouted. White, eyes, his father chastised him. Hey. The boy yelled. Some instinct warned Naruto about the danger, but he was too slow to move. Tenzo was already moving, but he misjudged the situation. The kunai struck Naruto in the back. He fell forward. Eyes stared like he couldn't quite comprehend what he just did. He wasn't the only one. A stunned silence reigned over the park until Tenzo called for military police to arrest the culprit. Then he knelt down by the wounded boy. Naruto was in pain. He had been injured before, but never stabbed so deep. He felt the blood pouring from his wound. He also felt a familiar heat spreading through his body. A barely perceptible whisper sounded in his mind. He couldn't understand the words, but he knew what it wanted him to do. He lifted himself to his knees and pulled out the weapon. Blood flowed freely for a moment, then stopped. Naruto. His guardian shouted in alarm. He ignored him. He started toward the attacker, who by now was trembling in fear. Then trees suddenly burst from the ground, stopping him, binding him. The burning from his veins disappeared. The wound on his back made itself known via an attack of pain. He blinked in surprise. What had just happened? Then strong arms wrapped around him. The trees released him. Let's go, his caretaker said. He just nodded. He was too tired to do anything else. The evening. Sarutobi knocked at Tenzo's door. His head was still pounding from the shouting match he had to sit through in today's council session. The bunch of reprobates had heard about the incident in the park almost as soon as it had happened and naturally demanded something had to be done about the demon. Even when he pointed out that Naruto hadn't actually done anything, they were unrelenting. He sighed. He really wasn't looking forward to announcing to the poor boy what they made him agree to. The door opened and he stepped in. "How do you feel?" he asked after the greetings. "Well," the young demon vessel answered. "It doesn't even hurt anymore." "I'm glad to hear it," the Hokage smiled. "But that isn't what you came for," the boy guessed. "You're right. Am I that obvious?" Naruto didn't design it with an answer. "It's something bad, isn't it?" the blonde stated. "Right on target again," the village leader confirmed. "They banned you from entering the academy." "What?" Naruto looked at him with a dejected look in his wide blue eyes. "They can stop me from becoming a ninja." "No, they can't do that," Sarutobi shook his head. "They merely won't allow you to study at the academy. You can still become a shinobi if you pass the test." "So I just have to study with Tenzo?" the boy asked with hope. "Yes," the old man confirmed. "That's it." "That's great," Naruto smiled relieved. "I can still take your hat." "Train hard and we'll see," Sarutobi smiled back. "Old man, I have to ask you something," the youth changed the topic, his voice suddenly solemn. "What is it?" The Hokage went on guard. "What happened today?" That was just the question he feared. "What do you mean, Naruto?" "You were there." He tried to dodge it, but no luck. "Don't try to change the matter again, old man," the boy said angrily. "It won't work on me anymore. I just have to know what was that heat, why did my wound heal so quickly and what did Tenzo do? And don't tell me I'm not ready to know. I already have a theory about it and the truth cannot possibly be much worse. So please come clean and tell me about Kyuubi." The Hokage was shocked, although perhaps he shouldn't be. Naruto was quite clever, after all. At least when no books were involved. "Very well then. Sit down, it is a long story." 7 years old. Naruto stood in the middle of the training field, a wooden stick in his hands, and waved it around in a complicated dance. A group of shadow clones was mirroring his movements. When his guardian had first found out about them, he had been furious at Anko, but he had to admit their usefulness. That naturally didn't mean he forgave the crazy Kunoichi. "What are you doing?" Tenzo asked. "Practicing me," the boy answered. He was fascinated with the art of the sword ever since he saw Tenzo in a sparring match against an Anbo woman. "But you never trained it before," the older man pointed out. "Then I should better start, shouldn't I?" the ninja wannabe stated simply. "You don't have a sword," his sensei reminded him. "Then I'll have to get one," the boy had a simple solution. "You mean it, don't you?" Tenzo smiled. Naruto nodded. "Very well. I'll show you the correct way," Tenzo agreed. "And if you are any good, I'll see about getting you a sword." Chapter 3. A team is born. A chop, a jab, a block, a step back then two to the right, spin, charge, retreat and then attack again. Hear the air swish as the blade cuts through it. Jump high, land in a crouch and stab backwards at an imaginary opponent. She finished the kata and sheathed her sword. She smiled. Everything was perfect. She went through the whole exercise without the smallest twitch, with no sign of hesitation and only the slightest hint of the obnoxious pain. Finally, after all the time, her injuries were fully healed. She still shuddered when she remembered them. She could even now feel the phantom pain of the kunai sliding across her ribs, her attempt to block the strike, then the punch that had shattered her arm. The hit to her head she didn't feel until after she woke up in the hospital 2 days later. The medics hadn't been sure she would be ever able to resume her shinobi career. She recalled the time of despair, worsened even when she had heard the results of the exams. Oh, how she had been proud to make it to the finals. Now she just wanted to kick herself for the stupidity. She hadn't been ready. She might have done well on the first test, but the second one she had passed only thanks to her teammates. In the third part she had lost her first match almost as soon as it began. She had to realize with shame that she was out of her depth. And to add insult to injury, both of her teammates had advanced in rank. She didn't. It took some painful introspection, but she realized she hadn't been taking her training seriously enough. She had always prided herself on not being a useless fangirl like so many young kunoichi, but it turned out that wasn't enough. Well, no more. She would now put everything she's got into her training. She'd train and then train some more until she'd become the best, and even then she wouldn't stop training. Now only the matter of her team weighed on her mind. Since her teammates had both made it and her recovery had been uncertain, they took off on their different carriers and her squad had been officially disbanded. So now she was a wee little genin without a team and she wouldn't be able to go on missions and enter the Chunin exams again until she got onto a new one. She'll have to be good so the senseis would fight over her, otherwise she'll stay in the reserves forever. But that resolved she resumed her training. Elsewhere. The young girl was running through the forest at top speed, her 3 gray dogs, still puppies, at her heels. She strained both her nose and ears to discern what was happening ahead. This was supposed to be an easy bodyguard mission, but it had suddenly become apparent that it exceeded the parameters of a C rank. It had started innocently enough. They were escorting the rich businessman's daughter and her 2 servants on a trip to visit her aunt in Port City. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, the flowers were blooming, and the only inconvenience they had encountered so far was the cloud of dust behind the ox-driven cart carrying their client's possessions. A mission as easy as pie, one would say. But their sensei insisted on taking it seriously anyway. That's why she found herself as the forward scout. It was a logical choice because she and her canines were able to smell trouble from miles ahead. And they haven't noticed a thing out of the ordinary. That's why they were so startled when they heard a scream from behind. She turned on her heels and took the air into her nose. Nothing. The wind wasn't blowing today. She channeled chakra to her ears. She picked a crack of broken wood, followed by ringing of steel meeting steel. Definitely a battle. She took to the treetops and sped towards their small entourage. The battle seemed to have reached a peak and was slowly dying down. She pumped even more chakra into her legs and willed herself to go faster. Soon she arrived at the scene. While she had been scouting ahead, they had been attacked from behind. She saw her sensei defending against 2 opponents. He was already sporting a gash on his cheek and his left thigh was leaking red. She didn't stop to think, her instincts took over. She jumped from the tree with a battle cry and lunged at the closest opponent. He dodged. She landed on all 4s. For a moment, her back was exposed to him. He tried to stab her, but a gray blur jumped him. He barely avoided the snapping jaws. But then a mouthful of sharp teeth closed around his calf. He looked down in surprise. He hadn't realized that there might be more than one dog. That hesitation cost him dearly. The 3rd canine hit his hip and took out a bit of skin. The man screamed. By the time the girl was back on her feet and joined the fray. A quick application of her clan's secret gave her feral qualities. With her nails turned into claws she swiped at the man. She now had a better view of him. He was wearing standard shinobi clothes, a dark jumpsuit with a flak jacket of a design she couldn't immediately recognize. He was wearing a 8 on his forehead, but his dirty hair obscured the symbol. He blocked her attack with ease. So the little girl came to play, he sneered. More fun for me. He kicked away the dog biting into his leg. She saw that momentary loss of balance and attacked. He managed to avoid her blow, but one of her dogs got hold of his side. Unfortunately his teeth couldn't penetrate the armored vest. The man batted him away with a fist. Pathetic, he commented. Is that all you got? She scowled. Of course that wasn't all. It was time to take out the big guns. She reached into her pouch and took out 3 tiny orbs. Take that, boys, she shouted, throwing the soldier pills to her canine partners. They caught them from the air and promptly swallowed them. Their fur stood on its end and darkened. They seemed to grow bigger. I'll show you just what I've got, hissed Kunoichi. That's Uga. She jumped in the air and started spinning, her companions following suit. Soon 4 small tornado-like projectiles were flying at the attacker from different directions. His eyes widened in surprise, but he was too experienced a ninja to be caught off guard that easily. He frantically dodged, but the attacks changed their direction and still followed him. But he was fast. He saw an opening between them and took it. He was able to avoid most of the attack, but one still glanced at his thigh. He grimaced in pain when his leg had trouble supporting him. You'll pay for this, little shit, he promised. The girl paid him no mind. She and her dogs were readying themselves for another charge. The man's face suddenly registered surprise, and then he toppled forward, revealing the form of the girl's sensei with a bloodied kunai in his hand. That was reckless, Hana, he chided. The young Kunoichi now registered the form of the other attacker lying still on the ground, his throat slit. I know, sensei, she admitted. She then looked around. Where is everyone? Her sensei pointed behind the cart. She quickly took off. And halted after just a few steps. There were lying teammates, the ground red with their blood. The maid and the cart driver were sprawled beside them. She couldn't move, she couldn't speak, she could barely breathe. Then she registered a small sound. She awoke from her stupor. One of them was still alive. She knelt down to the wounded boy and quickly examined him. She was no expert, but she had some basic medical knowledge. Her aunt had been tutoring her in the ways of a veterinarian, but she found little interest in it. The paths of warriors or trackers were more alluring to her. But now she swore that she wouldn't try to skip on her lessons ever again. Because what she was able to discern wasn't comforting at all. The boy's lung had been punctured and an artery was ruptured. He was slowly drowning in his own blood. She quickly ran through her meager arsenal of medical techniques and came up with a blood stopping. She hadn't fully mastered it yet, but it would have to do. She forced her shaky fingers into the necessary hand seals and was relieved when her hand was enveloped in the familiar green glow. She laid her palm on the wound. She prayed it would work. The bleeding slowly lessened and then stopped. Hana let out a breath and deactivated them. It seemed her teammate would live for the while. She registered soft steps behind her. She whirled to face the newcomer, her arms automatically assuming the fighting stance, even though her dogs were calm. It was just her sensei. The man was leaning on the cart, his right hand clutching at his bleeding thigh. "Sensei," she cried out, half relieved, half alarmed. "How are they?" he asked. "Yubei lives," she answered. "And Takeda?" She walked over her other fallen teammate. She ran a quick diagnostic over him and then hung her head in defeat. Tears spilled from her eyes. "I'm sorry," her sensei said slowly, "but now isn't time for grieving." She wiped her eyes and stood up. She didn't know what she should do now. Now the excitement of the battle turned down, the reality of what had happened dawned on her. "We cannot linger here," Sensei pointed out. "The last one may return any time when his comrades won't catch up to him." "Another one?" she asked, alarmed. "Yes, the one who took away our client and took down Juebei and Takeda." "What are we going to do?" she asked, suddenly feeling very young and helpless. A part of her mind told her to go after the last enemy to complete their mission and avenge her friends, but another didn't want to leave them. And yet another one told her that it didn't matter anyway, since she couldn't defeat the enemy and would wind up dead no matter what she would do. "We'll have to salvage what we can," they decided. "I'm currently in no shape to fight and you are no match for such an opponent. Is Juebei stable now?" "I think so, I did what I could." "Good. Then patch me up the best you can. We must be prepared when the last one shows up." "Yes, sensei." She started to work. "Who were they?" she inquired after a while. According to their scratched headbands they were. But they didn't seem like your typical bunch. Their gear was in too good shape. They might have been just pretending so they wouldn't implicate their village. "So there might be others?" she asked fearfully. "I hope not. Otherwise we're dead." "It's finished, sensei," Hana said. "Can you stand on your own?" The man tried it. "Yes, thank you. This'll do." He limped towards his other surviving student. "How bad off is he?" She ran a diagnosis and grimaced. "Very bad. I managed to stop his bleeding, but his lung is still collapsed. I'm afraid it would take a much better medic than me to heal him. I don't think he'll survive long enough to get him back to Konoha. We'll have to try anyway. Let's get him on the cart. We'll be riding home. The only good thing about this situation is that we still have the oxen." They carefully lifted the wounded boy. He let out a pained cry that quickly turned into a gurgle. Hana winced. They laid him into the cart. She made sure his wound hadn't opened. At least something went well today. "What about the others?" she asked. "The cart is big enough. We can take them to Konoha with their families." They loaded the bodies. Sensei then took the reins and turned the cart around. They began their journey back to Konoha. She was exhausted after the battle and healing, but she didn't allow herself to rest. She kept looking over her shoulder, expecting an attack anytime. "Calm down, Hana. I don't think we'll be attacked that soon." "Why?" "Our client was taken captive, not killed. That means he has to deliver her somewhere. It seems like the mission is more important to him than his comrades." She shuddered. Something like that was unforgivable in her clan. But she decided to trust the words of her sensei and rest on the cart for a while. Besides, there were still her trusty dogs keeping guard on them. The journey seemed much longer than when they had traveled in the opposite direction. Hana kept watch over Juebei. She fed him a blood-replenishing pill, but it only caused his wound to reopen. She managed to close it again, but he probably lost most of the blood he had regained due to the medicine. It was all she could do to restrain herself from pulling out her hair in frustration. The boy's condition was steadily worsening. His skin became ashen, his breathing too fast and shallow. He won't live to see the evening, she was positive of it. And there wasn't a single thing she could do about it. She hated the feeling of helplessness. And Konoha was still too far. She watched the sun slowly descending to the horizon. The shadows were lengthening and she half expected an enemy hiding in every one of them. Sometime during the afternoon Juebei stopped breathing. She wanted to cry for him, but instead she just felt numb. There was panic ebbing at the edges of her mind, but she refused to acknowledge it. She knew that if she allowed herself any stronger emotions, she would just break down. The evening came and they stopped for the night. Her sensei took the first watch. She lay in her sleeping bag, but sleep eluded her. Instead, the events of the previous day kept repeating themselves in front of her eyes. Then it was suddenly morning. Had she dozed off? They packed up the camp and set on the road. She just stared blankly forward. When they were attacked, she didn't even notice it. It took one of her dogs tackling her to the ground to wake her from her stupor. She quickly scanned her surroundings. Then dodged as a kunai sailed towards her head. She located where it had come from. She sprung to her feet, her own kunai in hand. Her sensei had already thrown a couple of shuriken into the foliage. Their assailant swiftly moved out of the way. Then a hail flew from the opposite direction. She barely evaded them. There were two enemies. They were screwed. One of the attackers came out of the bushes and her sensei engaged him. She scanned the trees for the other one. She heard a kunai whistling in the air, but it wasn't aimed at her. She looked over her shoulder. Her sensei just barely dodged the thrown blade, but it put too much strain on his injured leg. He stumbled and hissed in pain. His opponent capitalized on it. He was stabbed in his chest. Sensei managed to block it, but the knife went right through his forearm. She screamed and rushed to his aid. The other one attacked before she could reach him. She managed to get into a stance and block his strike, but it felt like her bones were breaking. Her dogs immediately jumped and forced him to retreat momentarily. But then he pulled out a katana and they had to back off to avoid being cut to pieces. Hana briefly considered her options and took 4 pills from her pouch. She threw 3 of them to her partners and swallowed one herself. She leapt away to avoid a vicious sword strike, then activated her quadruped technique. "Let's go, boys," she shouted. Gatsuuga. 4 furry tornadoes started after the man. He managed to avoid them entirely. "Again," commanded Hana. This time her opponent didn't run. He ran through some hand seals and slammed his fist to the ground. A wall of earth rose from the ground. The 4 attacking whirlwinds slammed into it painfully. Small cracks appeared in the barrier, but it held. The foursome fell to the ground. "How did you like that, stupid pups?" the man laughed. Hana's head hurt too much to glare at him. Wimpy little puppies shouldn't play with big bad wolves. She shook her head to clear it. She lifted herself on her hands and knees. The man kicked her side, knocking her back down. One of her dogs charged at him, but he punched his muzzle, sending him flying. The others finally got to their paws and stared at him. He simply grabbed his katana again and easily held them off. One of her trusted friends now sported a long gash along his backside. It looked bad for them. She somehow got to her feet before the man attacked again. She blocked his blade with a kunai, but she was pushed back nevertheless. The next strike didn't chop off her head only because one of her dogs tackled him. It earned him a punch that broke his ribs. "Now I had it," the man snapped. "I'll kill the mutts first, and then I will take my time with you, girl." Then he was forced to dodge a hail of kunai. What he started. 2 figures jumped from the trees, weapons drawn, and charged at him. 2 more went after the other missing nin. She recognized their armor and masks. An Anbu patrol. They were saved. The battle took a swift end after that, the outlaws being no match for a superior number of elite warriors. She watched it with indifferent eyes. "Are you all right, Kinoichi-san?" one of the masked men asked. She nodded mechanically. "Can you tell us what happened?" She started retelling the events of the last 2 days. The Anbu had some more questions and she answered obediently. When they said they would be escorting them to Konoha, she wavered on her feet. The one with the bear mask had to support her. The exhaustion finally caught up with her. They had to carry her all the way home. Hokage's office. Sarutobi sighed tiredly when he finished reading the detailed report. It was quite a debacle for a simple C-rank mission, but clients sometimes tended to downplay the amount and wealth of their enemies to save on the mission cost. Rich merchants were the worst. The competition was vicious and they sought to cut their expenses whenever they could. And then they had the goal to play the injured party when disasters like this happened. The elderly Hokage wished he could just have every such idiot assassinated, but then Konoha would soon run out of clients. Usually the only thing he could do when a mission increased in difficulty was to charge higher prices, but self-important cheap-assed morons who got his ninja killed would regret it dearly. He had already sent a team to find the missing girl, and whoever paid that, if they indeed were such. Nobody got away with killing the shinobi of Konoha. Specialists were currently busy with the bodies, trying to discern where they came from. He tried to tell himself that it could have been worse. Still, 2 fresh gen in debt and a crippled was a pretty bad outcome, no matter how he looked at it. He forced his thoughts to turn to more positive matters, like what to do with the surviving girl. He picked the files of the current genin and started to study them. Later. Tenzo fully expected to be sent on a mission when he was suddenly summoned to the Hokage's office, so he took his battle gear. He was therefore surprised when the aged village leader motioned for him to come closer. He looked at his superior in askance, waiting for him to speak. "Tell me, Tenzo, is Naruto ready for field duty?" Training grounds. Tenzo arrived at the meeting point with time to spare. He used it to reminisce on recent events. When the Hokage had asked him whether Naruto was ready, he panicked for a moment. What did Sarutobi want with his little boy? But he had to truthfully admit that his young student was now safely on genin level. Then the professor told him he wanted to put him on a team and make Tenzo their sensei. Saying he was surprised would be an understatement. He had never thought he would be in charge of his own genin squad, but then 4 years ago he wouldn't have believed he would end up raising a child. Well, life was full of surprises, and this one wasn't entirely unwelcome. Though he might want to wait with the final verdict until he met his team in person. Graveyard. Hana stood silently in front of a new tombstone. It had been only 3 days since she had been released from the hospital and 2 since her teammate's funeral. Their sensei couldn't attend, he was still bedridden. She had been shocked when she had heard that he would never regain full use of his arm again. She knew it meant the end of his ninja career. She knew she was being illogical, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it was partially her fault. If she could detect the enemies sooner, if she were with her team when the attack happened, if she were stronger, if she were a better medic. The list went on and on. Half of the time she doubted if she was worthy of calling herself Kunoichi. She had seriously considered quitting many times for the last week, but she couldn't bring herself to actually do so, although that might have been just her fear of her mother's reaction to such news. Her mother was a strong woman, always knowing what to do, never backing off from a challenge, never taking any crap from anybody. Hana wished she could be more like her. If her mother ever found out just how weak her daughter was, she would be extremely disappointed and let her opinion be known in a forceful manner. Hana sighed. If she wasn't strong now, it didn't mean she couldn't become stronger. She resolved to devote her life to make it happen. She had thought she would have more time to prepare before she'll have to re-enter active duty, but then a message arrived saying she had been placed on a new squad. For a moment she had been tempted to refuse, but then she remembered her earlier resolve. If she wants to become stronger, she should begin now. Yet she felt very uncomfortable having to face new teammates so soon after losing her old ones. She had no desire to form new bonds when the wounds from the old ones being torn were still raw. But she couldn't back off now. She'll have to go and smile at strange people while her friends are lying dead on the ground. She looked up at the sky and noticed the hour. She should better be going. It wouldn't do to be late for her very first team meeting. She turned to leave, her 3 silent companions following the steps. Somewhere downtown. She was ecstatic. After all the time she was finally placed on a new squad. She couldn't wait to see who her new teammates were going to be. She hoped they wouldn't be jerks like her old ones, who just went on with their lives and left her behind. They barely remembered to visit her in the hospital while she was still recovering. Not that she hated them, but they never became particularly close. They were both spoiled kids from major clans, talented and among the best at the academy, while she was just a simple girl from a no-name family with no particular talent. Her only remarkable skill was in handling her kodachi her cousin had given her. She also taught her how to wield it. The short sword had become her love and pride. She polished it thoroughly, tested the sharpness of the blade, and then sheathed it. She donned her customary ninja gear and set off to the training grounds. She couldn't wait to start a new era of her life. Tenzo's home. Naruto couldn't sleep with excitement the night before. He had been even more hyper than usual ever since he had heard that he might become a real ninja. Sure, he first had to pass the genin test, but he was confident he could do it. Naturally it turned out to be harder than he imagined. He shuddered when he remembered it. Ninja Academy, 2 days earlier. Naruto had never been at the academy before and he looked around in amazement. Never mind there wasn't much to see, every hallway, every closed door seemed to hold countless secrets of aspiring shinobi education, and he couldn't help but wonder what skills he would have learned, what adventures he would have gone through, what friends and rivals he would have made had he attended here. But his musings were soon cut short as they arrived at a particular door. Tenzo stopped and knocked. "Come in," someone called. They entered a room. It was a standard classroom with a blackboard and rows of desks, only students were missing. Behind the teacher's desk was sitting a young man with grayish hair. "Hello," he smiled in greeting. "You must be Uzumaki Naruto. Pleased to meet you. I am Mizuki. I will be proctoring your test today." The teacher's politeness seemed forced, but it was better than what Naruto was used to. "Pleased to meet you too," he replied. "Well then. If you are prepared, take a seat and we shall begin the written portion." Written test. Naruto cringed inwardly. No matter how much Tenzo tutored him, book knowledge was never his forte. But he wouldn't back off. Not when his dream was within his reach. He put on a brave facade and sat down. Mizuki handed him a sheet of paper and a pen. "You have an hour to complete it. You may begin now." Naruto turned the paper over and started reading the first question. It was hard, but he felt like he should know this, unfortunately the answer eluded him. He moved on to the second one. It was slightly easier. He started scribbling down what little he remembered. The hour passed in a similar fashion. Naruto managed to answer around half of the questions, some of them he knew, others he deduced. And where both failed, he just made something up and hoped some of it might hit close to the mark. He could just pray it would be enough to pass. "Time's up," announced Mizuki and collected his test sheet. He briefly scanned it and looked vaguely pleased at something. Naruto just wished he knew whether it was his success or failure. "Now comes thrown weapon accuracy." Naruto perked up. That was something he excelled at, even if he said so himself. They arrived at the target range. Mizuki handed him a handful of practice kunai. "Am I supposed to throw these?" Naruto scowled. Of course, Mizuki said. Would you prefer to throw stones instead? Yes, the examinee confirmed. These are completely blunt and unbalanced. And are they even steel? They look like they'd shatter if I threw them too hard. So the standard academy equipment isn't good enough for you? Mizuki asked sarcastically. I'm afraid that's all you'll get here. If that's so, I understand why do the Jounin senseis always complain about new graduates, Tenzo stated his opinion. These are really inferior. Your poor students cannot possibly gain any accuracy working with those. Tell that to the council, Mizuki retorted. They refused to raise our equipment budget again. I'm afraid those are all we have. Then it's good I packed my own, Naruto smiled reaching into his pouch. He then proceeded to throw his kunai and shuriken at the targets. He hit every one of them, only a handful went slightly off-center. Mizuki for a moment looked like he swallowed a lemon, but quickly corrected his facial expression. He wrote down Naruto's scores. You passed this one, he announced. Now we proceed to the Taijutsu exam. He had to spar against Mizuki. The man wasn't taking it easy on him, but Naruto was used to getting worse from Anko. Mizuki had to admit he was good enough to pass. The last portion was ninjutsu. When he was asked to perform kawarimi, he switched with Mizuki. The proctor had been startled and angered, but he had to admit it was a successful attempt. When performing henge he turned into Anko minus her coat. Mizuki was staring for a full minute before Tenzo decided that enough was enough and shook him awake. The teacher had to wipe the blood from his nose before he declared Naruto's attempt passable. The last obstacle before his becoming genin was the Bunshin no. He still couldn't do its most basic version properly, but he knew its upgrades. He quickly formed a hand seal and silently summoned a couple of Kage Bunshin. They appeared beside him and gave Mizuki a high five. That wasn't the correct hand seal sequence, Mizuki pointed out. But it gave the correct result, Naruto defended. Mizuki looked like he wanted to disagree, but he couldn't come up with a sound argument. You passed, he decided. Congratulations, Uzumaki, you are now officially a shinobi of Konohagakure. Here is your aid. He handed him a rectangular piece of metal with the engraved leaf symbol fastened on a dark blue piece of cloth. Naruto took it reverently and carefully fastened it around his forehead. Then he sprung into a victorious dance. Yay, I did it, I did it. Calm down, Naruto, Tenzo chastised him, you're making a spectacle. Who cares? I did it. I did it. Tenzo sighed. When his young charge got into one of these moods, there were precious few things that could make him stop. You'll give the ninja of Konoha a bad name. That made the boy pause. Before he could come up with a reply, Tenzo pressed his advance. And if you do so, I won't buy you ramen. It was an underhanded tactic, but it was dependable. Tenzo used it strictly as a last resort since it presented too much of a strain on his budget. But he felt the situation warranted it. Naruto forcibly calmed himself. I'll be good, he promised. They started towards Ichiraku's, Naruto's every step bouncing with barely suppressed excitement. Back at Tenzo's apartment. Naruto was brought out of his reverie by the sight of the clock. Was it that late already? He put on his sandals and utility belt and fastened the belt with his brand new ninjato over his blue and black jacket with orange trimming. Then he started roof hopping towards the training grounds. He wouldn't live it down if he started his ninja career by being late. Training grounds. Tenzo was awoken from his musings by the sound of approaching footsteps. His students were coming. And it looked like they decided to show up at the same time. He jumped down from the tree. Time to put the show on the road. Chapter 4. The Genin Test. The team gathered under a tree. Tenzo eyed them curiously. His two new charges so far both were and weren't what he expected from reading their profiles. But he won't judge them until he gets to know them better. So, ladies and gentlemen, he started, now that we are all here, we should begin with the introductions. I guess I should go first myself. So for those who don't know me yet, my name is Tenzo and I'm your new sensei. I specialize in ninjutsu and… Now you, he pointed to a slim girl in a short purple kimono. She was trying to keep a solemn demeanor, but her excitement shone through. I am Yuzuki Haderu, she began. I specialize in it as well, she pointed to the sword handle visible behind her shoulder. Her deep purple ponytail whipped around her head. I want to someday become as good as my cousin. I wish I could be such an awesome kunoichi as her. Why do you want to be so awesome? The other girl scoffed derogatorily. She was a muscular brunette clad in black shorts, red form-fitting sleeveless top and beige leather vest with fur on its hems. She also had two long red triangles running down her cheeks and was accompanied by 3 gray wolfish dogs. She also seemed to be spreading an aura of gloom, which her new teammates valiantly resisted. Haderu scowled at her. You think you're already awesome, clan brat. Enough, Tenzo cut them off before an argument could start. You're a team now, so act like it. And for those who don't know what it entails, that means no fighting each other. Understood? Nobody said a word. That's good. Now let's get back to the introductions. Why don't you go next? He pointed to the dog girl. My name is Inyazuka Hana. I specialize in my clan's techniques and medicine. I just want to be good. Tenzo wondered what it was she wanted to say originally. And now the last one, he pointed to his charge. Naruto nearly jumped with excitement. I am Uzumaki Naruto. I'm good at ninjutsu and taijutsu too, and I want to learn, but I'm not good at it and I want to. Slow down, Squirt, Hana interrupted. Nobody's interested in your ramblings. Have you even started the academy yet? What? Naruto shouted insults. If we weren't banned from fighting, I'd show you just what a ninja I am. Silence, the two of you, Tenzo commanded. Hana, I know what has happened to you, but please try to be more tolerant. It may be news to you, but you aren't the only one with a bad experience. I know it's still too soon, but you'll have to deal with it, otherwise it will disrupt your progress. Hana just scowled. Who was he to tell her that? And her new teammates, she just couldn't stand their happy carefree attitudes. They were such children, especially the short boy. It didn't help at all that he reminded her of Jubei a bit. But Jubei was dead, his life leaving him under her hands, and this brat here was very much alive, annoying her with his chipper attitude. She wanted to wring his neck. Now the introductions are over, we'll go on to the next order of business, and this is your team's test. Naruto looked at him startled, Hadaru attentively, Hana just stared at the ground. A little more enthusiasm wouldn't hurt, he advised her. She scowled but turned to him. As the girls present know, every new team is being given a test to see whether they are suited to be ninja or should be sent back to the academy, in your case to the reserves. Those tests vary from sensei to sensei. I don't know what sort of tests you already passed, but here is mine. Here is a scroll. It contains the information on what you'll have to do to pass. I'm going to hide it somewhere in this training area. You may start searching for it in 10 minutes exactly. And remember, from the moment the test starts, you are in hostile territory. He melted into the nearest tree. The expressions on the girls' faces were hilarious. He didn't linger long. He had a scroll to hide. He took off, all the while wondering how his genin would do. Back with the team. So how are we going to go about this? Naruto asked. I'm not sure I want to give it a go, Hana muttered. Her teammates glared at her. Of course, the clan princess can afford to fail, Hadaru huffed. There's no way they wouldn't give her another team. The three dogs growled menacingly. How'd it, girls, Naruto snapped. Have you already forgotten what Tenzo-sensei said? No fighting. Besides, we have the test to worry about. Knowing Tenzo, it isn't going to be easy. Do you know him? Hadaru asked. Yes, Naruto confirmed. What can you tell us about him? Hana seemed to have overcome her funk and went down to business. He's very good. I've never seen him in a real battle, but he's strong and fast, and he can really use his sword. He has water, earth and wood ninjutsu. Wood? Hana asked, surprised. Wasn't that Shodai's unique ability? Yes, Naruto confirmed, but it isn't so unique anymore. I can't really tell you more about this. Panter want? Hadaru inquired. Shouldn't we get back to business? Naruto avoided answering. Tenzo will probably hide the scroll in a tree somewhere, but then it could be underground as well or, well, elsewhere. Thanks for the help, Inuzuka muttered sarcastically. I have yet to see you offer some, Naruto retorted. That's true, Hadaru added. Can your dog sniff out the scroll? Is there any doubt? Hana took offense. They are Inuzuka clan ninja dogs. They can smell anything from several miles away. That's well, then, the youngest member of the squad grinned. We'll find the scroll in no time. We, brat. I'll find it, Hana scowled. It was becoming a habit of hers. Calm down, both of you, Hadaru interrupted them. We are supposed to be a team, remember? Yes, Hana scoffed. The 10 minutes are almost up. So how do we start? Let's just split up and divide the area to search, the purple-haired girl suggested. That way we can search it through faster. I don't know, Naruto mused. Tenzo said we're in hostile territory. We should stick together in case of an attack. Hana stiffened. Those words brought back memories of the ambush. With them, the doubts and self-accusations returned with a vengeance. If they had just stuck together. Hey, Hana, what's up with you? The boy asked. She woke up from her reverie. Nothing, she stated with a glare, daring him to disagree. Are you sure? He did it anyway, with that disturbingly cute concerned look on that childish face of his. Yes. And we should get moving. The test starts just about. Now. She stood up and gestured to her dogs. They obediently took the front and inhaled the air. The middle one barked. This way, Hana commanded and took off. The team followed her. They ran on the ground for a couple hundred steps, then they took to the treetops. Naruto was surprised that Hana's dogs jumped on the branches too. You taught them to climb trees? He asked in amazement. What next, would you teach them to meow? What did you just say? Hana barked. That you are retraining your dogs to become cats, the shortest genin clarified. Hana stopped on the spot. Never, ever insult an Inyazuka's dog, she growled. Okay, I apologize, Naruto threw his arms up in a peace gesture. I was just joking. I didn't mean anything bad. You better, the dog mistress advised him, because it's a stupid joke and I don't appreciate such. Look out, Hateru shouted. It was the only warning they had before a kunai with an already lit exploding tag landed in the middle of their group. They leapt away to avoid the blast. That had been too close for comfort. The kimono-clad girl unsheathed her blade. Some instinct made her slash behind her. Her sword cut into a wooden figurine with a smiling face and lodged itself in its chest. She tried to pull it out, but it proved to be an impossible task. Then she had to abandon it altogether because another wooden man came at her from behind. It was fast. She somehow avoided its first strike but found herself in the path of another blow. She braced herself for the impact. It never came. The blue and black blur suddenly appeared and slammed into the doll, knocking it off the branch. Are you alright? Naruto asked. She nodded. Where is Hana? The Inyazuka and her dogs were currently battling two figurines. They were holding their own, but they couldn't gain any advantage either. I'll take the one on the left and you the one on the right, Naruto decided. He didn't wait for her response and charged. Oddhead, Hateru muttered. Then she jumped into the fray as well. Their attack lacked coordination, but their superior numbers prevailed eventually. But they had to admit grudgingly that they could have done much better. No more goofing off, Hana decided. We'll have to take it seriously from now on, which means no jokes, Naruto. You just needed cheering up, the blonde replied defensively. Spare it for later, the Kunoichi advised. Now we have to be alert. This is what we'll do. I'll take the point with my dogs and search for the scroll and more enemies. You two will be covering my flanks. Hateru will be on the right and Naruto on the left. Understood. They both confirmed. Let's go then. This time they were going slower. They strained all their senses to detect another ambush in time. But none happened. Suddenly Hana stopped. We're close, she whispered. Where is it? Naruto asked. That way, she pointed straight ahead, but I saw a wire. There are traps. I expected nothing less, the short boy replied. I wouldn't try disarming them, that usually makes them spring. Bypassing them is a better option, but there's always something hidden. This requires extreme caution. No kidding, Hana agreed. His scent is all over this place. I doubt there even is a safe way in. Then we'll just have to make one, Naruto proposed. And how would you accomplish that? Hateru questioned. I'll make clones and send them in, the aspiring shinobi explained his plan. A lot of them would be destroyed, but eventually one will get through. And you can make that many corporeal clones? Hana doubted. Yes, the boy confirmed. Look. He lifted his hands in a familiar seal, and soon the branches around them were obscured in smoke. When it cleared, 100 little blonde ninja appeared. Wow, Hateru whistled. Idiot, Hana chastised him. Who told you to do it now in here? You could have sprung a trap and alerted our enemies. The youth looked ashamed. What's done is done, the dog user continued. We'll go with your plan, but try not to trip any traps if you can avoid it. Roger, Naruto said. Then he motioned for a clone to begin. The replica slowly started forward. It took a few steps before stopping to study something on the ground. Then he jumped high. He landed in a crouch and was promptly destroyed by a rising wooden spike. Second clone followed in his footsteps and met the same end. The third tried jumping further. He fell into a pit with spikes on the bottom. Fourth clone found a log somewhere. He threw it on the place where his predecessors faced their demise. Spikes came again from the ground, but there was nobody to hit. The shadow clone ran atop the log and then jumped over the pit. He was surprised when he landed safely. Unfortunately, when he made a single step, his foot was caught in a noose and he was hauled upwards. He hung there upside down for a moment before disappearing in a puff of smoke. It took most of the clones and far more time than they had anticipated, but eventually one of the replicas got his hand on the scroll and threw it to the original before a blast note destroyed him. Finally, Naruto rejoiced. Let's open it, Hateru demanded. It could be another trap, Hana pointed out. You're right, Naruto agreed and handed the suspicious scroll to one of his few remaining clones. It wasn't a trap and the clone opened it without any trouble. What does it say? Hateru inquired. The clone gave her the scroll before dispelling itself. She quickly read through its contents, Hana looking over her shoulder. That doesn't sound hard, she commented. Just deliver it to the other side of the village. But we have a time limit and we're still in enemy territory, the single male of the team reminded them. That could be a problem, the purple-haired Kunoichi agreed. You bet it will be, Naruto remarked. So who should carry the scroll? Obvious choice is the strongest, but that's kinda too obvious. We could also try the fastest, but I personally think it should be the sneakiest. But Tenzo already knows that trick. So what do we do? A short while later. The team exited the training grounds. They were surprised when nobody attacked them on the way out. They agreed it was probably because they had already fought it in the forest once and their test proctor didn't want to be repetitive. It just meant they would have to be extra careful in the village. They opted to walk through the busiest streets. It was slow, but they figured that they wouldn't be assaulted in a crowd of civilians. Their most pressing concern was now making it in time. Hana walked at the point looking feral and scowling. Her 3 canines surrounded her with their teeth bared. People were giving the group a wide berth. The normalcy of the city life was slowly lulling them into letting their guards down, but they resisted it with all their might. Unfortunately that wasn't very much. Therefore they missed the drunkard stumbling through the crowd until she bumped into Haru. "Sry, girl, didn't mean to," the woman slurred. "Nothing happened," the girl replied, trying to pry the wino's dirty hands off her. "Really didn't mean to," the drunk repeated. I know, lady. Now please let go of me." Haru was beginning to lose patience, but then the woman suddenly let go of her. "Thanks," Kinoichi muttered. The drunkard shot them one last glance, and the crowd swallowed her. Naruto noticed something in her face, something disturbingly familiar. Was it a hint of a smirk? Anko. He realized. What? Hana didn't understand his sudden outburst. "The scroll. Do you still have it?" He turned to Haru. "Of course She stole it." The purple-haired sword wielder was furious. "She's gone now," her young teammate observed. "What do we do?" "Sniff her out, of course," Hana proclaimed. "That might not be that easy," Naruto pointed out. "Never underestimate an Inuzuka's nose," Hana smirked and without further ado started tracking. "Never underestimate Anko," the blonde corrected, but his female teammates paid him no heed. Unfortunately it turned out Naruto was right, it really wasn't so easy. The trail led right through a puddle of spilled perfume. All 4 Inuzukas started sneezing. "Told you so," Naruto couldn't resist saying. Hana shot him a murderous glare. "Elsewhere." The figure ran over the rooftops. He paused for a brief moment, scanned his surroundings, then took off again in a different direction. He was close now. His target was just a few streets over, moving through the daily traffic completely unaware of its pursuer. He sped up for a bit, then halted. There, target in sight. He crouched down to devise an attack strategy. Ango shop. Anko sat down in the comfortable chair and stretched her legs lazily. She inhaled the heavenly smell of the dumpling stick in her hand, then bit it down and savored its taste. She felt like she deserved the treat, no matter that her task had been ridiculously easy. The kiddies didn't even know what had hit them. Well, to be honest, Naruto had recognized her, but he had been too late. She had already disappeared in the crowd. Too bad that she didn't get to see their cute little faces when they found out, but nobody got all their wishes. Oh well, at least there always was her precious trusty Dango to console her. "Hey, lady," an obnoxious voice rudely brought her out of her fantasies. She turned to look at the perpetrator. It was a rather good-looking man, if it wasn't for the lecherous smirk on his face. She immediately took a strong dislike towards him. "What are you doing here all alone?" "None of your business," she hissed, clearly indicating she wasn't interested. He was either very stupid or very brave because he didn't back off. Her guess was on the first. "Beautiful young ladies like you shouldn't be sitting alone," the bloke started sitting down beside her. She narrowed her eyes dangerously. "I'm no lady and you'll be very sorry if you don't get lost now." Most people would be running for their lives before she finished her sentence, but not this guy. My, aren't we in a sour mood tonight," the man chided. "But don't despair, I'm going to cheer you up." She had enough. She punched the sucker. He fell to the ground clutching his wounded cheek. Strong hands suddenly grabbed her. "Military police. You're arrested for public brawling." She froze. She hadn't even realized they were there. And Konoha's police force generally didn't like her. She was in trouble. Then she felt a hand wandering under her coat. "What are you?" She started when the hand suddenly withdrew. She caught a glimpse of something sailing through the air. The scroll. A hand caught it in the air. She noticed the whirl of a long brown ponytail, then the person melted into the crowd. She kicked the 2 policemen. They disappeared in twin puffs of smoke. Shadow clones. The man who had hit on her was gone as well. Figures. "No." She shouted. She couldn't believe that she had been fooled by such a lame trick. She ran into the street and gave chase, but the culprits had masked their tracks well. City Park. "Did we make it?" a breathless Naruto asked. Though he could boast the greatest stamina of all the squad, he also possessed the shortest legs and had to work hard to keep up with his female companions. "Yes, you did," Tenzo answered, appearing from a tree. And with a minute to spare. "We didn't have to go so fast," the youngest genin complained. "Shut up," Hana suggested. "Where are you?" an enraged female voice shouted. Calm down, Anko, they've already finished. Game's over, the Mokuten user said. I'll get you next time, the snake mistress promised. Well now everybody's here, we can evaluate your work, Tenzo announced. The three genin tensed. We'll start at the beginning. You had a full 10 minutes to prepare a strategy, but you wasted it arguing instead. That's just the sort of thing that would get you killed on a real mission. The threesome looked abashed. And then you just rushed forward without a real plan. You didn't even look out for trouble. Again, you would have been dead. This sort of recklessness can be expected, though not acceptable, from a fresh genin like Naruto, but you girls had been in the field before, you really should have known better. Now they look downtrodden. Then the attack. You were arguing among yourselves instead of paying attention to your surroundings. Do I have to say what could that cost you? Though on a positive note, you showed something akin to teamwork during the battle, but it could have been already too late. Well, what do you have to say for yourselves? Well, do better next time, Naruto offered. In real life, there is no next time, Tenzo reminded him. The boy returned to studying his feat. Let's move forward. Disarming the traps. Naruto, you acted without the consent of your comrades. Do you think you are the team leader? No, the little blonde answered. Then you can't afford to do such a thing. It doesn't matter that it worked this time, it could land you in a world of trouble anytime. Although I suppose telling you this has little effect and you'll have to learn the hard way. The boy refrained from answering. Then comes the second part of the test. You finally got it in your head that you have to move in formation, but you weren't careful enough. What does it say about your situational awareness if you get pickpocketed so easily? Naruto pointedly glanced at Anko. She scowled back. But getting the scroll back like that was ingenious. Not many people can pull one over Anko like that. May I ask how you managed to locate her? Trade secret, Naruto declared with a foxy grin. He had transformed a couple of his shadow clones into bugs and hid them within the scroll. When it had been stolen, one of them dispelled, letting him know where Anko had stopped. Did it have something to do with the clone keeping watch from the rooftops? Tenzo guessed. I thought I lost that one, Anko said. Not really, Naruto answered. Then how? Anko inquired. Now, the boy smirked. What kind of ninja would I be if I revealed my secrets? Well then, keep your secrets, the older man decided. The last part, your action against Anko. Nice teamwork there. I guess there is yet some hope for you. The three genin looked at him in askance. Congratulations, he smiled, you three passed. Yay. Naruto jumped in elation. Hot air punched the air. Hana just smiled, her dogs barked and wagged their tails. You can take the rest of the day off, get to know each other and enjoy life while you still can, advised their sensei, because tomorrow your training starts. Meet me at the training grounds at sunrise and don't be late. His proclamation did nothing to sour his genin's mood. Well, they'll find out what they've gotten into soon enough. Konoha Hospital. Hana visited her sensei. He technically wasn't her sensei anymore, but she still thought of him as such. I've been placed on a new team, Yagi-sensei, she announced after the formalities were out of the way. Well, that's good. But isn't it too soon? I feel like it is, the girl admitted. But I guess it had to happen sooner or later, so why not just deal with it sooner? But approach there, her old sensei smiled approvingly. So how are they? They're not them, she answered. Of course not, the bedridden man agreed. They can never be. I know that myself. But what are they like otherwise? Our new sensei seems to be a no-nonsense kind of guy. He gave us a tough test, much tougher than yours, but we passed, the dog mistress told him. And your teammates? Yagi wanted to know. Well, first there's Hateru. She seemed like an airhead at first, but she turned out to be actually somewhat competent. Then there's the little kid, Naruto. He looks barely old enough to start the academy, but he knows his business. I feared he would be one of the snotty prodigy types, but he behaves like a hyper-idiot. He reminds me of Jubei a bit. But he's not, the man stated. Exactly. I know how hard it is for you, but you can't get stuck in the past, he advised not for the first time. Your new team sounds actually quite likable. Learn to appreciate them for who they are instead of comparing them with the dead. I know, sensei, and I'm trying, she sighed. Honestly. But it's not as easy as it sounds. Isn't that the truth, he said sagely. I've been in the same spot before. I pulled through, but I've seen many who didn't. And believe me, you don't want to end up like them. A faraway look entered his eyes. You really don't want to end up like them. I don't, she confirmed. I'll try comparing the squirt with my little brother instead. Thinking of it, they are somewhat alike. Now that's the spirit, her sensei smiled. And now, don't waste any more of your time on an old geezer like me. Go and catch up with your new teammates and family. Thank you. I think I'll do just that. She left the hospital room with a lighter heart. The tree hideout. Naruto was for once just lounging around, appreciating the quiet of the sunny afternoon. He made genin, he had a team, everything was perfect in the world. It took him a while to realize he wasn't alone. "Tenzo," he greeted the newcomer. "Or should I call you sensei now?" "Just when we're in public," his guardian answered. "So, how do you like your new team?" "Hana's too gloomy," the foxy boy said, "but Haru's fine." "Don't be harsh to her," the older man defended her. "She had something bad happen to her recently. She isn't over it yet." "What happened to her?" Naruto was curious. "It's not my place to tell. You should be worrying about the team's training instead." "What's to worry about? I've trained with you for years." Tenzo just smiled enigmatically. Naruto started to worry. "Haru's home." She wasn't too surprised when she found her cousin waiting for her. "So how was your new team's first meeting?" the older Kunoichi asked. "About as good as expected," the younger girl replied. "We passed the test, by the way." "Congratulations, then," the woman smiled. "Your new sensei isn't wasting any time." "Who is it, anyway?" "Some guy named Tenzo." "Tenzo?" Yuga wondered. "I'm surprised they gave him a team." "Why?" Haru demanded. "Is there something wrong with him?" "No," the older girl shook her head, "you're in good hands, but he already had an apprentice. A young boy." "That sounds like one of my new teammates." "So how do you like them?" Yuga wanted to know. "Are they stuffed up pricks like your old team?" "I don't think so," she answered. "At least Naruto isn't. I'm not so sure about Hana." "Well, I don't really know her, but she didn't strike me as the type," Yuga said. "She is probably just depressed now." "What about?" the younger girl wanted to know. "Not my place to tell, but it's a sound reason to be depressed. Now we should go celebrate your success, because if Tenzo hasn't suddenly gone soft, you won't feel like celebrating for a long time to come." Hokage's office. Sarutobi was reading the report his analysts have provided with a frown. It stated that one of the slain ninja had been from Iwa, the other from Kiri. So far, what can be expected from a bunch of. But the part about their equipment was worrisome. Their weapons have been crafted in the same workshop and it wasn't one Konoha's experts recognized. It might mean nothing. Somebody might have just opened a new store and served all the clientele. But it could also be more sinister. There might even be a new village being founded and they had already proven hostile towards Konoha. And this had to happen at the same time some disturbing info came about the Uchiha clan. He didn't want to believe they were really disloyal, but then they have always been power-hungry and arrogant to boot. For a countless time he wished there was someone younger worrying about this instead of him. But it wasn't to be. His successor got himself killed and his 3 students turned out useless in their own unique ways. In his worst moments he even considered just giving the hat to Danzo, but it never lasted long. He sighed and started writing a message. He'll send Jiraiya to investigate. He just prayed it won't turn out to be too much trouble for his old bones to handle. Chapter 5. First mission. The fugitive was stealthily crawling through the underbrush. It had been a long time since he last spotted his pursuers, but he didn't dare to lower his guard one bit. They were both skilled and persistent, they've proven it enough already. One mistake and he would be captured again. And then. Just thinking about it gave him the creeps. A twig snapped. That was nearby. Was it them? He carefully looked around, remaining hidden. Nothing. Even his sensitive ears couldn't pick a sound of pursuit. Yet he didn't allow himself to think he was safe. He resumed his travels. An oppressive scent suddenly hit his nose. A dog. That was bad. He darted from his hiding place just in time to avoid the snapping jaws. And ran straight into the arms of another hunter. Forest of Konoha. "Hi!" Naruto screamed. Sharp teeth bit into his hand and he barely avoided a claw swipe that would have taken out his eye. "Stop it, you beast," he shouted, but the cat just scratched harder. He held it at arm's length, but unfortunately it wasn't far enough for him. He still got 4 bloody scratches on his face to accompany his birthmarks. He squeezed the animal in anger. It hissed and dug its claws into his forearm. He reflexively dropped it. Before it could escape again, Haru appeared and swiped it off the ground. "What were you doing to the poor kitty?" she chastised him. "Poor kitty?" the boy doubted. "More like a rabid tiger." "Well, his name is Tiger," Haru pointed out, petting her captive's black fur. The tomcat was actually purring in her arms. Naruto couldn't believe it. Mission success, Hana grinned. This had gone well. She remembered how her original team used to struggle with this assignment. And Haru's have done even worse. But now it seemed like a breeze. Compared with the training Tenzo-sensei put them through, this was a walk in the park. After their team was formed, they slipped into a routine. They would meet every morning at sunrise and go through the personal drills. They had to run around the training grounds, do push-ups, sit-ups and squats until they thought they'd just drop down any time, worked on their taijutsu skills and chakra control. They thought they knew tree walking before, but Tenzo quickly corrected them. If you can't do it in the heat of a battle, it doesn't count, he said, and proceeded to prove the truth in this statement. They had struggled at first, but now they all could spar on a water surface without breaking a sweat. They also started working on their elemental affinities, but they haven't gotten any further than finding out their chakra natures and being explained the basic exercises. Hana had fire, hot air lightning and Naruto wind. Afternoons varied. Sometimes they would take a D-rank mission, sometimes they spared against each other, other times they teamed up against their sensei or one of his friends. Afterwards they would discuss the fights and think of a possible better strategy, then give it another go, rinse and repeat. What they dreaded the most were the mock missions. Tenzo would give them an assignment of the same kind typical C-rank missions were and then let them work on it on their own. The objective sounded simple, but something always went terribly wrong. Usually it was an enemy ninja appearing out of nowhere. They hadn't done a whole lot of them, but they gained a huge knowledge of most common ninja mishaps nevertheless. Some afternoons and evenings were reserved for their individual training. Hana spent them studying with her aunt, and her veterinary studies were coming along nicely. Haru practiced her swordsmanship with her cousin every time Yuga wasn't on a mission. Then she would just practice her kata or study theory. Naruto was working with Tenzo on his and sometimes ninjutsu. They returned home every night bruised, beaten and completely exhausted, but every one of them improved by leaps and bounds. They also became a true team. Although they haven't completely opened up to each other yet, they were now feeling comfortable in each other's presence. The constant work helped Hana overcome her depression and she started smiling after the first month. All in all, life seemed good for them. Mission room. They returned Tora safely to his owner and watched a poor cat get almost smothered by its overly enthusiastic daimyo's wife. Even Naruto, who had been grumbling about damned furballs from hell the whole way back, felt a pang of sympathy at that sight. Another mission success, the Hokage commented. Your team seems to be doing fine, Tenzo. Are they ready for a C-rank mission? Tenzo hesitated only for a moment. His team had a fair understanding of cooperation and both the girls have already undertaken such missions. Naruto was still young and inexperienced, but he was also resilient and resourceful, and Tenzo had full confidence that he'll pull through. And it had been 2 months since the formation of his squad and he had been thinking of asking for one for the last week or so. Yes, they are, he answered confidently. Excellent, the Sandaime smiled. Here is your assignment. It's a search and rescue mission in the Grey Mist Mountains. You'll be looking for a group of missing prospectors. The group failed to return when they were scheduled to, and though that it itself wouldn't be too worrisome, a local hunter found a bear-eating human remains in the area. The ring on its finger and a scar identified the hand as belonging to one of them without a doubt. You are tasked to find them and bring them safely to civilization. In case they are already dead, you are to determine their fate and give a report about it to their superiors. If you find their possessions, they want you to bring them too, especially any maps and mineral samples. Details are in this scroll. Is everything clear? Yes, Hokage-sama, Tenzo answered. Good. You may leave now. Tenzo's apartment. Naruto was bursting with excitement. Finally he was going on his first real ninja mission. The D ranks didn't count. Just like every new genin he had been terribly disappointed when he got his first one, but he learned to cope and accept them as necessary evil. After all he needed a certain number of them before he was eligible for higher ranked ones. Yet he couldn't help but grumble every time he had to pull weeds, paint a fence or walk a dog. He didn't even want to think of the time he had to babysit a child older than him. But now he was going on a real mission. Maybe if they would perform well enough, they wouldn't have to do another D rank ever again. He realistically knew that it wasn't going to happen, but one could dream. He was now packing everything he thought he might need. If he didn't know a bit about storage seals, he would have needed a cart for it, but even now his backpack threatened to burst in the seams. Naruto had first learned about sealing when he was 6. Tenzo had been sent on a lengthy mission and he arranged for a friend to babysit. Kanu was a retired shinobi. He once used to be an Anbu, but a hit with a virus caused him pain attacks at odd times. The medics were completely stumped and couldn't figure out what the problem was, much less find a cure. He supposed he was luckier than those who had lost their limbs or lives in the line of duty, but it forced him to quit his career all the same. Now he made a living by making storage scrolls and exploding tags. He hadn't been too excited to have to watch over a kid and a notoriously hyper one to boot, but it hadn't been as bad as he had expected. He led Naruto to the training grounds, let him go through his routines, and settled down to draw his seals. After a while the boy became intrigued and inquired what he was doing. He replied he was making storage seals for shuriken. He fully expected the child to back off, but instead the little blonde was fascinated. That in turn intrigued him. Not many people were willing to study the delicate art of sealing nowadays unless they absolutely had to. And Kanu wasn't inclined to turn away a potential disciple. He started to explain the basic principles and Naruto listened attentively. He seemed to have talent. They soon got to painting his own seals. By the end of their 2-week stay together, the boy could seal a shuriken on his own. They continued their lessons even after Tenzo returned, though less frequently. Now the pupil knew not just basic storage seals, but could also make his own blast note. "What are you taking?" Tenzo asked. "There's no way you'll need all of these. Aren't you always drilling us on how we should be prepared for anything?" The genin replied with a raised eyebrow. "I confirm this, but that doesn't mean you have to take all your possessions on a mission. You have to learn to get by with just the basic provisions. If you carry all that, you'll be so tired you want to be able to complete the mission once we arrive in the mountains." Naruto seemed to consider this. "But how would I know what to leave behind? I don't know what I would need and what not." "You have to think," his guardian explained. "What kind of mission are we assigned?" "A search and rescue one," the boy answered. "Correct," Tenzo nodded. "And what else do you know?" "We'll be camping in the mountains. It's going to be cold and wet," the young ninja observed. "True. What else?" "It might take a long time," Naruto guessed. "True again. Is that all you can think of?" the older man inquired. "Well, there might be bears," he offered. "Even that is true. But can't you think of anything else?" Tenzo looked at him expectantly. "It is," Naruto sighed. "I'm missing something, aren't I?" "Yes," Tenzo nodded. "Think. Why was our team sent on the mission?" The blonde boy scratched his head. "Because we're awesome probably isn't the correct answer," he tried. "Too true," they answered with a chuckle. "It's because we are a free response team." "What does that mean?" Naruto wondered. "That means we can undertake any kind of mission," the team leader explained. "We have Hana as a tracker, medic and heavy hitter, close-range fighter. Then there's Hadaru as a fighter and information gatherer. You are a close to mid-range fighter, tracker and infiltration assassination type. I cover long-range fights and tough opponents. Do you get it now?" "Maybe," the blonde shrugged. "Are we going because we are theoretically able to deal with any situation, because anything can happen on this mission?" "You got it," Tenzo smiled. "We have no idea what's waiting there." The prospectors had guards. They weren't shinobi, but that doesn't mean they were pushovers. They might have been massacred by a superior force or squashed by an avalanche. No way to know what to expect until we get there. "I understand," Naruto nodded. "So how does it help me to decide what to take? Because it still sounds to me like I need everything." "I'll show you." In Yuzuka clan compound. She was leaving the village for the first time since that incident. She felt strangely reluctant to go. She couldn't help but fear something terrible was going to happen. She was scared she'd lose her new team just when she had grown to like them. She wanted to talk with her old sensei, but she couldn't find him. Her mother just advised her to get over it and be a proud Yuzuka. She knew Tsume was right. She even looked forward to seeing new places, but she couldn't help but worry. "Do you have a mission, sis?" a young voice asked. "Hiba," she exclaimed. "Already back from the academy?" "Of course, sis," the lad rolled his eyes. "It's nearly evening." "It is," Hana realized with surprise. She must have been lost in thoughts far longer than it seemed. "So you have a mission?" Her little brother was curious. "Yes," she nodded. "I'm leaving tomorrow early in the morning." "You're lucky," he whined. "When will I go on a mission?" "When you graduate, Kiba," she answered. "So do your homework properly or it'll never happen." "Of course I'll graduate," he took offense. "I'm an awesome ninja." She couldn't help but smile. "Well, I don't know. You're still stuck at the academy." "I won't be forever," he claimed. "And then you'll see. I'll make it then in no time," he declared with utmost certainty. "I'll hold you to your word," Hana smiled. "So where are you going, sis?" he wanted to know. "Or is it a secret?" "I don't know," she shrugged. "We aren't supposed to talk about ongoing missions with civilians." "Come on," Kiba pleaded. "Sorry, Kiba," she shook her head, "I can't tell." "No fair," he pouted. "Can I at least go with you to the gates?" He unleashed the puppy eyes of doom on her. "Why not?" she agreed. It would be nice to have somebody there to bid her farewell. After all, it might be even the last time they'd see each other. She suppressed the depressing thoughts. "But don't be late. We aren't waiting for anybody." Hadaru's apartment. Hadaru was packing methodically. She had been only on a couple of C ranks before, but she had a fair idea what to expect from this one. Rain, cold and lots of camping in the wild. It didn't sound like it would be anything exciting, just a routine. But it would look good on her record and get her a step closer to finally becoming. Village gates. They were scheduled to meet at dawn. Naruto had been there for an hour already, he couldn't wait to hit the road. Tenzo and Hadaru arrived with a few minutes to spare. Hana was almost running late. "Hurry up or I'll just leave you behind," her voice came suddenly from nearby. "I don't want to miss my first mission with my new team." "I'm running, sis," a child's voice replied. "Too slow," Hana added. Then they rounded the corner and came into sight of Konoha's gates. Finally, Naruto greeted me. I was getting worried you won't make it. I'd have no trouble if that little twerp hadn't insisted on seeing me off, the dog mister said. I'm wounded, sis. I thought you wanted me here, the youth with two red fang-like marks of the Inyazuka clan on his cheeks answered. Would you introduce us? Of course, Hana replied. This is my younger brother Kiba. And those are my teammates, Tenzo-sensei, Yuzuki Haderu and Uzumaki Naruto. That is a ninja. Kiba remarked disbelievingly. He looks younger than me. Don't be rude, bro, Hana chastised him. And yes, he is a ninja. And not a bad one. I don't believe it, the younger Inyazuka stated. How old is he? 8, his sister answered. 8. Kiba couldn't believe his ears. I'm 8 too and I just started the academy. Now do you see why you have to study harder? The older Inyazuka asked rhetorically. If you two are quite finished, Tenzo interrupted, can we go? I would like to reach our destination by nightfall today. Yes, let's go, Hana agreed. So long, Kiba. See you. Well, whenever we return. And then they turned and walked through the gates. Their first adventure together was awaiting them. Near the Grey Mist Mountains. They had been running all day. Naruto had to work hard to keep up with his older and taller teammates, but his monster stamina allowed him to manage. But when they stopped for the night, he just fell down on the ground panting and refused to move until Tenzo threatened to eat his dinner. That made him get up and help set up the camp. So what's the plan for tomorrow? Haderu asked. What's there to plan? Naruto questioned. We don't know anything about them so we'll just have to go to the last place they were seen and start tracking. Do you have any idea how long ago that was? Hana asked. Naruto racked his memory. Over 3 months. You've got it, Tiny, the dog user confirmed. Even an Inyazuka can't follow a scent that old, especially considering the frequent downpours here. What about the arm, then? The blonde offered. That is a better idea, but I'm afraid it won't work as well. Hana shook her head. Why? Naruto didn't understand. She didn't have to answer. It started to rain. The following day. The morning dawned cold and gloomy. The mist that gave the mountains their name fell down thick and they couldn't see any further than a few steps. The peaks that had loomed ominously over them the day before disappeared from their sight completely. The team was following a narrow path, huddled in their warm traveling cloaks, Hana's dogs at the point, trying to catch scent of anything interesting. So far they caught only an unlucky hare which they promptly ate. They hoped they were going the right way. The map the clients provided wasn't very informative, only a roughly drawn sketch with a red cross, marking the place the expedition entered the range, and another where the arm was found. They were on the opposite sides of the mountains. Naruto found it strange that the mining company didn't have a better map of prospective ore sources. He asked Tenzo about it. They probably do, but they aren't showing it to anybody, the older man answered. Don't they want their people to be saved? The boy wondered. Oh, they do, they replied, but not at the price of their secrets falling into the hands of their competition. If there really is an ore lode, it can earn them a lot more money than they lose on a group of dead prospectors. Naruto considered the explanation. If there is so much money at stake, why didn't they hire a more experienced team? You'll find that rich people are unwilling to part even with a tiny portion of their wealth, the wood user explained. The company most likely doesn't expect their people to be still alive and hired us only for show. And I find it also believable that the expedition had sent them some report of their progress before they disappeared. If it is so, why didn't they tell us? It was something the blonde couldn't understand. Like I said, they don't want us to find their newest lode and possibly tell somebody else. That's sick, Naruto commented. Boy, you have yet to see anything, Tenzo remarked. They have been walking for hours. The fog had yet to lift. The pathway led them uphill. The trees around them changed. Instead of the lush forests they knew from the vicinity of Konoha, spiky conifers were now growing around them. Even the ever-present chirping of birds have slowly waned and only an occasional rustle of grass let them know that they weren't in a dead land. We should be close now, Tenzo announced when they entered a wide valley covered in strange mountain grass and flowers. According to this map, the arm has been found somewhere on the other side of this small plain, near the creek. They left the already dwindling path and crossed the meadow. It turned out to be a marshland in disguise, and Haderu grumbled about getting mud in her shoes. The 3 genin were eternally grateful to their sensei for his merciless drills in water walking. Hana sent her dogs to sniff out the area, but predictably they found nothing. What now? Haderu asked. Now we think about where an arm could have come from to end up here, Tenzo answered. From up there, Haderu pointed to the steep valley side. Or maybe it floated down the stream, Naruto suggested. That's more likely, Hana agreed. There are bushes, trees and boulders up the slope. Nothing as small as a human hand could have rolled through it. But the bear could have carried it from anywhere. And we aren't even sure we found the correct place. So we follow the brook upstream, Naruto said. You got it, kid, Inuzuka answered. They set off. The evening. They followed the creek until it turned into a small trickle. Nothing could have floated down this, hot air pointed out. Is it just me or are we fresh out of ideas? Naruto spoke. The fog was thick as ever and the nearing dusk stole what little light found its way through it. It seems like we won't find anything today, so let's just start a camp, Tenzo decided. His team was delighted to hear those words. Next morning it dawned bright and sunny. The four ninja looked around themselves in wonder. They found it hard to believe they were still in the same place. The oppressive mist from yesterday was completely gone and imposing mountain peaks stood around them tall and proud, bathing in the golden sunlight, silvery snow glittering on their tops. Azure sky reflected in a lake they have completely missed the evening before. It's beautiful, Naruto whispered reverently. It is, Tenzo agreed. You don't get to see such things near Konoha. I still remember when I saw the mountains for the first time. I had to pick my jaw from the ground as well. Can we climb up there and take a look around? The young blonde asked excitedly. I mean we might see something from the expedition from up there. I don't see why not, his guardian answered with a smile. It's not like we have a better plan anyway. And it might actually work, who knows. If not, then we'll just have to trek through the whole range until we find something. But that's a huge area, Hadaru almost panicked. That's true, their Jounin-sensei nodded. But such are the perils of shinobi life. And never forget, it could have been worse. The three genin winced when they remembered some of the mock missions they took during their training. Each of them started to count all the places an enemy could hide, name all the dangerous animals that could live here, and search for potential avalanche sites. Later. They had a good time at the nearest overpass. They encountered no trouble on the way there, only some stones giving out under their feet, but their finely honed reflexes allowed them to find purchase before they could slide down the slope. The vastness of the gray mist mountains opened before their eyes. They could see peaks, valleys, creeks, ravines, lakes, meadows, waterfalls, boulders and forests, but they couldn't see a single sign of the missing expedition. What now? Naruto asked dejectedly. He seemed to only now realize how much ground they would have to cover. We'll search the next valley, Hana answered. And then the next. And then the next. And next. And again. Do you get it, Squirt? The boy grimaced. Unfortunately, yes. We'd better begin then. Hey, what's that? Naruto pointed at the peak across a steep valley. What? Tenzo asked. I'm not sure, Naruto answered hesitantly. I thought I saw a flash of something bright purple, but it's gone now. I haven't seen anything. What about you, girls? They both shook their heads. Well. It's not like we have a better idea. Where did you see it, Naruto? Over there, the blue-eyed boy pointed. On the peak with the split top. Just above the large patch of ice. I see what you mean, confirmed. Okay, team, let's go. Reaching the spot Naruto pointed out took them the rest of the day. The sun was about to touch the horizon when they stopped. So, where exactly was it? Tenzo inquired. Somewhere here, Naruto answered. I can't tell exactly. I don't see anything now though. You're not the only one, Hadaru commented. There, Hana pointed to the left. What? Everybody was surprised. I noticed it, Inuzuka explained. It's a piece of cloth. It's purple on one side and gray on the other. That's why we couldn't see it unless the wind lifted it up. You're right, the youngest member of the team exclaimed. I can see it now. It looks like it's weighted down by that boulder, otherwise it would have been blown away. I'll bring it here. Don't be hasty, Tenzo chided. The rocks around it don't look too stable. Naruto paid his warning no heed. He took off at a jog heading towards a man-sized piece of rock laying on the precipice. Don't worry, he shouted over his shoulder. I'm small and light so I'm the best man for this job. He grabbed the cloth. There, see, no reason to worry. He pulled on the cloth. It refused to give. Not wanting to tear it, he pushed the stone. The boulder moved unexpectedly easily. Naruto yelped in surprise and lost his footing. He grabbed the nearest rock, but it gave out under him. He fell backwards onto a small glacier. He tried to get a hold on it, but even when he applied chakra to his hands the only thing he accomplished was taking small chunks of snow and ice with him. It didn't slow down his descent a bit. He glanced downwards and immediately wished he could just take it back. He was nearing the edge of the iceberg rapidly, after that there was a drop. He couldn't see how high it was, but given his luck probably a lot. I'm going to die here went through his head. He tried jumping upwards, but he succeeded only in kicking up some snow. His short life flashed in front of his eyes, but nothing he saw showed him a way out of the situation. Just when he was about to fall over the edge, a desperate idea struck him. He remembered a practice session with Tenzo. The man had shown him a new one, and he had been itching to try it out. He had formed the necessary hand seals. Water shockwave. The jet of liquid had shot from his mouth and towards his sparring partner. Unfortunately, he had forgotten he had been standing on the water surface. The reaction propelled him backwards and he skidded several feet before coming to a stop. Naruto prayed this might help him in his current situation. There was no water around and snow didn't really count. His fingers flew through the required positions at a speed previously unmatched. He exhaled and spat out the water. Instead of the expected trickle, he got a wide stream of boiling, steaming liquid. What's happening? He wondered briefly. A familiar burning heat seeped into his veins. This stopped his descent, but he was already in the air with no purchase in sight. The backlash of the technique also made him rotate backwards in such a way that he couldn't use it again. It would have just sent him crashing down faster. He panicked. He tried to grab the side of the mountain even though it was out of his reach. He didn't find it strange when a red claw of chakra extended from his arm and plowed into the rock. It tore out a large chunk of stone but failed to find purchase. He was still falling. He turned in the air again and saw the ground almost upon him. He thrust his arms in front of him. There was a flash of red, then pain, then darkness. Chapter 6. Perils of the Mountains. Naruto. Hana shrieked when she saw her teammate disappear over the edge. She couldn't lose another teammate, not so soon after. She started forward, but a strong hand grabbed her upper arm, halting her progress. "Let me go," she shouted, trying to free herself. "No," Tenzo commanded. "Do you want to fall as well? The ground's unstable there." "I can't." She spoke when her dog started to whine and cower. Their fur stood on its ends. "What?" she asked, startled. She could feel it now herself, an ominous oppressive feeling in the air caused by power like she never encountered before. No, that wasn't true. She had felt it somewhere, but it had been so long ago that she'd forgotten it. Now the buried memory was pushing its way to the forefront of her consciousness. Almost as suddenly as it began, the terrifying aura disappeared and the blurry snippet of a memory with it. But she now knew it was there. "What was that?" Hateru asked, equally perturbed. "I'm not sure," Tenzo answered. It wasn't a lie. He had recognized the chakra, it was unmistakable after all, but he didn't know what exactly it meant. He knew that the Kyuubi's power manifested when Naruto was in danger and he only hoped the boy survived. "We have to find Naruto," Inuzuka insisted. "How would you do it?" "It'll be dark soon," the purple-haired girl pointed out. "We have good noses," the dog mistress reminded her. "Can it tell you which rock is loose?" Their sensei picked at an obvious flaw in her plan. Hana seemed taken aback. This hadn't occurred to her. "We'll use a rope. If someone fell down, the others could catch him," Tenzo decided. "And what if you fall, sensei? Wouldn't you just drag us down with you?" Hateru couldn't help but worry. "I can catch myself," he assured them. "There's a reason I'm after all." "If you say so, sensei." They quickly tied themselves to a rope and started their slow descent into the ravine. The sun had set and night fell on the mountains. With Naruto. He woke up to find himself in a dark, damp corridor. "Where am I?" he wondered. He tried to remember how he had gotten here. His mind came up only with images of mountains, then a cloth, and then a fall. Oh. Am I dead? No, this didn't look like any kind of afterlife he had ever heard about. But then, what did anyone really know about such things? It's not like they visited there before. He got up and started walking slowly. He had no idea how long he had walked in knee-deep water, where did it come from? Time seemed to have no meaning here. He suddenly realized that the corridor wasn't so dark anymore. There was a blood-red light coming from somewhere ahead. He continued his slow advance. Then he stood inside a large chamber without remembering entering it. The walls and ceiling were lost somewhere in the darkness around, only the echoing sounds of dripping water hinted at their presence. Directly in front of him stood a huge gate compassed of gleaming iron bars. Where one would expect a lock, there was just a piece of paper with the word seal written calligraphically. Behind the bars laid the source of the depressive illumination. Naruto squinted and made a few steps forward to get a better look at that thing. It moved. The boy stopped. Two giant red eyes opened and bored straight into him. He froze. "So you have finally come," sounding a deep resonating voice. It seemed to be everywhere, but the young blonde knew it was the creature in front him that spoke. He had never seen it before, yet he had no doubt about its nature. "So here I am," he answered boldly. He didn't actually feel it and the creature could tell. "Come near so I can see you better," it commanded. Naruto's legs moved on their own volition. He realized what was happening and stopped. "Why should I?" He decided to go on with the defiant act. "Because I said so," the demon roared. "That's not a good reason," the youth replied. The beast lunged at the gate. The boy took a frightened step back. The Biju couldn't break the gate, but red liquid started to seep through the bars. "I'll show you why you should listen to me," Kyuubi growled. Naruto frantically looked around. He just knew that the red closing on him was bad, but he had no idea how to stop it. "Stop!" he shouted. Are you sure? The huge fox asked. You stupid mortal don't realize it, but my power is the only thing keeping you alive. Your weak flesh is currently lying broken at the bottom of a ravine. If I stop the flow, you'll die. And what would happen to you then? The demon's vessel countered. The demon stayed silent. I thought so, smirked the child. You can't afford to let me die. Don't be so sure of yourself, human. You have no idea what I can do. The beast loomed over him ominously. And what exactly can you do behind the bars? The young shinobi was slowly gaining his confidence back. The fox grinned. It included a lot of long sharp teeth. Do you really want to find out? Naruto suddenly wasn't so sure of himself. I thought so, the nine-tailed beast nodded contentedly. Remember this, little kidling. I am always here. I see everything you do. I can aid or hinder you. What I'll do depends on what I feel like doing, and I rarely feel like helping out people I don't like, which means nearly everyone, though I might sometimes do it anyway if it promises to be funny. And never anger me. I might then just retract all my chakra from your system and then you'll see how pathetic you are without it. If that's all, leave. Then Naruto woke up in darkness. But the team. Their descent was too slow. Although the moon shone brightly in the starry sky, it served mostly to deepen the shadows. Every one of them had slipped at least once, but the rope had always served its purpose. There had been a close call when a boulder fell under Tenzo's legs and the whole company started falling, but then trees shot up from the ground and halted them. That was close, Hana remarked, trying to slow down her racing heartbeat. Wow, Hadaru exclaimed. Can you just build us a stairway? I'm afraid that would be too draining, the man replied. I was just asking, the swordswoman shrugged. Tenzo was forced to do it anyway when the slope became too steep. Afterwards he sat down and panted heavily. No more today, he announced to no one in particular. We're all tired, but we cannot stop, Hana spoke. Not when he's lying there wounded. We're almost down now. Then the darkness around them deepened. They looked up. Sometime during the night the wind had picked up and brought heavy clouds. And to stress the point about mountain weather being fickle, it started to snow heavily. That was the last thing we needed, Hadaru declared. Nobody disagreed. Bottom of the valley. For a long time Naruto laid unmoving. He felt like he broke every single bone in his body, and though he knew that wasn't true, he could still count a fair number of fractures. Most of them were on his arms, but his left ankle hurt like hell, and 2 or 3 of his ribs must have been cracked. And to top it his vision was blurred, signaling concussion, and the pain in his stomach hinted at internal damage. He was no medic, but he could tell he was bad off. He tried to find something positive in his situation. My team is still out there was the only one he could come up with, besides simply being still alive, but he didn't expect them to find him any sooner than in the morning, maybe noon. That is if they didn't think he was already dead and abandoned him. He felt a sharp stab of pain at that thought. Tenzo surely wouldn't leave him for the dead, but a sliver of doubt still lingered. What if his guardian thought he hadn't survived? But the older man should by now know he was tough. And what if they fell to their deaths trying to save him? The idea sent chills running down his spine. He would never forgive himself. What would he tell Hana's annoying little brother and whatever families his teammates had? It occurred to him they had never talked about it. There was no time for idle chit-chat during their practice sessions. He resolved to learn more about his squad should they all get out of this alive. Then it started to snow. He knew he should try to find shelter or at least conserve his body heat, but he was still too hurt to move. He settled for admiring the ethereal beauty of snowflakes instead. There wasn't much chance to do so in Konoha. In fact, he never saw snow there, but he heard it had happened before. He registered a sound that didn't belong. He was tempted to simply ignore it, he felt lazy and comfortable and warm. He just wanted to close his eyes and sleep. But some survival instinct forced him to respond. He lifted his head to search for its source. The pain hit him once again along with a sense of vertigo. He realized he was gravely wounded and slowly freezing to death. He gritted his teeth. He had to move or he'd surely die here. And Naruto didn't want to die. He braced himself for the pain and slowly lifted himself on his elbows. He thanked Kami that his upper arms weren't shattered. He had to stop for a while and wait until he could think clearly again. Then he opened his eyes, he didn't remember closing them, and looked around. He couldn't see much, just his closest surroundings covered in a layer of white. The sound resounded again, and Naruto thought it was closer than the last time. He tried to determine its source. Nothing. Then it sounded right next to his ear. He was startled and promptly fell. The pain almost knocked him unconscious right then, but he somehow managed to stay awake. He turned his head a bit. A wolf. For a moment he hoped it was just one of Hana's dogs, but no such luck. This was a big and hungry creature of the wild. And his arms were broken. It was official, his life sucked. Especially what little time was left of it. He went through his list of available options. It was pitifully short. Only his right leg appeared to be in a working state. Unfortunately, he couldn't kick the animal from this position. He racked his brain desperately for another way to save himself. But he didn't know a single technique that didn't require the use of his hands. He had barely started on the elemental recomposition. Wait, that was it. He couldn't cut the leaf yet, but the last time he tried a small dent appeared near its edge. And if he didn't know how to use it, he'd just have to create his own. He took a deep breath, desperately ignoring the protests of his ribs, and concentrated on sharpening his chakra and sending it to his lungs. He moved his head that he was now facing the wolf head-on. Then he screamed. A jet of charged air rushed out of his lungs, hitting the prowling predator in the side. The beast was blasted off its paws. Cuts appeared in its coat and red flowed out. The animal howled in pain. It ran off to lick its wounds and look for some easier prey. Naruto knew nothing of that. He fainted. Back on the slope. The wolf, Haderu, startled. That's not good. It sounded scary, Hana added. What could have happened to it? And what was the first screech? I've never heard anything like that before. Maybe Naruto is up and defending himself, Tenzo offered. His students looked at him dubiously. After that fall? It would be a miracle if he survived. And it wasn't his voice, Inuzuka commented. You never know, the man replied. We're at the bottom now, the purple-haired Kunoichi remarked. Finally, the dog mistress exclaimed. She quickly untied her dogs from the rope. Go, boys. Finding Naruto, she commanded them. They obediently disappeared in the snow. Not too long after that there was a joyful bark. They found him, the Inuzuka translated. Quick. She ran off. The others followed at a more cautious pace. They were still worried about what could be lurking in the darkness. Naruto. Hana shouted in a panicked voice. The others hurried towards her. They could soon see what she was so worried about. The boy was lying unmoving on the ground, the white snow covering most of his body. Only his face remained unobscured. Is he alive? Haderu asked. It was hard to believe that he might be. Yes, the dog user confirmed. She quickly started a medical and ran a diagnosis. It's bad, she announced. He has multiple fractures, ruptured spleen, damaged lungs and hypothermia. There are also signs of chakra depletion and something I can't decipher. What does it mean? Haderu inquired. We have to keep him warm and pray, the medic elaborated. The next day. Morning dawned sunny and bright and the peaks glittered like they were made of gold. No rays found their way to the bottom of the valley. Their makeshift camp remained cold. Hana moved from her spot beside Naruto. Due to lack of firewood they had to cuddle together to keep their wounded teammate warm. She ran through a diagnostic technique. The results convinced her that she shouldn't use veterinary techniques on humans. There was no way the young boy could have gotten better in such a short time. She considered it a small miracle that he hadn't passed on yet, but when she took a good look at him, it seemed like some color returned to his cheeks. She shrugged it off. It must be the light. She took out her bottle and tried to make him drink. A lot of the water spilled on the ground, but some liquid still got in. She closed the bottle and laid back down beside her patient. They were alone recently. Both Haderu and Tenzo-sensei left earlier to look for firewood and maybe even something fresh to eat. Her dogs were prowling around the perimeter, keeping watch in case another wolf decided to try for an easy meal. She sighed. They had been here only for a few hours and she already hated this place. It was cold and wet and the ground underneath them was hard and bumpy. Worst possible place for a wounded child to be, but unfortunately Naruto's condition didn't allow him to be moved. They were in for a lengthy stay here. Down in the valley. Haderu was following the stream. What had been a small trickle just yesterday grew into a fair-sized creek due to the melting snow and the water was still rising. She just hoped it won't cause a flood or worse a landslide. They definitely didn't need any more trouble. Her feet slipped on an ice-covered rock. Only her quick reflexes saved her from plunging into the icy brook. She stopped for a moment. They couldn't afford another wound either. Then something caught her eye. A shape that didn't belong there was hiding under the white covering. She cautiously approached it and brushed away the snow. She hadn't been mistaken. It really was a backpack. And it certainly wasn't one of theirs. Bingo, she whispered. It seemed that at least part of their luck turned. In her opinion it was long overdue. The camp. Haderu proudly showed the rest of the squatter find. Excellent work, Tenzo praised her. We know we're on the right track. Once Naruto can move around, we'll follow it. That will take a long time, Hana commented. I know, the man sighed. Have you looked inside yet? No, she shook her head, I was waiting for the team to gather. Well, then open it now, her sensei suggested. Haderu pulled the zipper. She didn't know what she had been expecting, but the contents of the bag seemed completely ordinary, just some clothes and provisions. She felt oddly let down. She began to search the side pockets. She found just a half-empty matchbox, completely sodden, and a broken compass. He probably got lost, she muttered. Hana had been looking over the clothes when her fingers touched something in one of the jacket pockets. She carefully took out a piece of folded paper. It was wet, but it had been spared the worst of the moisture. Careful with it, Tenzo advised. She began slowly unfolding it. What is that? Hateru wondered at the sight of curved colorful lines and strange squiggly signs. A map, her sensei explained. Or more like a plan, since it seems to cover only a small area. But which one? Hana asked. Your guess is as good as mine, Tenzo answered. Isn't that just the kind of thing our clients wanted? A voice they hadn't expected to hear joined the discussion. Naruto. You're awake, Inuzuka exclaimed. Yes, and I'm hungry, the boy added. Stay still, I'll look you over, the medic commanded. Okay, but be quick, the boy agreed. I'd eat a horse. And I have to. You know. Yes, I know, she nodded. Now hold still. What? Hana startled when she ran over him. Is it bad? Naruto inquired. She didn't answer. She repeated her technique. The diagnosis was the same. It seems you're healing just fine, she answered. In fact, too fine to be humanly possible. She couldn't miss the boy tensing. What is it, a blood limit I've never heard before? Something like that, the blonde replied unconvincingly. Then why haven't you just said so? The Inuzuka huffed. You worried me needlessly. Sorry, Naruto apologized. Don't worry about it, the dog user waved her hand over the matter. Now rest and concentrate on healing. I don't know about you, but I'd like to leave here as soon as possible. Me too. 2 days later. Naruto's condition finally improved enough for him to walk. He tried to run ignoring the pain in his still mending bones, but Tenzo managed to stop him. If you hurt yourself again, I'll bind you and personally carry you all the way to Konoha, he threatened. The boy pouted but obeyed. They are carefully set on the road. They would have been going slow anyway, they were searching for the remains of the lost expedition. Naruto insisted on carrying his own backpack, but his guardian was unrelenting. Heal first, he commanded. The boy pouted but had to obey. In fact, he didn't mind too much. He was still sore all over. They walked down the valley at a leisure pace. Hana's dogs were running left and right sniffing for something interesting. The snow had finally melted, but gray clouds covered the sky, promising another batch anytime. One of the Himeru triplets barked. What have you found? Its mistress asked. The group headed its way. They soon saw its find. It was a human bone, ulna to be precise. Tooth marks showed where hungry wolves had torn the meat off. But that wasn't so interesting. Look at this, Tenzo pointed out a deep gash. That wasn't done by any predator. It was caused by a sword. Bandits, Naruto guessed, or ninja. Perhaps, but don't get too excited. We're in the middle of nowhere, the more experienced man reminded. Highwaymen would die of hunger here. There is a possibility that somebody hired shinobi to dispose of the group, but they would have been better at hiding the bodies. Maybe they thought they didn't have to bother, Naruto offered. We are in the middle of nowhere after all. It's possible, Tenzo agreed. But professionals wouldn't be so careless anyway. We won't know until we find the rest. But for now, be extra cautious. Why? Hana questioned. This bone is old. Certainly over a week. Because on a mission you never know, answered them. He designed the mock missions from real-life experience after all. Later. They had found more remains of the unlucky expedition, a clean bone here, a torn article of clothing there. Most of them were scratched by animal teeth, but some bore marks of weapons as well. They looked for any clue that would shed some light on the prospector's last day, but they had been unlucky so far. They couldn't puzzle out more than that they had been attacked and slain, and then the wildlife had feasted on their bodies. So far there was no hint about their attackers' identities. A bit of breakthrough came late that afternoon. It came in the form of a leather bag, better preserved than most of the other equipment. It's heavy, Hana observed when she picked it up. What's inside? Naruto asked. Rocks, she answered. Rocks? The boy sounded disappointed. Yes, she confirmed. These must be the mineral samples the company wanted so badly. We'll take them with us. So we have to drag a bag full of rock all the way through the mountains. Great, Naruto complained. It's not like you have to carry it yourself, Hateru commented. That was true. While the wounded boy had been deemed fit enough to walk on his own, he wasn't allowed to carry his luggage. Tenzo had his backpack instead. The blonde pouted. I can carry it, you know. No, I don't, Hana stated. And shouldn't you be happy to avoid work? No. Naruto protested. It's just. I haven't done anything but cause trouble on this mission. I don't want to be so useless, not even able to carry my own things. You aren't useless, the Inuzuka consoled him. You've noticed the cloth. If you didn't, we could have been still just wandering around aimlessly. That was just luck, Naruto argued. Even luck is important, Hateru claimed. Yet I wish I could do more, the blind sided. I understood perfectly, Hana nodded. Maybe you'll get your chance next time. Yes, maybe, the boy replied. So what's in the bag? The purple-haired Kinoichi decided to change the course of conversation. I clearly remember saying rocks, Inuzuka answered. I know, but what kind of rocks? Hadaru clarified. Did they find some precious gems or gold or something that's worth killing for? Let's have a look. The dog mistress knelt down and started going through the bag's contents. The squad looked on attentively. Rock, another rock and a stone for a change, Hana commented. And here's another rock and yet another stone. And what's that? She picked one of them for a closer inspection. It looked no different from the other ones to their eyes, except for a few glittering specks. Maybe they had really found gold, Naruto offered jokingly. Don't be stupid, Hadaru chided. It's probably just fool's gold. Acid here, Tenzo commanded. Guys, this looks like it might be real gold. No kidding. Naruto couldn't believe his ears. That sounds like something from an adventure story. That sounds like a reason for murder, Hadaru corrected. I don't know, those few dots wouldn't buy you dinner even if they really were gold, Hana pointed out. Then maybe there's more elsewhere, Naruto speculated. Maybe, and maybe it isn't even real gold, Tenzo entered the argument. None of us is an expert. We shouldn't come to any conclusions without any proof. They resumed their journey. After 2 days. Their progress had been slowed, but they were able to pick up their pace as Naruto's condition kept improving. When they reached the foot of the mountains, he insisted he was alright and could tree hop again. His medic insisted he'd take it easy anyway. They had found some more human remains, but that had ended before they entered the forest. After that they came across only one body, nearly eaten by carrion birds. The remains of his clothes hinted that he had been a soldier, but there were no weapons. Isn't it strange? Hadaru wondered. I thought the culprits had taken them, Naruto replied. But who robbed this one? It happened as a separate incident, the sword wielder pointed out. Maybe he was one of them and they argued about splitting the loot, the boy offered. Who would have thought Tiny actually said something intelligent, Hana teased. I have my moments, the blonde smirked. Not too long after that they left the mountain range. The valley they had been following widened into a shallow depression. Rolling grassy hills spread out before them. Now, Hadaru asked. They could have taken any direction from here. And the track is so cold even my dogs cannot pick it, Hana added. That's true, Tenzo admitted, but we can always ask. If I am not mistaken, there's a village just over that hill. They had no idea how he could tell, but he was right. There really was a tiny hamlet just where he said. What the hell happened here, Naruto wondered aloud. The reason for his question was apparent. One of the houses in the settlement was burnt down, and there was a spot that looked suspiciously like blood on the wall of another. Also the herbs and vegetables in several gardens were broken, footprints still recognizable in the yards. A dead giveaway was also the fact that the villagers scattered and ran upon seeing them approach. It looks like a bandit raid, Tenzo guessed from experience. It seems we're still on the right track. It had taken them quite a while to find a person willing to talk to them, but eventually they managed to convince a young man that they weren't going to rob them off and slit their throats in their sleep. Then they asked him about recent happenings. They came over a week ago, the man started. They just threatened everyone into taking them in. They took whatever they wanted, including women. Jiro tried to fight them, but they just beat him up and set his house on fire, with him inside. No one dared to speak a word against them after that. They spent 6 days here. Some of them were roughened up and they were waiting for them to recuperate. They left just the day before yesterday. We're catching up to them, Naruto exclaimed. Let's go. And just where you think you are going, Tenzo stopped him. You have no idea where they are headed. And besides, it's almost evening. We're staying here for the night and we'll try to gather more information about them. Understood. Understood, the youngest member of the squad was a bit put down. But even he had to admit that he was right. Chapter 7. Gold Fever. They covered the ground much faster than any civilian. The tracks in front of them were fresh and clear, so they could follow them without trouble, even if they didn't have the keen noses of the Himari triplets to help them. Therefore they reached the city the bandit company had settled for the night not too long after sunset. Despite the late hour the streets were bustling with life, the street lamps providing illumination rivaling daylight. Naruto was staring wide-eyed. He had never seen anything like this. How are we going to find them here? He wondered aloud. They managed to interrogate enough of the villagers to piece together the renegades' plans. It seemed they weren't overly concerned with discovery, their crime happening in one of the remotest parts of the Fire Country, but they weren't taking needless chances either. The peasants weren't sure about it, but it sounded like their leaders had some previous experience with evading law. I picked some sense on the way here, Hana announced. Some of them I recognize from that village. But finding them among so many people won't be easy. Can you do it? Tenzo asked. I think so. "I can still smell their tracks," the Inyazuka assured them. "Then lead on." Blue Swan Inn. Ishiro locked himself in his room. He shut the window panes and cautiously made sure that he was really alone. If anybody saw him looking through the small closet or under the low bed, they would call him paranoid, but he knew better. It never hurt to make sure, it was the only thing that kept him alive for his long dubious career. His search concluded, he calmed down. He truly was alone and safe. Only then he dared to take out a small pouch from a secret pocket in his vest. Despite its size, the thing was heavy. Hashiro weighed it in his hand contentedly. He had never expected such success when he had accepted his last job, but they had hit gold. Literally. He laid the bag on the small table and carefully undid the string holding it close. He savored the moment as he slowly opened it. Its contents glinted bright yellow in the candlelight, and he was once again struck by its sheer beauty. He could do nothing but stare at it for hours on end. This was what he always strived for. The family he had been born into hadn't been poor, but they weren't wealthy either. They had never starved, but they couldn't afford anything costly as well. And to make the point clear, they lived near the rich district in the capital, both of his parents being servants. He grew up surrounded by lavish luxury that wasn't his, knowing that he most likely would become a servant too, silent, invisible, catering to his master's needs without even being acknowledged. Ishiro hated such life. He decided to change it and find his own destiny. He had no set plan until one day he encountered a ninja. That young man was hired by one of the local nobles for something or other, Hashiro never knew nor cared, but he was amazed at the power the shinobi emitted. Here was a person who didn't have to bow to anyone, strong enough to go wherever he wanted and fell whoever stood in his way. It was then that Hashiro knew what his path in life would be. He ran from home the following day. He barely remembered to leave a note for his parents. It was the last time he ever saw them, but it never really bothered him. His old way of life simply gave way for a new one. That was how things were. He wandered for weeks before he eventually reached Konoha. He felt like he entered heaven. For a long time he just strolled down the streets and admired the shinobi and kunoichi milling around. Then he entered the ninja academy. It had been a huge disappointment. He had to endure useless lessons of history, and when it came to the practical ones, he found himself left in the dust by his snotty clan of classmates. Once again he found himself in a world of nobility who towered above him, ready to stomp him in the ground like a bug without even caring. He tried to study harder, but to no avail. He flunked. He couldn't bring himself to admit it was from a lack of talent, he blamed favoritism instead. He never managed to graduate. After 4 years he left the village hidden in the leaves and set on the road again. He appropriated a sword and became a mercenary instead. Even his meager ninja training gave him an edge against other swordsmen for hire, and he soon found himself the commander of a small company. And because of his abilities he was able to secure lucrative contracts. For a while things were looking up. But all too soon he found out that people who wanted some really important job done well hired shinobi. The thought never failed to make him furious. Just what was so wonderful about them? His lads could do their work just as well, yet they never got their hands on any really big money. They were making a decent income, but it was never enough for Hashiro. He changed his career again. He figured that if people wouldn't pay him money, he'll have to take it instead. He became a highwayman instead. To his great dismay he realized that few people carried large amounts of cash while traveling, and those who did brought a lot of skilled guards along. Another thing he failed to take into consideration was the law enforcement. Soon they were being chased by samurai battalions all around the countryside. He escaped, but too many of his comrades weren't so lucky. But he didn't care. It wasn't like they had been close friends or something. He decided to lie low and refrain from crossing the law for a while. What was left of his company alongside a couple of others was hired to guard an expedition into the Grey Mist Mountains. It was a perfect opportunity to lie low and make some money to boot. The cold and humid climate of the mountains was a bit of a downside, but it was better than the gallows. And then it happened. One of the prospectors randomly digging into the ground actually dug out gold. Nobody could quite believe their eyes, something about the peak not being the right kind of stone for this, but there was proof lying in front of their eyes. And there was more of it. The group decided to stay there for longer than planned and eke out some more. Ishiro watched as the pile grew, and with it grew his temptation. Soon it became too much to resist. He spoke to his old comrades and some of the new ones. It didn't take long for a plan to form. It was rather simplistic, but he never believed in complicated ones. They tended to backfire. And backfiring plans were one thing Hashiro hated even more than being poor and insignificant. Unfortunately, even the most straightforward of schemes could go wrong, as he soon realized. Someone warned the expedition, and they and a few of the new guards were alert and waiting when they attacked. Also, some of the prospectors were quite skilled in wielding hammers and pickaxes and were willing to use them to crack skulls instead of rocks. A battle broke out. His group eventually prevailed thanks to their greater numbers and experience, but not before they suffered casualties. And he strongly suspected somebody managed to escape, but he wasn't about to chase them over the steep peaks. The chances of them reaching civilization were low anyway, and by the time they could reach the authorities his gang would be long gone. They just gathered what gold they could find and set for a journey to the lowlands. They went too slow. It irked Hashiro, but he couldn't do much about it. Some of his guys were wounded, one of them even dying. They stopped in the nearest village until they recuperated. It took too long in his opinion. And to top it off, his new band couldn't even behave themselves, needlessly showing that they lived on the other side of the law. He was half tempted just to abandon them to their fates, but he would be risking a mutiny. So he stayed, nearly tearing out his hair with impatience, half expecting soldiers to appear at any time. But none did. Yet he didn't allow himself to relax until they were back on the road. And once they entered the city, he was positive they'd shaken any potential pursuit. But as he retired the pouch, his ears picked a noise that didn't belong in the inn. He straightened up and listened, his hand grabbing the handle of his katana. Then it sounded again. Just a dog, he recognized it now. He couldn't believe he got so worked up for some stupid mangy mutt. All this stress must be getting to him. He needed a nice long vacation. Fortunately he could afford it now. He released the hold on his sword. Then the door opened suddenly and he realized that trouble had found him after all. On the street. Here, Hana pointed at a two-story building. It bore a sign saying Blue Swan Inn. Are you sure? Naruto doubted. It looked too respectable to be full of criminals. Of course I am sure, the Kunoichi snapped. What have I told you about Inyazuka noses? I know, the youth threw his hands up defensively, I just never imagined bandit hideouts like this. And how should it look like then? Hana raised an eyebrow. I don't know, the boy answered, this just looks too respectable. Appearances are often misleading, Tenzo commented philosophically. How are we going to do it? Hana considered. There are too many civilians to just barge in, and it's not like the bandits have it written on their foreheads. Have I taught you nothing? Their sensei sighed. Remember. Lesson number 3. If you don't know, gather information. So no battle today, Naruto grimaced. Pity. I just wanted to try out something new. Don't you even think about it, Tenzo chastised him. You nearly destroyed your own lungs the last time. Yes, I have no intention of patching you back together again, if you do, Hana added. You're mean, the boy pouted, but didn't press the issue. So what exactly is the plan? A couple of minutes later. Tenzo received the covert signals that everybody was on their positions and ready to begin. He stood in front of the door, one of Hana's dogs marked as belonging to one of the bandits they believed to be the leader. He signaled for the operation to commence, then opened the door. The man inside had time only to open his mouth before it was upon him. He stunned him by hitting a pressure point before the man could sound the alarm. Success, he signaled to his squad. They entered the room, the girls through the door, Naruto through the window. He was chosen to guard it for his ability to remain unnoticed even on a plain wall. Nobody ever figured out how he was doing it, for him it was just instinct. They eyed the captive now lying tied on the floor. Did we really get the right one? Naruto questioned. I didn't picture him quite like that from the description. You're right, Hana admitted. I chose the wrong scent to follow, but it certainly is one of the bandits. Look, she pointed at a backpack with the logo of the mining company. He can tell us where the others are just as well as anybody else, Tenzo stated and prepared a silencing barrier. The interrogation didn't take long, the bird had started singing almost as soon as they began. They now had the numbers of the rooms the rest of the band stayed in, and most importantly the location of its leader. They went to work. Bashiro's room. Your dinner, sir, the boy carrying the tray announced in the polite impersonal voice of all professional servants. It reminded Hashiro of his humble origins and therefore always pissed him off. I haven't ordered any, the bandit growled and scowled. And if he remembered correctly, this particular inn didn't cater to guests that way. The child clearly wasn't who he claimed to be. The only question was, what did he want? Hashiro grabbed his katana again. The imposter servant walked into the room ignoring his dismissal. I was told to deliver it here, he stated matter-of-factly. Leave. Now, the thief commanded. But sir, the brat started setting the tray on the table. Hashiro unsheathed his sword menacingly. The squirt looked completely harmless, but it never hurt to be prepared. That was his credo. Didn't you understand? I said leave. He leaned forward and twisted his face into a threatening grimace. The little rat cowered under his glare. An almost imperceptible hint of movement was the only warning he had. He instinctively jumped away. A small pouch flew through the spot his head had occupied just a moment before and exploded into a cloud of bluish smoke. His eyes darted towards the still open door. A girl was standing there, readying for another throw. Ninja, damn it. Although he held his skills in high regard, he knew he was way out of his league here. He'd have to take a hostage. He went for what he perceived as the easier target. He lunged at the boy. Naruto was momentarily startled by the bandit's speed, but instincts honed through countless training sessions kicked in. He smoothly evaded the attack. He realized he was facing common mission mishap number 2. A supposedly civilian opponent has basic shinobi training. He sent a silent thanks to his sensei for preparing him for such an occasion. He dove down and punched the leg trying to kick him in the knee. The man was thrown off balance, but he quickly recovered and swung his sword at him. "Naruto!" Hana yelled from the door and rushed to help him. She needn't have bothered. Naruto was as quick as ever and swiftly slid on the floor between the swordsman's legs, avoiding the danger altogether. By that time Hana reached the highwayman and slammed into him. He was able to block her slashing claw, but the impact sent him flying backwards, right on top of Naruto. "Oomph!" cried the unlucky blonde. Nobody paid him any heed, Hana being too busy pummeling the murderer, the man trying to block her hits, mostly unsuccessfully. After what seemed like a long time they finally rolled off him and he was able to breathe and move again. He jumped to his feet and kicked the bandit's head. The bloke slumped unconscious. Hana paid it no heed, she proceeded beating the living daylight out of him. "Enough," commanded a strong voice. She punched her victim a couple more times before registering it. She looked behind and noticed the figure of her sensei. When did he come in? What was that supposed to mean? He demanded. She hesitated. What just happened? The man had attacked Naruto and then. Something inside her had snapped. He was attacking Naruto, she said lamely. The boy in question brushed it off. It wasn't like he could really hit me. I'm better than that. I know, it's just that. I can't bear the thought of losing another teammate, she thought, but couldn't bring herself to say aloud. She felt immensely stupid. It doesn't really matter now, but we'll be finishing this conversation, Tenzo promised. Now let's see whether the racket you made alerted the others. The following day. It turned out that they needn't have worried. Most of the culprits weren't in the inn anyway, most of them opting to celebrate their successful robbery by blowing away the money in bars, gambling parlors and brothels. They had to stay up all night and wait for them, but they captured them all without further incidents. In the morning they handed them over to the local authorities. They weren't equipped for handling that many prisoners. Tenzo gave them the day off to rest and explore the city. The girls took the opportunity enthusiastically. They didn't need any particular reason for a shopping spree. Chances were the stores here sold a different fashion than in Konoha. Naruto stayed with Tenzo. There was something he wanted to talk to the older man about but didn't want anyone to overhear. "Tenzo," he started in a small voice. "What is it, Naruto?" The former Anbu was suddenly concerned. His young charge sounded uncharacteristically subdued. "I have to tell you something I couldn't tell you before." "About what?" Wondered. A lot of things had happened during the mission and they had already talked about them. "In the valley, after I fell. I saw it. It spoke to me." He didn't have to clarify. Tenzo immediately knew what he meant. He straightened up. What did it have to say? His mind came up with various theories, most of them either very worrisome or extremely far-fetched. "Not much," Naruto answered. "Just that I should be grateful to it for everything and that if it really wanted to, it could cause me a lot of trouble." "Don't worry about it too much," his guardian tried to console him. "The seal should hold it back. I'll have somebody look at you once we get back to Konoha. And for now, I can always suppress it, you know." "I know," the blonde replied, "but..." "You're still afraid," the Mokuton wielder guessed. "Yes," the Jinchuriki admitted. "I understand," the older man said. "I would be too in your place. Just don't let it bother you too much." "I'll try," the boy promised. "That's all I ask for," he ruffled Naruto's hair. "Now, go and enjoy the city." Noon. Jiraiya decided to take a break from his search. He spent a month trying to find out where the missing nin who had attacked Team Yagi came from. There wasn't much to start from, but he wasn't just some green kid new in the information business. He was Jiraiya of the Sannin, Konohagakure's spy master. And also a super pervert, but it doesn't matter now. He wasn't to be deterred by such minor drawbacks. It took him weeks, but he finally came upon a rumor of a place taking in rogue ninja. He couldn't find out anything definite, but he managed to confirm that it really existed. He just couldn't pinpoint its location or who was behind it. He just got the vague feeling that this was going to be big, probably even a new hidden village in the making. Once there used to be a dime a dozen such villages, wandering clans banding together to improve their chances of survival all the time, but with every major war their number declined, they either joined one of the pre-existing powers or ended up obliterated. There hadn't been a new village founded since the Third Great Shinobi War ended. And now there was another in the making. It put the Toad Sage on edge. It was a daring endeavor, and whoever had put it into motion and managed to keep it under wraps, probably for quite some time, had to be good. Very good. There never were many ninja of such caliber. Most of them were either leaders or at least prominent members of well-established villages. Those who weren't usually had to leave their homes due to their psychopathic tendencies. Jiraiya didn't want to think of the implications of somebody like them being in charge of a large ninja force. Last time it happened a major war started. He wanted to just forget all about it. That is why after meeting his contact, he went to relax at the local hot springs. There was nothing like an afternoon of research to soothe his troubled mind. He took out his pen and notepad and settled down comfortably next to a hole in the fence. Downtown. Naruto felt relieved after his talk with Tenzo. He grabbed a couple of hours of sleep and then headed to the city. He rarely wandered the streets of Konoha and never on his own. It was too dangerous, not to mention unpleasant. But here he could walk without fear. Nobody glared at him in the streets, people treated him politely. It felt like a dream. Soon he became bored with simply strolling around and decided to do something. But what? There wasn't that much entertainment open to 8-year-old boys, and those that would admit him were too childish. And Naruto didn't consider himself a child anymore. No, he was now a ninja, no matter that he was probably the youngest and shortest ninja in Konoha. He briefly considered joining his two Kunoichi teammates on their shopping trip, but he had heard some horror stories about girls looking for new clothes and decided against it. He stopped for lunch at a raiment stand but was disappointed by their products. They had nothing on Ichiraku's. Or maybe he just couldn't enjoy it properly because AM and Tucci weren't there. He soon left and looked through several other streets. Then he came across a place that seemed perfect for spending a relaxing afternoon. He never enjoyed the hot springs in Konoha for the same reason he never spent much time downtown. But here he could spend a whole afternoon soaking in peace. Life, though, had a different plan. He hadn't been enjoying the warm water for more than half an hour when an angry yell resounded from behind the wall separating the men's and women's part. What was worse, he recognized the voice. It was Hana. His teammate was in trouble. It was everything he needed to know. He rushed to her aid. Hana wasn't having a good day. First the trouble in the inn, then the threat of her sensei forcing her to talk about painful topics, and now a pervert tried to peep on her when she decided to relax in the spa for a bit. After everything that happened during the last week, she sorely needed a day off. And now some lurking creep tried to take even that from her. He had to pay. She shouted a battle cry and started after him. The other women quickly caught on. Unfortunately the voyeur was quick on his feet and disappeared into the traffic on the main street. She had half a mind to follow him by his scent, but she didn't want to run around the town clad only in a wet towel. The pervert would surely appreciate that. She returned to the springs. She came upon a most curious sight. Naruto suddenly realized something. He was clad only in a towel. He was in the women's part of the hot springs. He couldn't see his teammates anywhere. He was alone among many angry females who took notice of him. He was screwed. Hana could just stare in amazement. There was her shortest teammate surrounded by a bunch of women, looking extremely young and lost. Defending your friend like that? That's just too sweet, one of the ladies exclaimed. Such a brave boy, another added. Just adorable, the third one cooed. Naruto shivered. Yes, he was indeed doomed. Jiraiya landed on the roof, perfectly concealed by one of his techniques. The girls were prettiest when they were angry. The rooftop gave him a perfect view. Then he noticed something out of order. Who was there among so many ladies? Was that Naruto? Yes, there were the whisker marks. It was him. But what was he doing here? The self-proclaimed super pervert decided it didn't really matter as long as the boy was getting lucky. He took out his trusty notepad and started scribbling. The evening. The squad have returned to their hotel, not the Blue Swan, they weren't welcome there anymore. They mutually decided not to mention the spa disaster to anyone ever again. It took nearly an hour before Naruto managed to escape the clutches of overly affectionate elderly ladies, intent on coddling him like a baby. He was sure the experience would haunt his nightmares for years to come. Before they could go to sleep, Tenzo called Hana aside. "So, are you ready to talk about yesterday now?" he said. It wasn't a question. "I guess," she sighed. "It's just. When I saw him swinging his sword at Naruto, it was like I was back there again. I saw Juibe and Takeda and Yagi-sensei, and I just saw red. I'm sorry, I know I botched it, but I swore I wouldn't let a teammate die again." She finished her speech and looked into his eyes. "I understand," he nodded gravely. "Most ninja do. Losing a comrade is always painful, but you must not let it consume you. You had almost no time to grieve, which makes it feel still fresh, but you have to overcome it. You don't want to end up like a certain acquaintance of mine who spends every spare minute staring at the memorial stone." "Somebody actually does that?" She raised her eyebrows curiously. "Yes," Tenzo confirmed. "He's been at it for years." "I really don't want to end up like him," the Inyazuka shuddered. "I believe you," her sensei said. "And for now trust in your team. It's commendable to risk yourself to help your comrades, but you can't do it constantly. They are both capable shinobi and they don't need you holding their hands. It's insulting to them. They can take care of themselves. If you rush to aid one, you leave the other's flank unguarded. It's something you cannot afford in battle. So just trust them to do their job. Understand? Yes, she nodded, I understand. I just don't know whether I can always abide. Nobody knows. Just do your best, he smiled reassuringly. I will, she stated solemnly. I promise. Several days later. They reported their findings to the mining company. The bosses seemed ecstatic when they heard about the gold, furious when they found out that some witnesses were sitting in a prison somewhere, able to tell somebody about the new load. The demise of their employees left them only mildly perturbed, if not entirely indifferent. Tenzo had to covertly step on Naruto's foot to prevent him saying anything about that. Then there came the question of payment. Somebody had the gall to claim that since they weren't able to keep the findings of the expedition secret, they didn't deserve their money. Naruto had to be bodily restrained by his teammates. Assaulting the clients would leave them with no pay for sure. Tenzo calmly stated that their mission directive said nothing about that, and if he disagreed, maybe he could discuss it with the Hokage, and the man had to grudgingly admit that they fulfilled all stated objectives. They collected their earnings and headed for Konoha. They couldn't wait to get home. They ran through the familiar forest. The village gates should appear any time now. There. But, what was that? The team came to a halt. There have never been so many guards standing at the gates, not unless there was a war. Has one broken out? Sure they would have heard something, wouldn't they? Ninja wars did tend to start very suddenly sometimes. Their elation suddenly gone, they approached the gates at a cautious pace. They showed their identification and mission scroll to the on guard. What happened here? Tenzo inquired. Or is it classified? No, it's not, the man answered. Something like this cannot be kept under wraps anyway. The Uchiha clan has been massacred. What? Chapter 8. Confusion. Council chamber. The morning after it had happened, Sarutobi found himself in the council chamber again and once again listening to the enraged shouts of the councillors. It was becoming a disturbingly common occurrence lately. We have to launch a search, the culprits can be still nearby, somebody shouted. The Hokage didn't recognize his voice in the racket. What can they do against a force that massacred a whole elite ninja clan? That was the Kurama clan head. It must have been the demon, who else? It was Satoru who said it. Who else, indeed? Impossible, Inuzuka Tsume stated. He isn't even in Konoha. How do you know? Satoru demanded. He seemed just about ready to call her the demon's accomplice. He's away on a mission. His team left 4 days ago, packed for a long trip. They haven't returned yet, the Inuzuka matriarch explained. And how do you know that? And since when is the demon a shinobi? Satoru demanded angrily. I know because he's on a team with my daughter. And since when? I think around 2 months ago, Tsume answered. And you agreed to it? Satoru asked incredulously. Why shouldn't I? The dog mistress shrugged. My daughter wasn't complaining, so neither was I. Why weren't we informed about the demon becoming a shinobi? One civilian councilwoman demanded, turning to the Sandaime. Why was it even allowed? I have total command over Konoha's shinobi forces, as you should know, the Hokage stated calmly. I don't have to share my decisions with anybody. And why was Uzumaki Naruto allowed to become a ninja? He passed the genin test. That wasn't what she meant, Satoru snapped. The Hokage had known very well that this wasn't what Satoru meant and ignored it purposefully. That beast is dangerous. Everybody knows it. And now even more so. You must have different information than me, the professor replied. I am unaware of any incident involving Uzumaki Naruto attacking anyone. And besides, we gathered here to discuss a completely different matter, namely the massacre of the Uchiha clan. That's right, Yamanaka Inoichi said. Since we determined it couldn't possibly be the work of the Kyuubi, who was it? Are there any clues? Not yet, the third answered. It wasn't like he could disclose what had really happened. Fortunately, he was very skilled in lying and obfuscating. The evidence points to only a small group of attackers. We have to wait for Uchiha Sasuke to wake and enlighten us. That might take too long, Hyuga Hiyashi pointed out. I assure you we are doing everything in our power to determine the culprits, the Hokage stated. Nobody could tell just how big a lie this was. When will you have them? They cannot get away with it. We have to show our strength. The room descended into chaos again. Sarutobi sighed. This was going to be a long session. A very long one. At the village gates. The whole squad was stunned. The Uchiha clan, the strongest, one of the founding clans of Konoha, massacred. Obliterated. It was incomprehensible. Who did it? Hana asked. Are there any survivors? Hateru inquired at the same time. Shunsui, she thought. Her snotty, arrogant, insufferable, but undeniably skilled teammate. They have never been close, at times she even hated him and his awesome eyes he had been so proud of, but she never wished anything bad would happen to him. Please let him be alive. There's one, he answered, but he's bad off. Who? Haru couldn't wait to know, but also dreaded the answer. Please let it be Shunsui. Uchiha Sasuke, the man crushed her hopes. Not Shunsui. Not Shunsui. Her annoying haughty teammate, all around pain in the neck, but also her comrade during countless hours of training and several missions, was dead. They parted ways quite some times ago, but still she had trouble coming to terms with the fact he was truly gone. She barely noticed when Tenzo urged them to report their mission success. She just stood there silently during the debriefing, forgetting to speak when she was asked to clarify something. She was just relieved when they were finally dismissed. She somehow found her way home and locked herself in, not going out for a full day. In Yuzuka clan compound. I'm home, Hana announced. Hi, honey, her mother greeted. How was your mission? And have you heard what happened here yet? We succeeded and yes, I did, the girl answered. Terrible, isn't it, the clan matriarch said. It is, her daughter nodded, though Haru seemed to be hit the worst. I'm not surprised, Tsum replied. She used to be on a team with one of them. I didn't know that, the girl looked up in surprise. You seem to know little about your team, the older woman commented. I know, Hana admitted with a tiny sliver of shame. I just didn't feel like talking to them, and they weren't too open either. I couldn't stand them the first time I saw them, but I eventually got used to them. But we are now becoming a true team. That's good to hear, the clan head stated. I was getting worried for you there. At times I was worried too, the girl confessed. But that isn't what I wanted to talk to you about. What then? The clan head raised an eyebrow. Something happened during the mission, the young Kunoichi started. Were you hurt? The mother worried. Or did something happen to the Himeru siblings? No, Hana assured her, nothing happened to us. It's about Naruto. Tsum immediately went on alert. Her daughter didn't miss it. What is it? We were scouting the mountains and Naruto fell down a slope, the genin started her story. It was high and steep and he should have ended up scattered into 1,000 tiny pieces, but he survived. He was badly hurt and had to lie in the snow for a whole night, but he pulled through. He suffered multiple fractures and internal damage, but he was able to walk after only 2 days and another 2, and he was completely healthy. When I asked about it, they said it was something like a bloodline, but I've never heard of anything like it. And Naruto seemed skittish, like he was concealing something. And that's not all. She took a deep breath. When he was falling, I felt something. I couldn't recognize it, but it felt sinister and powerful. It disappeared just as suddenly as it appeared. I'm sure I've felt it somewhere before, but I can't remember. The older woman stayed silent for a while, carefully considering her next words. I'm afraid I can't give you an explanation. The only one who can speak about it is Naruto. But he isn't willing to do so, Hana replied. And that isn't the only strange thing about him. He possesses a nearly endless well of energy, it took a full day of running at top speed to make him tired. And there is the matter of the way most of the villagers look at him. Like he committed something terrible. I've heard some rumors, but they sound far-fetched. He's just a child, he couldn't have possibly done some of those things. Sure he can be annoying, but no more than Kiba. Nothing about it makes any sense. She finished her tirade with a questioning look at the other woman. I understand that you're confused, but I cannot give you any explanation, her mother shook her head. You'll have to ask him or find an answer yourself. But be prepared for an answer you won't like. What do you mean? The girl inquired with surprise. I can't tell you, Tsum replied. I understand, Hana said. She felt more confused and intrigued than ever. Hokage's office. Everything appears to be in order, the professor concluded his examination. It took a long time, but he was being exceptionally thorough. It just wouldn't do to rush something like this. The seal is working as it is supposed to. Thank you, Hokage-sama, Tenzo said. So everything is okay? The half asked to fasten his shirt. Yes, Naruto, everything is alright, the old village leader smiled reassuringly. You may go now. Tenzo, stay. I have to speak to you about something. Sure. Bye, Naruto ran through the door. He slammed it behind him and then he was gone. The former Anbu stood calmly and waited for his superior to begin. As you know, Saratobi started, the village has recently suffered a huge blow both to our strength and our reputation, but we cannot afford to appear weak. We should show the prowess of our youngest generation. The Chunin exams start in Kusa in a little over a month. Is your team capable of competing? They don't have to succeed, just put on a good show. Hokage-sama, I'm afraid I cannot allow them to enter now, the Jounin sensei answered sadly. If you have read the last mission report, you would know that they are still unready, all of them prone to acting rash. Naruto is just too young, inexperienced and hot-headed. Hana is still hurting from the loss of her old team, and Haru just suffered a blow, and I don't know how she would deal. If I entered them now, chances are they would get slaughtered. I believe that they would be eligible for the next term, but not just now. I understand, the elderly man nodded. In half a year then. Memorial Stone. Haru didn't visit the Memorial Stone often, but she could immediately see the difference. So many names had been added since she last saw it. The Memorial Stone was meant for shinobi killed in the line of duty, but defending themselves from an unknown attacker was considered the line of duty. So the names of all Uchiha shinobi adorned the stone now. She knelt down next to the memorial and began reading. There were so many she didn't know and others she knew only in passing. She couldn't even assign the names to most of the faces. It took her a while to find her teammate's name near the bottom. She traced her fingers along the symbols. Uchiha Shunsui. He had been a talented shinobi, just like most of his clansmen, and though he wasn't exceptional, he had a bright career before him. And now he was just another name on the stone. He won't do any more missions, won't sneer at her again. Well, there was a reason she hadn't liked him when he was still alive. But no matter his faults, he didn't deserve this. She stood there for a while, she couldn't tell how long, and just stared at the name. Then a rustle of leaves brought her out of her reverie. She saw a man in the standard shinobi uniform land near the stone and kneel down next to her. Well, there had to be more people that had friends in the Uchiha clan. In fact, it was a bit odd that there weren't more mourners. Maybe they were too busy looking for the culprits. Or maybe they weren't dwelling on the dead and dealt with the living instead. And maybe she should be doing the same. She had a new team now. She might not like it too much, but it was her life now. She turned around and left. The next day. When the team disbanded after their training in the evening, Hana joined Haru on her way home. The purple-haired Kunoichi wanted just to be left alone and pointedly ignored her companion, but the brunette wasn't deterred so easily. I heard one of them was your former teammate, she started. Haru just nodded. She didn't want anybody poking their nose in it and hoped the Inuzuka would get the hint. But she wasn't so lucky. I know it hurts, but don't let the pain get to you. And just what do you know? The sword wielder snapped. I lost my old team too, Inuzuka explained. It happened on a mission. I was scouting ahead and they were attacked from behind. I spent a long time just wondering if I could help them had I been with them. I'm still not over it, but I'm trying. And you're telling me this just why? Haru barely looked at her. She really didn't want to talk about it, but the dog mistress was persistent. So you can avoid it. Believe me, wavering in pain and guilt will bring you only trouble. I want to help you. That's what teammates are for, isn't it? I guess it is. They haven't really solved anything, but both girls felt like they would eventually. Later. The team resumed their training routine. They went back to D ranks, spars and elemental training. Naruto got it down first, Hana and Haru were still struggling. The boy then proceeded to perfect his original. Tenzo wasn't happy about it, but Naruto decided to use shadow clones in training to avoid hurting himself. It took a long time before he stopped popping them. The mock mission stepped up in difficulty. They took an extra focus on the possible negative results of reckless behavior, as well as facing unknown opponents. Tenzo was frantically trying to prepare them for the next exams, scheduled to take place in Suna. They completed another C-rank mission, a simple escort of a caravan to the capital and back again. Nothing out of the ordinary happened there. Naruto was bored, the girls were thankful. Then came the time for another interesting mission assignment. Mission room. This will probably be harder than what you have done so far, the Hokage started. Tenzo stiffened. In his experience it never bode well. There have been reports of children gone missing near the northern border. It has been going on for quite some time. The local authorities had no luck investigating. They eventually asked for our assistance. If I may inquire, the sensei dared, why us? Shouldn't a more experienced team be deployed? It would usually be the case, but you have an important asset, Sarutobi explained. You have the youngest shinobi currently in Konoha. Figures. Naruto paled a little. I'm bait, he realized. It made him uncomfortable, but also gave him a sense of responsibility. He hadn't really done anything on the last mission, not that anything happened there, and the first one let's not even go there. He still felt embarrassed every time he remembered it. But this was going to be his show. Despite his initial fear, he was looking forward to this. On the road. They left the Leaf Village at dawn. For some reason or other that was traditionally considered to be the best time to start a mission. They covered the ground quickly. They expected to arrive at their destination sometime the day after tomorrow. How are we going to go about this? Naruto asked. We might just try to follow the tracks, but we might have trouble finding them. It's been days since the last kid disappeared and we don't know when and where it will happen again. Are we going to set up bait? I wouldn't rush it, Tenzo decided. We start with investigating the crime scenes. We might get lucky and find a clue. Using bait is only a last resort. Okay, Naruto nodded, half relieved, half dejected. But in case we have to try it anyway, how long do you think you can hold your transformation? They wanted to know. I've never thought about it, the boy scratched his head. Long, I guess several days, then I'll have to reapply. Good enough, Tenzo nodded. Near the border. They arrived at the small town of Yugo. It was a rather unimportant stop on the trading route between Fire Country and Rice Field Country. Few merchants came through here, most of them preferring the main road to the Lightning Country further southeast. Only after harvest carts loaded with rice traveled on the dirt road. The rest of the year it had barely any visitors. The squad entered the settlement early in the afternoon. The sun shined brightly on the hot summer day, forcing most citizens to spend the time inside, protected from the oppressive heat. Only a couple of people noticed their arrival, but their curious glances promised that the whole Yugo would learn about it shortly. Tenzo didn't like announcing their presence like that, but he had to speak with a local official, and he doubted the man could keep a secret. They knocked on his door and waited for his response. Then they knocked again. When nothing happened, they just opened the door and found the man taking his afternoon nap on a sofa. Tenzo sighed and shook him awake. It took some effort, but eventually the officer opened bleary eyes. When he saw strangers in his office, he was startled. They showed him their mission scroll and explained why they were there. Then they asked for his assistance. First they went through the missing person reports. They haven't learned much more than they already knew. It turned out that most of the victims were orphan street children who nobody missed. Their disappearances had been barely noticed. Then the son of a prominent craftsman disappeared. The consensus was that he had run away. The boy held dreams of becoming a ninja and often spoke about going to Konoha. Their mission scroll stated he never arrived, but a lot of things could have happened to him on the road. It wouldn't be suspicious in itself, but several others followed over time. All of them had some delusion of grandeur and decided to follow it. Neither of them were seen or heard from again. As isolated incidents they could be easily written off, but their frequency was indeed worrisome. Where do we start? Hader mused. The trails are cold and the parents already told all they knew to the local authorities. We'll speak to them anyway, Tenzo decided. It sounds like there's someone recruiting the kids. They might have noticed something. Recruiting them? Naruto blinked. Why do you think so? Hader questioned. Most of them either wanted more from life or had low living standards, they explained. If somebody promised them a better life, they'd jump at the opportunity. Understood. 3 nods answered him. Then let's go question the parents. It turned out that the parents didn't know anything more. The team spent the rest of the afternoon listening to distraught mothers and fathers, pleading for them to return their children, but they haven't gathered any new information. They settled in the only decent inn in Yugo to discuss their options. There weren't many of them. They could still try posing as civilians, but that might take ages. We have to talk to somebody who knew the missing children, Naruto stated. And just what had we been doing the whole afternoon, you genius? Hana snapped. Talking to their parents, the blonde replied. Then what else do you want? The Inyazuka shot him a look usually reserved for slow children. Speak to their friends, the boy explained. They might know something their parents don't. Also, what about the street kids? Some of their peers might have an idea. If there really is someone recruiting, he must have spoken to more children than only the missing ones. Also, is there an orphanage in the town? Or somebody couldn't miss that out. That makes sense, Haru admitted, but it still might not be enough. How can we make sure they would talk to us? There's an old trick to it, their sensei joined the conversation. Make them feel like you understand. So how do we do it? The following day. The orphanage reminded Naruto of old times, before he met Tenzo. He couldn't help but compare the two institutions. This one was smaller and more run down than the one in Konoha, but the children running around the garden and observing the visitors seemed the same. Even the elderly matron could be the sister of the one he used to know. The squad commander went to speak with the proprietor, leaving his 3 students standing outside the door. The foxy boy tried to get in with him, but the Jounin sensei stopped him. Stay here, he ordered, and don't botch it like usual if it's not too complicated an order for you to follow. Then he closed the door, leaving the dejected genin standing in the hallway. Why do we have to stay here? Naruto complained. Shut up, Tiny, Hana chided. It's boring, the youngest of the 3 genin continued. Why can't we do real ninja work? We are following orders, so quit your whining, it's annoying, the Inyazuka chastised. You're mean, the little blonde pouted. Why are you always so mean to me? Because you get on my nerves, she replied with a glare. Why does everyone say that? The yellow-haired youth looked downtrodden and annoyed. Do I really have to answer this? The dog mistress growled. Just shut up and get lost, you twit. Her dogs bared their teeth. Always the same, they grumbled, but got up and wandered around the courtyard. He kicked a couple of stones angrily. I'm a ninja, just like them. Why can't they treat me like one? Do you hear? Ana heard and threw a stone. Naruto barely dodged. Bitch, he shouted before running around the corner. There he sat down, hugging his knees. He hid his face and started sobbing. Soon a child approached him. Are you sad? The newcomer asked. What gave it away? The shinobi replied sarcastically. He wiped his eyes and looked at the speaker. It was a boy, probably a year or two younger than him. He had a round face framed by shoulder-length dark hair and big eyes. You were crying, the younger orphan stated. I wasn't. Naruto protested. The stranger raised an eyebrow. Maybe a little, the blonde admitted grudgingly. They are nasty to you, aren't they? He stated. I know what it is like. Naruto said nothing, just watched him questioningly. What's your name? I'm Daido, the stranger introduced himself. I'm Naruto, the Konoha genin replied. Can we be friends, if just for a while? The dark-eyed child offered. I'd like that, the Uzumaki agreed. That's great, the other boy smiled. It's been lonely here lately. Why? The young ninja inquired. My best friend left, Daido explained. I'm sorry, Naruto apologized. Don't be, Daido replied. He has it better now. How do you know? The young demon vessel wondered. Somebody took him in, the dark-haired orphan answered. It was a really good one. He said Tyra had real potential. He got lucky then, Naruto said sadly looking to the ground. And you are not. The local boy raised an eyebrow. You are a ninja after all. Yeah, I am. The blonde sounded defeated. Aren't you lucky to be getting stronger? Daido scrunched his brow in confusion. I would be, the Konoha shinobi grimaced. What do you mean? The Yugo native looked at him questioningly. Well, you saw my team, Naruto replied. Yes, he nodded understandingly. But surely they aren't always that bad. Sometimes they're worse, the youth replied with a sigh. Sensei thinks I'm just some snotty idiot who passed the genin test by accident. But at least you have someone, Daido said sympathetically. I wish I had. Naruto never looked so dejected and lonesome before. At that moment Tenzo left the matron's office. Team, we're going, he ordered. Where did Naruto wander off again? Once he'll get lost and I'll be in trouble for it. You heard him, the genin in question said. I'd better be going. Can you come back? The local inquired hopefully. I'll try, the blonde promised before joining his team. Here you are. Just try not to get lost again, Tenzo chastised. The squad headed out. The inn. I've gathered that a lot of kids had been adopted lately, Tenzo informed his underlings. What about you? I might have a clue, Naruto smiled. The plan seems to be working. The next day. Naruto found time to visit Daido again. The team split up to look after clues individually. While the others were searching the town, the blonde headed straight to the orphanage. It didn't take him long to locate the dark-haired boy. They relaxed together, playing silly children games, chit-chatting about this and that. Eventually Daido asked what Naruto's squad was doing there. That's a secret, the blonde replied, trying to put on an air of importance. Really? The other boy inquired. Really, the genin confirmed, but he looked like he actually yearned to tell. Come on, the younger child prodded. I won't tell anyone. I don't know. Naruto looked hesitant. I can keep a secret, I promise. Eagerness shone in Daido's dark eyes. I still don't know. The blonde was now refusing just for show. Don't be so uptight, the local orphan didn't relent. We are friends, aren't we? I guess so, the young shinobi admitted. Okay, I'll tell you. But you must never ever tell anyone. It's a great secret, understand? I understand, the wide-eyed child nodded. I won't say a word, I swear. Well, then listen. Naruto leaned closer conspiratorially. We came here to investigate a big case. A big case? Daido looked at him with admiration. Yes, the blonde nodded dramatically, relishing in his importance. Lots and lots of disappearances. People are getting panicked here. Really? I haven't noticed anything, Daido replied skeptically. That's because you're out of the loop, Naruto explained. No, I don't mean that, the younger lad clarified. I haven't noticed anyone panicking. Really? Naruto asked bewildered. But we heard it differently. Then you must have heard it wrong, Daido said with absolute assurance. And nobody disappeared as well. What? The blue-eyed boy asked with an expression of total non-comprehension. They haven't disappeared, the local child explained. They left for a better life, but adults wouldn't understand. You know something about it, the Konoha genin inquired eagerly. If I can tell it to sensei, then he'll have to admit I'm good. Would he really? The younger boy doubted. Well. Of course, Naruto said with a false smile. You don't really believe that, Daido stated. Well, you're right, the blonde deflated. He'll always have me for an incompetent fool, no matter what I do. You wish for a better one, the dark-haired youth said sympathetically. Yes, the young ninja admitted. Maybe I could help, Daido offered. You? Naruto looked doubtful. Don't get offended, but what can you possibly do? Do you remember my friend Taira? I told you about him yesterday. Naruto nodded. He wants to be a ninja too. He found somebody who was looking for talents. I'm sure he would help you too. Really? But I don't know, the Leaf Ninja was unconvinced. I can't just go and leave. That's treason. Like you owe them anything, Daido scoffed. Don't they constantly put you down? Well, yes, but they're still my comrades, Naruto explained. I cannot just abandon them. Don't they think they can do better without you anyway? Daido pointed out. They do, but still. You know what, Daido said. There is a man living not too far from here. He's the contact I have with Taira. Let's go visit him and then you can decide. Okay. Outskirts of Yugo. Daido had led him to an unassuming little house near the edge of the woods. It was situated in the middle of a wildly grown garden, half hidden from view by fruit trees. Here it is, the local child announced. He opened the garden door and entered, Naruto followed him. The dark-haired boy knocked on the door. Enter, a voice sounded from inside. They came in. The hall was just as unremarkable as the exterior. A plain middle-aged man came to greet them. Hello, Daido, he welcomed them. Who's your friend? This is Naruto, the younger boy introduced him proudly. He wants to ask about your offer. What? The man freaked out. You brought one of them here? Are you insane? But Naruto. Daido started his explanation. Was having you on, you incompetent idiot, the owner of the house interrupted. And you lead them straight to us. The child looked terrified. Then we simply kill them all, a new voice stated. Naruto whirled around and froze. The young man who had just appeared moved like a skilled ninja. It didn't look good for him. Chapter 9. Misranked. A strange white-haired ninja in a long shirt moved slowly closer. Naruto had hoped he'd never encounter common mission mishap number 6. A superior shinobi where there shouldn't be any. He went through his list of options. Fighting was out of the question, he was outnumbered, and his opponent appeared to be out of his league. The same went for running. He was trapped inside a house, and he doubted he could outrun the older man anyway. That left only trying to talk his way out of it. Wait, that's a misunderstanding, he lifted his arms in a defensive gesture. I didn't lead anybody here, I really wanted to hear about your offer. My team is nasty to me and… You lie, the enemy shinobi simply stated. You implicated us, so you all have to be eliminated. He lifted his arm and struck the closest target. Daido fell to the ground without a sound. He couldn't comprehend why he wasn't being praised for recruiting a real ninja. The owner of the house soon followed. He simply couldn't believe what was happening. They both sported identical expressions of stunned disbelief on their faces. By that time Naruto had his sword out and charged with wind chakra. He slashed at the still approaching man. The pale shinobi dodged the blade, but a red line still appeared on his clothes. He looked at it as if not comprehending how it happened. Naruto couldn't resist a small smirk. That heavy smoking who once told him that few people expect a blade of wind was obviously right. He had forgotten further gloating and pressed his attack. This time his enemy was prepared. He avoided Naruto's attack widely and caught the small blonde's wrists in his hand. He squeezed hard, causing the genin to drop his weapon and yanked him off the ground. Naruto suddenly came face to face with his annoyed adversary. He didn't even think about his next course of action. He screamed. A stream of wind chakra hit the pale stranger right in the face. He dropped his captive with an ear-piercing shriek and covered his head with his arms. Naruto dove for his ninjato, intent on finishing the job. Before he could make 2 steps his downed opponent moved. Naruto rushed in, but something struck him in the stomach and threw him into the wall. He struggled to catch his breath. The stranger rose to his feet. Blood was covering his face and shoulders, but he didn't appear to be wounded. Naruto could swear he saw a strange pattern dancing over his skin, but it soon disappeared. It seems I'll have to take you seriously after all, the man stated. Naruto's response was another slicing scream, this time with more power behind it. In the enclosed area it had a devastating effect. The walls cracked. Dust was blown into the air and obscured both combatants' vision. A rumbling could barely be heard over the howling of the wind. Then the roof fell. Naruto barely had the time to throw his arms overhead before a couple of wooden planks slammed into him. He should be very thankful for whoever had built such a shoddy house, but he had no time to think about such matters. The ninja shaking dust from his hair was a more pressing concern. He quickly put his hands into a cross-like sign and summoned a bunch of shadow clones and sent them to attack. He didn't wait for the result of their charge. He turned on his heel and ran for his life. He never liked turning his back on a battle, but he wasn't a fan of dying either. And there was a huge chance he'll die here if he cannot escape. He was heading into the town, hoping that the stranger wouldn't want to fight in front of so many witnesses, but he wouldn't put too much money on that. His best chance of survival was in finding his team, namely Tenzo. Too bad they weren't following him closely, but nobody had expected the fish to take the bait so early in the game. The memories of dispersed clones reached him. That was quick. They haven't bought him for more than 10 seconds. At least they were able to tell him something about his opponent's abilities. He was fast and precise in his attacks and used some blades protruding from his sleeves. They seemed odd to him, but there was no time to ponder over it. He created another batch of clones and sent them to cover his back. The clones quickly moved into formation and prepared to fire their most powerful at the same time. The enemy appeared around the corner. Fueton. Great breakthrough, Fueton. Slicing blast and Kaiten. Enden sailed towards the approaching man. Naruto was barely able to perform his only fire technique, but the flames were fanned by the wind techniques into formidable size and temperature. The stranger had just enough time to look surprised before the flames enveloped him. Unfortunately, the techniques couldn't rage for long. Naruto still didn't have sufficient control over them, and the blast ended up hitting some of his own creators. The firestorm died down. The few doppelgangers who survived were treated to the side of their opponents encased in some kind of grayish protective cocoon. This didn't work. The thought ran through all their minds immediately, followed by "we're screwed." They prepared for another attack. The stranger's cocoon slowly started retreating into his body. What in the world is that? The clones wondered. "I see that you are intrigued by my ability," the white-haired man said, slowly making his way toward them. "You see, I can control my bones. I can make them grow at will and withdraw them from any part of my body." To prove his words, he pulled one from his upper arm. It had the shape of a short sword. The clones watched in fascination as the gnawing wound on his shoulder closed. The enemy shinobi walked yet closer. One of the replicas shook off his stupor and charged at him. His ninjato was easily blocked. "Did I mention that I can control the density of my bones as well? This is harder than steel," the pale ninja continued his monologue. The clone attacked again, and once again he was easily blocked. But he forced the enemy to turn his attention away from his fellow doppelgangers. In the absence of a better plan, they tried another combo ninjutsu attack. Their target, however, noticed it coming and jumped out of the way. One of his arms was signed, but he didn't sustain any considerable damage. He simply seemed pissed. Bone spikes sprouted from his arm joints, then he disappeared in a blur. The clones were quickly dispersed. The bone user stood and looked around. He only now noticed that the original wasn't there. He retracted the bones into his body, then gave pursuit. "Downtown you go." Naruto was running like his life depended on it. Correction, his life actually depended on it. He had created another bunch of shadow clones and had them spread out. He had to locate his team quickly or he would be done for. So far he had no luck. He threw a glance over his shoulder. Nothing. He could just hope that it meant his enemy was pursuing one of his doppelgangers or even gave up altogether, not that he was about to spring from behind the nearest corner and cut him into 1,000 little pieces before he could say oops. A rush of memories suddenly assaulted him. One of his clones had been struck down. Where was it? Far enough, but his enemy was fast. He could find him soon. Naruto had thought he couldn't run faster, but he somehow managed. He felt another clone dispersing. Where was Tenzo? He noticed a gray body. One of Hana's dogs. He changed his course, then realized it was just some random street mutt that didn't even look much like an Inyazuka ninja dog. He suppressed the urge to scream in frustration. He had to spare his breath. 2 more of his clones met their end. Then he realized something. There was a flash of purple before the last clone dispersed. Hot arrow. He didn't waste even a fraction of a second considering what he should do. It didn't matter anymore that the enemy was stronger. His teammate was in danger. He headed towards them. But hot arrow. She had little warning. One moment she was just walking the street looking for anything significant for their mission, the next there was her young teammate running at top speed. Then another ninja appeared and cut him down with a strange-looking blade. She unsheathed her own. Naruto dispersed into smoke. A shadow clone, she recognized. Next came the realization that she was now facing alone against an obviously superior shinobi. A string of curses ran through her mind. She was in a bad situation. What few people were out in the street started running away. She was suddenly alone with only her sword between herself and the enemy. The kodachi in her hand suddenly looked utterly insignificant. She was reminded of her Chunin exams match. Something was telling her that this duel will probably end in just as swift and brutal a manner. Unless it would be even swifter and more brutal. Her breath caught in her throat. She had trained so hard, improved so much, yet it seemed like it was all for nothing. She felt utterly defeated and the battle hadn't even started. She shook her head. She had to get a grip of herself. Such thoughts would only get her killed. She assumed her beginning stance. The enemy shinobi strode towards her at a leisurely pace. It just strengthened her belief that she was outclassed here. But she was determined not to go down without a fight. She adjusted her grip on the handle. The stranger walked closer. She didn't dare to attack him, but she feared that if she let him have the first strike, she wouldn't be able to block it. A decision was taken from her. A flash of movement and she instinctively moved. The odd whitish weapon slid along her blade. Her leg shot out, connecting with her opponent's flank. He didn't even flinch, but her foot felt like she just kicked a hard rock. She jumped back and disengaged. He turned towards her and moved in for an attack. She dodged by a hair's breadth. She stabbed with her sword but hit only thin air. A blow struck her side and threw her into a nearby flower yard. She scrambled to her legs. Strangely enough, her opponent allowed her to do so. Yet another sign how he disregarded her skill. She felt insulted even though it meant she would get to live a while longer. She hated being underestimated, even when it was deserved. She charged her sword with chakra, trying to turn it into her lightning element. She partially succeeded. She let out a battle cry and charged. Desperation lent her strength. With a burst of speed she managed to reach her opponent before he could think about dodging. He just blocked with his forearm. The lightning made him jerk, but her blade barely broke his skin. It was even worse than she had thought. Another fist to her ribs brought her out of her musings. She once again found herself in the flowers. This time she had no time to get back up. Her enemy was upon her, his blade poised to strike. Her own sword was lying discarded in the dirt. She could just close her eyes and wait for the blow to come. It never did. She heard a crack followed by a thud. She opened her eyes hesitantly. The pale man was sprawled on the ground. A few feet away was Naruto just getting to his feet, one hand reaching for his ninjato. She had a brief flashback to their team test and Naruto saving her from the wooden figurine. She had never felt so relieved to see him. Naruto was functioning on pure adrenaline. When he saw the pale man just about to kill Haderu, he just tackled him. He was lucky and managed to blindside the pale man, but now he was going to need all his skills and cunning to pull through. And it might still not be enough. "It seems I won't have to search the town for you after all," the enemy ninja said. "It's just convenient for me." The blonde didn't bother to answer, instead just pushed chakra to his blade. Then he charged with his ninjato, supporting it with a slicing scream. The white-haired shinobi moved away, but he lost one of his long sleeves. Then Naruto had to dodge a strike to his back. Haderu used a brief respite to form hand seals. Raiden. Lightning blast. A bolt of electricity launched from her hand. The target avoided it. Naruto let out another slicing scream. The white-haired ninja was a bit off balance from his teammate's attack and he managed to hit. Red lines appeared all over the gray-clad man's body, but unfortunately none of the gashes were more than skin deep. The blonde boy created a bunch of shadow clones. His opponent just scowled at them. White spikes grew from his hands. Half of the clones transformed into perfect copies of the purple-haired Kunoichi. They started running around and mingling together. The original grabbed Haderu's hand and tried to get away in the confusion. "I won't fall for the same trick twice," the enemy shinobi stated calmly, methodically destroying the doppelgangers. It took him even less time than the last time. The two would-be escapees had barely time to round the corner. They skidded to an abrupt halt when the stranger appeared in front of them, his bone blades at the ready. "Now it's time to end the game," he declared, "I'm getting bored of it." Before he could make his words reality, a gray furry tornado attacked him. He jumped to avoid the Tsuuga when another two closed in on him. He twisted his body in the air to prevent a direct hit when a fourth one slammed into him. "Hana!" Naruto exclaimed, relieved. The pale ninja crashed into a nearby house. The four whirlwinds stopped, revealing the Inyazuka girl and her three canine partners. "In trouble again, Tiny," she said. "Quit your joking, he's good," the youngest teammate informed her. As if to prove his words, the downed ninja got up, his injuries gone, his skin covered in a strange geometrical pattern. "What's that?" the dog mistress asked, her eyes widening. "Not a clue," Naruto shouted. "It seems like I will have to take you seriously after all," the enemy said. Bone blades sprouted from every joint. "Time to step it up," Hana decided. "Let's see how he'll handle this. Inyazuka style." Satoru. Chakra swirled around her and one of her dogs. The opponent tried to prevent her completing but both Naruto and Haderu jumped in front of him, their swords charged with their elemental chakra. Hana's was finished. In her place now stood a huge double-headed wolf. The pale ninja's eyes widened in surprise. "Urauga!" snarled the beast and turned into a furry tornado. It charged forward at much greater speed than the Tsuuga had. He had no time to dodge, he could only brace himself for the impact. The attack slammed him into the house, shattering the walls and coming through on the other side. The two remaining dogs ran to aid their mistress. Naruto and Haderu followed. Hana and her dogs separated and got to their feet. They looked at their opponent and gasped. Where they had fully expected a mangled corpse was instead a living monster. They couldn't describe it any other way. It somewhat resembled the ninja they had been facing, but it had brown skin, sinister yellow eyes and bone spikes protruding from its back. There was even a long spiky tail. "What the hell?" Hana stammered. She summed up the thoughts of the entire team quite nicely. Then the monster rose to its feet and the team took a step back like one man and two women. The abomination reached behind its back and pulled something out. It looked like some kind of chain whip. They mutually decided not to think about what it actually was. "What now?" Hana whispered. They all had already fired their strongest attacks and that thing didn't seem to be even wounded. "Buy time," Naruto suggested. As he saw it, their best chance was still to wait until their sensei arrived and hope that their adversary wasn't stronger than them. He didn't even want to think about what would happen if that wasn't the case. The monstrosity readied his whip for an attack. Naruto let out another slicing scream. It barely had any effect. The brown thing just continued its charge. The three genin scattered. They weren't fast enough. The whip caught Hateru in the side. Blood sprayed out. The kunoichi fell to her knees and screamed. Ana saw another teammate being cut down by an enemy. She let out a battle cry and prepared to charge. Naruto beat her to it. He shot forward and slammed into the enemy. The thing actually stumbled back, unprepared for such a vicious assault. The boy pressed his advantage. He struck the now brown-skinned man in the face. It felt like punching a rock, but he paid it no heed. A familiar red heat was rising inside him. Usually it would scare him, but now he welcomed it, along with the power accompanying it. That abomination in front of him had hurt his teammate. It had to pay. The strange ninja got over his surprise and threw the feral boy off him. Naruto just flipped in the air and landed on his feet. He charged again, all finesse forgotten. He attacked with his bare fists, intent on inflicting a lot of harm. A voice in the back of his mind cheered him on. The monster counterattacked. The blonde boy evaded the dangerously sharp spikes without really thinking about it. He just knew they were there even though he could see only about a half of them. He punched his enemy again. He noticed that his fingernails changed into claws, but he wasn't surprised. Somehow it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Another of his strikes was blocked by a shield of bones. Naruto snarled in anger. He put more chakra into his fist. It was enveloped in a red glow. The strange ninja's eyes widened for a split second. But he was an experienced fighter and reacted on instinct. He threw the now red-eyed boy off him before the hit could connect. He bared his teeth in rage. The two kunoichi were staring in amazement and fear at the battle taking place in front of them. First a strange pale ninja turned into some brown monstrosity, then their young teammate was enveloped in a sinister red aura, his appearance changing like if he used the Inyazuka beast imitation. He also improved in both strength and speed. They both itched to aid their comrade, but the enemy left no openings. The creature with bone spikes swung its whip to Naruto. The genin ducked low, then tried to claw the thing's stomach. He was swiped away by his opponent's left arm. He jumped high and tried to get in a kick. The whip headed for him and he barely got his forearms up in time to prevent a hit to his face. His trajectory was changed and he landed on the street. He rolled to avoid a kick, but a bone suddenly sprouted from the monster's ankle and caught him in the shoulder. He howled in pain. He swiped at his enemy, but he was too far to hit. But the red chakra enveloping him formed a claw extending further than his arm's reach and connected with the enemy's stomach. 4 deep gashes appeared in the brown skin and red blood flowed out. The monstrous shinobi looked at them in surprise, as if he had trouble believing what had just happened to him. But soon his face hardened. Then it melted into surprise again as he was hit by Itsuuga from behind. Hana noticed his moment of distraction and capitalized on it. The spiked monster fell, but he sported only a flesh wound. He swung his grayish claw at the dog mistress. It was too fast to dodge. Inyazuka could just lift her arm in an attempt to block. Before the hit could land, Naruto rejoined the fray. He grabbed the spiked arm, halting its descent towards Hana. His shoulder still hurt, but he could already feel the muscle mending. The chakra surrounding him burned the brown skin. The enemy struck with a speed unseen before. The blonde barely had the time to move before the whitish spikes pierced his side. He avoided a lethal hit, but the wound was serious nevertheless. He would have roared, but his ribs hurt too much for that. He struck the offending appendage instead, intent on ripping it off the unnatural body. The red chakra around his hand intensified, gaining the jagged edges of the wind element. His swipe connected with the elbow. There was a sickening snap. He didn't manage to sever the arm, but the sinew and bones were mangled. He yanked the now useless limb from his chest. He tried to attack again, but his body was instead racked by a sickening cough. Blood flew from his mouth. The crack of lightning resounded. Hateru saw her opening and swung her sword at the damaged elbow. The chakra-laced blade cut deep. The appendage now hung only on a thin patch of skin. The monstrous ninja screamed in rage and disbelief. Then he exploded in a flurry of motion. The threesome suddenly found themselves on the receiving end of a veritable storm of whip strikes. Hateru was thrown backwards with a deep gash across her ribs. Hana was flung into the wall of a nearby house by a vicious kick to her stomach. One of her dogs was lying on the ground whining, having been hit by the spiked tail. Naruto tried to attack, but a heavy hit forced him back to his knees. Then the whip was stopped by a tree suddenly sprouting from the ground. Before the brown warrior could blink in surprise, a sword hit the back of his neck. His ultra-dense bone stopped the hit, but he was thrown off balance. Before he could regain it, he was bound by rapidly growing tree branches. He barely had the time to create a bone shield before a stab pierced his skin. He immediately started growing blades to cut down the tree, but new branches quickly replaced those he managed to cut. It was a struggle of endurance. But it was 4 people and 3 dogs against 1. While he was preoccupied with Tenzo, Naruto scrambled to his feet and grabbed his sword. The red haze was now gone from his mind and he could think clearly once again. He held his blade in a one-handed grip, his left shoulder not being completely healed yet, and charged it with wind chakra. His injuries were bothering him, but he was able to move, though with difficulty. He swung with all his might. The blade cut deep, the sharp wind chakra cutting even through the reinforced material of the bone wielder's spine. With the spinal cord severed, his legs sagged bonelessly. Naruto sunk to the ground as well. His strength left him with the Kyuubi's chakra. He barely had the energy left to crawl away from the battle zone. The spiked monstrosity opened its mouth in disbelief of what had just occurred. It was unthinkable that somebody would actually be able to cut through his bone armor in his second stage. But it wasn't a tragedy, his accelerated healing would take care of his severed spine soon. But for the moment he couldn't move his lower body, and his enemies saw it. The Mokuton user wasn't one to let such an opportunity pass unexploited. The point of his katana was aimed precisely. The tip entered between the parted lips and pierced through the palate. The bone wielder had reinforced all the bones near the surface of his body, but forgot about those on the inside. The blade entered his brain. Even his regeneration wasn't able to deal with that. The Konoha shinobi watched in amazement as the beast started changing again. First the skin lost its brown color, a strange pattern appearing instead. Then even that slowly receded, revealing the surprised pale face of the young ninja. Only the bone appendages remained still attached to the corpse being held upright by the tree. The squad just watched in silence, clutching their wounds, not quite believing that the nightmarish battle was really over. Tenzo cut the throat of the defeated ninja for good measure. The stranger didn't even twitch, no geyser of blood flowed from his jugular. He was indeed dead. What the hell was that? Hana summarized the thoughts of all squad members. I don't know, their sensei replied. Can you tell me what led to this? But first take care of your wounds. Hana nodded, realizing she was the team's medic, and went to work. Later. Hana sagged with tiredness. She had patched the team up the best she could and was proud to declare that nobody would die of their wounds. Unfortunately they were in no shape to continue the mission. I wouldn't have allowed you to continue anyway, the former Anbu said. We already encountered an A-rank enemy and he didn't seem like the boss. Naruto couldn't decide between feeling disappointed and relieved. On one hand he didn't want to abandon a mission that so far had been mainly his show, on the other he really didn't want to face such a monster again. He would never admit it, but he was secretly glad for the order to retreat. The townspeople dared to come out of their hiding holes after the street was quiet for long enough. The owner of the destroyed house was in tears, demanding compensation for his demolished dwelling. The 3 genin tried to blame it on the dead ninja, but it did them little good. It seemed like they would have to pay for it anyway. Then the mayor appeared and wanted to know what had happened. They gave him a brief report. I didn't call you here to ruin my town, the official lamented. We didn't come here to fight an A-ranked opponent, Tenzo countered. Such things sometimes happen. I hope you'll at least solve the mystery, he said. Rest assured that Konoha will do everything to find out where he came from, the Mokuton wielder pointed to the corpse still supported by the trees. I'll hold you to your word, the mayor promised. I know, they confirmed. We'll now go and bring reinforcements. The 3 genin breathed a collective sigh of relief. They couldn't wait to leave Yugo behind. Chapter 10. Explanations. I think it's time for some explanations, Hana declared when they settled for the night. It was a long journey back to Konoha. Their injuries prevented them from running, and even walking caused them a lot of pain. They haven't moved so slowly before unless they were escorting a caravan. Naruto visibly shrunk under his teammate's gaze. His side was hurting badly, even his enhanced healing couldn't take care of that much damage in such a short time. I understand that everyone has their own secrets, continued the Inuzuka, but there should also be trust between teammates. The young blonde just stared desperately at the ground, wishing a solution of this situation miraculously appeared there. But alas, nothing happened. The ground stayed just as it was, brown, muddy and covered in dried leaves. Seeing his discomfort, the girl mellowed. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, just remember, you can always trust your teammates. I know, answered the boy weakly, but didn't add anything else. You know what, the Kunoichi sighed when her youngest teammate stayed stubbornly silent, you don't have to tell me now. I'll be listening whenever you are ready. Thank you, Naruto whispered. You're welcome, the dog mistress replied. Outward she appeared calm, but inside her curiosity was churning. Just what was her roommate's secret? That red chakra seemed now more familiar than ever, but she still couldn't pinpoint where she had encountered it before. Well, she just had to wait. She sighed. Patience was never her forte. Back in Konoha. The squad felt immensely relieved when they came within sight of the gates of Konoha. Tenzo sent the three genin to the hospital and went on to give a report. Sandaime looked gravely when he finished. Are you positive about that? Not really, the former Anbu replied, but it's the only thing it remotely resembled. It can of course be something else, but it just reminded me of what I saw of Midarashi's curse seal. I see, the Hokage nodded solemnly. And you couldn't bring the body back? Unfortunately no, the wood user answered. All the genin were wounded and neither of us is an expert. We tried to seal it into a scroll, but we botched something and damaged the body instead. We brought the scroll, but I doubt anybody would be able to get anything out of it. We have to try anyway, the elderly village leader decided. If you are correct, it would probably cause a lot of trouble for us. You are dismissed now. Tenzo bowed and left the room. Only after the door closed after him allowed the Hokage the worry he felt to show on his face. He stuffed his pipe with tobacco and lit it with a bit of fire chakra. He sorely needed its comfort right now. The dots were beginning to connect. If there really was a new shinobi village in the making and if Orochimaru was behind it, things could turn very ugly anytime. He'll have to send Jiraiya to investigate. Konoha Hospital. Naruto was declared healthy almost as soon as the doctor looked at him. It didn't surprise him. His injuries have completely healed during the second day of their trip back. He wanted to make sure his teammates were alright, but the nurses wouldn't allow him, claiming they were still in surgery. This worried the boy a bit, but he tried to convince himself it was just the hospital staff being mean to him and not the two Kunoichi being hurt that badly. They managed to walk all the way from Yugo to Konoha after all. Having nothing to do, he decided to go eat some ramen. It never failed to improve his mood. It worked its magic even today as well. After the second bowl he was already chatting happily with Tucci and Am. Feeling much better after the food, he wandered to the tree hideout. There was still a lot on his mind, but now he could think about it with a more positive outlook. He had used Kyuubi's power in front of his teammates. He could make up some excuse, but it would only work for so long. Especially Hana seemed to be catching on. Sooner or later, he'll have to come clean. He wanted to believe that his teammates would understand, but he could never shake the icy feeling of fear that they might abandon him or hate him like most of the villagers. He decided it would be better if he told them before they found out from someone else, but his courage left him every time he thought about doing so. He resolved to do something about it, just not right now. Somewhere in rice field country. Jiraiya was sitting at the bar, drinking and ogling the young ladies, pretending to be interested solely in their assets. In fact, he was keeping an ear on every snippet of conversation going on around him. He had hoped to learn some new information here, but so far he had no luck. People around him were chatting only about inconsequential little things, just like in the last establishment and the one before that. He had been deeply rattled when he had first heard about little Naruto's fight against the Kaguya with the curse seal. He didn't even want to think about what could have happened had his team not intervened. He was half mad at his sensei for assigning the child such a dangerous mission, but he understood that such things sometimes happened and it was upon people like him to make sure they didn't occur too often. The old guilt came back again. If he just could have done something about Orochimaru, if he could have prevented his friend from leaving, if he managed to keep better track of his traitorous teammate. The list went on and on. The snake Sannin was somewhere out there, gathering powerful subordinates, conducting who knows how sick experiments, and he was powerless to do anything about it. Heck, he didn't even have a clue where to find him. He waved at the pretty barmaid to pour him another cup of sake. Wallowing in guilt never accomplished anything. He leaned against the bar comfortably, straining his ears to catch every bit of gossip. Maybe tonight he would get lucky and learn what that snake was up to. 2 weeks later. Both girls were finally released from the hospital, but couldn't resume their training in earnest yet. Naruto decided it was as good a time as any to come out with the truth. He was still anxious, scratched, downright scared about their possible reactions, but he couldn't keep pretending much longer. They would find out sooner or later anyway, and it would be better if it was from him. So one sunny afternoon they all gathered on their regular training grounds, all of them waiting to hear what the youngest team member had to say. I don't know where to start, Naruto said nervously. Try the beginning, Hana suggested. Yes, crap, this is hard. He had prepared a whole speech beforehand, but suddenly couldn't bring himself to actually recite it. We have the whole afternoon, Hana remarked. There's no need to rush. If you need more time. No, that's fine, the blonde refused. I have to say it now or I'll never gather the courage again. Naruto is actually scared of something, so Inuzuka raised an eyebrow. That must be a first. The boy just scowled at her. Don't make fun of him, Hana, Tenzo chastised her. It's hard enough as it is. Okay, I'm quiet now, she backed off. So what is it? Naruto took a deep breath and started speaking. Hana listened to his tale in silence. Yes, everything about the enigmatic boy suddenly made sense. The first time he mentioned Kyuubi, something in her head clicked. She remembered where she had encountered the oppressive chakra she had felt in the Grey Mist Mountains and later when they were fighting the bone monster before. She had been barely 5 years old when the nine-tailed demon attacked, but it was an event that had engraved itself deep into her mind before she managed to bury it within the deepest recesses of her memory. Now everything was coming back to the forefront. 8 years ago. Mama. Mama. The 5-year-old girl with red triangle marks on her cheeks cried. She was desperately running around her clan's compound, searching for her parents. She didn't even try to deny she was scared, even though big Inuzuka girls should be brave. There was a feeling of dread and doom in the air, and the night sky on the horizon was tinged red, like a great fire was burning there. Her clansmen were running back and forth, gathering their battle gear. The big and usually so strong and confident hounds were covering in corners and whining. It was a scene of utter chaos. Mama. There are you, cried the girl relieved upon seeing her mother. Tsume was standing among a large group of Inuzuka ninja, giving them some last-minute orders. Hana. What are you doing here? The older woman looked afraid. The child paused. She had never seen her mother like that. She was always the embodiment of strength to her. You should go to the shelters. But I want to stay with you. Hana put on a show of bravado she didn't quite feel. You can't, pup, her mother answered. We're going to fight. I can fight too, she proudly declared. She had gotten a set of practice kunai for her last birthday and could now hit a tree from 20 steps away. I'm a big girl now. Honey, Tsume knelt in front of her, listen to me. This isn't a battle you can fight. But I'll give you a mission. Okay. The girl nodded enthusiastically. The woman smiled. Protect your brother, Hana. He's just a baby. Take him to the shelters. Understand? Yes, she confirmed. But girl, her mother ruffled her hair. Remember, I will always love you. And now go. With those words, Tsume got up and returned to the group of shinobi she had been commanding. Hana headed back inside the compound and picked baby Kiba from his crib. He was heavy, but she was a strong Inuzuka and could handle his weight. She left the clan compound and ran to the streets towards the Hokage monument where the shelters were. Everywhere around here were people rushing back and forth, civilians panicking, ninja heading for battle. She could have smelled their fear even if she hadn't been an Inuzuka. Her mother's parting words kept replaying in her head. Mommy doesn't expect to come back. That thought scared her more than anything in her young life. Back in the present. Hana guessed they had been lucky. Both her parents had come back that day, wounded and exhausted, but alive. Many others hadn't been so fortunate. She couldn't remember the exact number of clansmen who had died that day, but she knew there were many. And others came back crippled, they up to this day wobbled around the compound on wooden legs or had to do everything with just one hand. Yes, the destruction had been terrible. Hearing that the monster responsible was still around was just plain scary. Yet she couldn't reconcile the image of the fearsome beast with her young, sometimes funny, sometimes annoying teammate. Only during the battle in Yugo. Haru was also remembering. She hadn't been in Konoha when it happened, her parents had taken her on a trip to visit their relatives scattered around the fire country, but she had seen the resulting destruction and heard a lot of tales. She couldn't even fathom what kind of power the demon held. Hearing that it was sealed within the kid beside her was just surreal. I don't think I fully get it yet, she said. Yes, wrapping my mind around it is quite hard, Hana agreed. You aren't going to hate me then? Naruto peeped hopefully. I don't know what to say, Hana replied. Ask me in a week or so. She got up and left. Hana remained sitting. Naruto watched her anxiously waiting for her to speak. The girl was meanwhile lost in thoughts. The fear of the demon, the hate she held towards the one who hurt her clan so badly and pack instincts and protectiveness over her teammate along with budding friendship were waging war inside her heart. It promised to be a long and drawn-out battle. I think she said when the silence lasted for too long, I'll take a page from Hadere's book and take some time to think it over. It was quite a bombshell you just dropped. But. You aren't going to hate me, are you? The boy demanded with his impossibly wide blue eyes. She sighed. Even an Inuzuka wasn't completely immune against the dreaded puppy dog eyes, no matter how much practice she had resisting them. No, brat, I'm not going to hate you. Later that week. It had been a tense couple of days since Naruto's confession. The team started meeting again, not for physical training, the two kunoichi still needed more time to recuperate, but for planning and strategy sessions. Those were awkward occasions. There was something that everybody both wanted to speak of and desired to avoid. It was looming over them, yet they were desperately trying to ignore its presence. Haru was the first one to address the issue. "What is it like?" she asked. "What?" Naruto turned startled blue eyes towards her. "I asked what it is like to have that thing inside you," she elaborated. "Or is it an insensitive question?" "No, not at all," he shook his head. "Most of the time it's quiet, I don't even know about it. Sometimes, when I'm in danger or angry, I can feel its power." "And what is that like?" Haru inquired further. "Hot and burning," he replied. "And scary." "No kidding," the purple-haired girl muttered. "Do you fear me?" the blonde asked. "No," she answered. "Looking at you, you're just a little shrimp." "Hey." Naruto protested. "I'm still scared of the power within you," she continued, "but as long as you don't use it in front of me, it should be fine." "That's good," the boy smiled for the first time in a week. Several weeks later. It took a long time before the wounded members of Team Tenzo were declared fit for duty. They quickly slipped into their old routine of training and D ranks. Their sensei also informed them that they were eligible for the next Chunin exams in Sun and started preparing them for prolonged stay in the desert. Everybody was excited about it, but they couldn't help but feel a bit apprehensive. Suna exams tended to be tough. They knew the main problem would be water. Naruto took extra lessons with Kanu, trying to figure out a way to store large reserves of the liquid in an easily accessible way. They also decided to test their newly acquired skills with another C-rank mission. Danzaku Kai. Protecting Lady Mao was the worst assignment they've ever got. Seriously. Even when they had to fight the bone freak, it hadn't been that bad. That woman insisted that she didn't need protection, nobody would want to harm her, and they really didn't need to stick so close to her. She used every possible opportunity to give them a slip, but the noses of Himeru's siblings couldn't be fooled, even though she made a valiant attempt to destroy their sense of smell with her perfume. All three genin had catastrophic scenarios running through their minds. The mock missions equipped them with a vast knowledge of what could possibly go wrong with such a client. Any passerby might be an assassin who would pluck a poison into her without them noticing. A kunai might come flying from anywhere, piercing her richly decorated neck. A roof tile might fall on her head. She might run under a speeding cart while trying to ditch them. She might fall out a window attempting to give them a slip. The list went on and on. Even when they had to guard Anko during their training, it wasn't quite like this. All three genin wished something happened to break the torturous routine. "Why are we even escorting her?" Naruto whispered. "It's not like anyone would miss that shrew." "We're getting paid for it," Haru whispered back. They were alone with the client now. Tenzo and Hana were resting, scheduled to take the evening shift. "Not nearly enough," the blonde retorted. "Why do we have to be here when she doesn't want us to?" "Her husband hired us," the purple-haired girl reminded him. "I still don't understand why. In my humble opinion, he would be better off without her." It wasn't that Lady Mao was an unattractive woman, quite the contrary, but she possessed a shrill voice and mean demeanor, quickly antagonizing everybody within her vicinity. Team Tenzo started hating her after she dubbed them the brat, the bitch and the wench within 5 minutes of meeting each other. She only solidified the feeling after she ordered the bitch to keep her flea bags away from her. The Inyazuka foursome had to be forcibly restrained from biting her. "Maybe he wants to make sure she can't meet her lover," the Yazuki suggested. "You mean somebody would actually want to spend time with her even when he doesn't have to?" Naruto looked at her dubiously. "Men are weird," Haru shrugged. "Hey, I'm a man too," Naruto reminded her. "You're just a little brat," the older girl replied. "Lady Mao is rubbing off on you," the short blonde commented. "No, you're just annoying me," Kunoichi corrected. "I'm not that bad, am I?" Naruto pouted. "Do I really have to answer that?" Their conversation was halted by their charge's next attempt at giving them a slip. They both had to hurry to keep up with her before she could disappear in the midday crowd. The high-born woman gave them an evil eye before pretending she was just interested in something at the nearest stall. Naruto personally had no idea what she could find so fascinating about gardening tools. Somebody with such long fingernails couldn't have possibly touched work in her whole life. Lady Mao seemed to realize that as well and in a slow and dignified manner moved to the next stall, that one selling vegetables. She wasn't the kind of woman to cook for herself either, so she moved even further on. She passed several more vendors before she noticed a door that seemed to be of interest for her. She entered without hesitation. The casino was full of life inside, though not as busy as the streets outside. It was obviously a high-class establishment and Lady Mao fit there perfectly. They couldn't say the same for themselves, their clothes being made more for practical use than looking good. They just tried to look tough instead, though it was an uneasy task, being just short of 9 and 13 respectively. The noblewoman passed between the tables with various games of chance before settling down to one that caught her fancy. Or maybe it was just the handsome bookmaker who caught her fancy, judging from the way she batted her eyelashes at him. She started gambling and losing money steadily. It was no wonder she didn't pay much attention to the game. It changed when her money reserves thinned and she demanded they would help her and spy on the other players' cards. They flat out refused. Naruto claimed it wasn't in their contract. The real reason was he wouldn't do anything Lady Mao asked from him because she pissed him off too much. She then offered to pay them for it. Haru pointed out that the casino had people watching out for cheaters and they would get caught. Some kind of ninja you are, the woman scoffed. Just stupid brats playing at being tough. Naruto wished somebody tried to assassinate the lady that moment so he could show her just how tough he was. Or maybe he wouldn't, one failed mission wasn't too bad if it meant he would never have to see that person again. The people watching the casino would be ninja too, Haru explained, and specialists at detecting cheaters. It just pays off for the owners to hire the best. You don't want to know what they do to the culprits, she trailed off with a well-executed shudder. If Mao paled at the words, it was impossible to tell under all that makeup. But if you want your money back, the kunoichi continued, over there is a lady who seems to be losing even worse than you are. Lady Mao shot her an offended glare, but looked the pointed way. Surely there was a beautiful young woman with long blonde hair and chest of impossible proportions, scowling at the ever-dwindling pile of chips in front of her. The other patrons around the table were trembling with barely restrained excitement. They looked like it was a given the woman would lose. Lady Mao stood up and walked there. She wanted to sit at the table, but all the seats were taken and long queues formed behind them. Let me in there, Lady Mao said in a commanding tone trying to push to the table. At back, lady, I was here first, one of the patrons said in a no-nonsense tone. How rude, the noblewoman scowled. Don't you know who I am? No, the man answered flatly, turning his attention back to the game. I let you know, I am. Lady, he interrupted her. Even if you were daimyo's wife, I wouldn't let you pass. So now please get back in the line. You. Lady Mao probably turned red, but the makeup hid that as well. Boy, she turned to Naruto, remove this person from my way. The man's eyes widened. That's not in my contract, the blonde answered flatly. It was hard to hide his mirth, but he managed. Impudent whelp, you do as I say. Her beautiful face was twisted in rage. It is not in my contract, he repeated. Listen, brat, money is important, so you'd better. Excuse me, lady, but could you please tone your argument down? A new voice entered the conversation. And you are? Mao scowled at the newcomer. It was a young, pretty, black-haired woman in dark clothing. I am Shizune, she introduced herself. My lady told me to ask you to quiet down, she cannot concentrate on the game. And I care why. Lady Mao was angry and she wanted everybody to feel it. My mistress possesses both a short temper and very strong fists, the dark-haired woman explained. She has no problem using them when somebody angers her greatly. I don't care. I have bodyguards. Their client for the first time looked absolutely assured of their competence. A genin team, I see, Shizune observed. They would do you no good against Tsunade-sama. Tsunade as in the Tsunade. Naruto's eyes widened in an impossible size. His eyes strayed towards the woman currently betting most of her remaining chips. Yes, that's her, the young woman confirmed. Wow, he exclaimed. You make it sound like she was a big deal, Lady Mao scoffed. You mean you never heard about Tsunade? Haru asked incredulously. No, and don't be rude, wench. Haru gritted her teeth. Shizune shot her a sympathetic look. Do you think we can talk to her? Naruto asked. I advise against it, the dark-haired woman said. She doesn't want to see anybody from Konoha. Too bad, the boy grimaced. It's not every day you meet a legend. You don't know what it is like meeting her every day, Shizune laughed. I don't even know your name, boy. And how are things back in Konoha? I am Uzumaki Naruto and this is Yuzuki Haru. Konoha is still standing, beside that, I'm probably not supposed to tell. Fair enough, Tsunade's assistant laughed. I'm pleased to meet you too. Don't be chatting with strangers when you are supposed to be protecting me, Lady Mao interrupted. She was angry that Haru foiled her attempt to slip away while Naruto was preoccupied. Yes. Lady Mao, he uttered. We're leaving, brat, the noblewoman ordered. We're leaving, Shizune, Tsunade entered the conversation. She had just lost the last of her chips and nobody around wanted to loan her more. She gave the Konoha shinobi an unfriendly glare. Naruto wanted to say something to her, but the look in her amber eyes stopped him. Sorry, guys, I have to go, the apprentice smiled apologetically. We too, Naruto said following Lady Mao. Can we meet again? He called. That depends on my lady, Shizune answered. Then the crowd separated them. They didn't get to see each other again, not for a long time to come. Tsunade and her assistant had skipped town during the night, whether she was running from debt collectors or bad memories was unknown to everyone but her. Team Tenzo endured one more week of torture under Lady Mao before finally returning to Konoha to their training and preparations for the exams. Before the exams. The day before they were supposed to leave finally came. Everybody was at home packing their things, thinking about the upcoming event. Hader was alone in her home. Her cousin was away on a mission. Last time they had talked, Yugao had warned her about the dangers, but she wasn't overly concerned about it. She had entered a Chunin exam before, and even though she didn't fare too well, she learned how the exams were done, and she was sure she could take them with no trouble at all. Now she had gotten so much better. Really, it was going to be a breeze. Or that was what she was trying to convince herself. Sometimes her left forearm still hurts. Naruto and Tenzo were in their apartment going over the things they might need. First on their list of must-haves was water. Tenzo stressed the importance of good hydration in the arid climate of Wind Country almost every day, and Naruto had spent many evenings with Kanu, trying to find the best way to store large quantities of it in an easily accessible manner. They had consulted many scrolls before they came up with a seal that could release water gradually. The only disadvantage was that the supply of liquid stored was limited. It was still better than bottles. Naruto had one backpack filled with sealing scrolls of that kind. The boy was excited, eager to try his strength against the best other villages had to offer. Tenzo himself didn't share the sentiment. He still wasn't convinced his team was ready, but Hokage's orders were Hokage's orders, and there was nothing he could do about them. He had prepared his team the best he could, and now he had to trust them to handle themselves. Hopefully they would survive in one piece. Exams were rumored to be extra tough. Hana was in her clan's compound trying to get her things in order with her little brother constantly getting underfoot. "Hey, sis, what is that for?" Kiba asked, holding the object in question in his hands. "Put it down," Hana shouted. "That's my stash of ointments. If you break it, I'm going to skin you alive." "Okay," the boy said, laying the box down carefully. Nothing happened, see? "I see," the older girl nodded. "That's your only luck. Next time don't even touch my things." "So you are going to be, sis?" he asked. "If we do well, then yes," she answered. "Is all your team going?" he wanted to know. "Of course," she nodded. "Only complete squads may participate." "So even that little one is going?" the young Inyazuka inquired. "Yes," his older sister confirmed. "That's not fair," he complained. "How come he's going to be when I'm still at the academy?" "That's because he is training and studying so much," she explained. "What about you, Kiba? Are you training and studying enough?" "Of course." He sounded offended. "Really?" She raised her eyebrow. "Really?" he nodded. "You know me, sis." "It's because I know you, little brother," she said with a stern face. "I've heard quite a different story from your academy instructor." "Aw, come on, sis," Kiba made a grimace. "Hiroka-sensei is just so boring. And you think life is full of excitement?" The younger Inyazuka's face betrayed that yes, that was indeed exactly what he thought. "That is not so. There is a lot of hard work. If you want, come to watch us in the finals and see how good you need to get." "Have I really said this?" Hana startled. "Now we'll have to get to the finals or I'll never hear the end of it." "Okay, sis, I'll come," he smiled. "I bet there would be no one as awesome as me." "Ah, you wish," smirked the older girl. "And could you now leave me alone? I'd like to finish packing sometime before midnight." Gates of Konoha. The teams leaving for Suna gathered near the village gates. 15 Konoha teams were trying their luck at the Chunin selection exams in the Hidden Sand village. Everybody was eyeing the competition, searching for familiar faces. "And who do we have here?" a mean voice sounded near them. Hana sighed and closed her eyes. That was one person she hoped to avoid, but it seemed she was out of luck. She slowly turned around. "And good day to you too, Takiko," she said. There she was standing, the sister of her deceased teammate, looking too much like Takita. Only the expression in her gray eyes was different. Instead of Takita's usual serious or amused expression, her stormy orbs held only anger and hatred. The Inyazuka couldn't really fault her. She was blaming herself for his death even now. "So you think you can make it now?" the newcomer asked, poison dripping from her voice. "And who did you find as your new team?" "A little squirt and a seduction specialist. They won't save your neck in your fight." "Who are you and why are you insulting Hana?" Naruto asked hotly. "None of your business, brat," Takiko replied. "I'm talking to the bitch." "Don't call my teammate a bitch," the blonde's eyes narrowed. "Or what?" she asked teasingly. "Are you going to hit me? Don't make me laugh." "I promise you won't be laughing when I'm through with you." "Naruto, that's enough," Hana snapped. "But she's insulting you," the boy protested. "I can defend myself," she reminded him. "Then why are you not?" he pointed out. "None of your business," she snapped. "Aren't teammates supposed to trust each other?" "You're the one to talk," she barked. The young recoiled as if struck. Sorry, Naruto, I didn't mean it, she apologized, but the damage was already done. You know, boy, Takiko rejoined the discussion. I pity you for having that poor excuse of a Kunoichi as your teammate. The blonde didn't answer. Here, you are, Takiko, a new voice sounded. It came from a young genin in a gray coat. What do you want, Noriaki, the girl in question asked in a not too friendly tone. The Boru-sensei wants the team together before we leave, he answered. I'm coming. She turned back to Team Tenzo. Don't think this is over, she said before disappearing in the crowd. Noriaki shot them a sympathetic glance and followed his teammate. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoy it. If you want the next part of this video, turn on that bell notification. Like, subscribe and comment down below. And also check out the others videos I have created and enjoyed it. See you guys next video.